Seo Hyun sums up his whole life in one unfair truth: he was born with a real superpower. As a little kid, he innocently tells his father to freeze time and think during an online janky game, not realizing other people cannot do that. Growing up, Seo Hyun finally understands the difference. Whenever he wills it, the whole world stops, but he cannot move inside that frozen time. Even with that limitation, the ability turns studying into a joke, because one normal second gives him endless time to think through problems and memorize everything. That trick keeps him at the top of his class for years, and by the time the CSAT arrives, he walks in with almost insulting ease. His parents fuss over him before the test, but Seo Hyun stays calm and heads in like it is just another easy day. After dinner, he grades himself, confirms a perfect score, and smugly jokes that Seoul National Med was too easy for him. He does not feel guilty about using his ability to win, because to Seo Hyun, life was never fair in the first place. Just as he is about to tell his family the good news, the entire house lurches in a violent quake. Then a floating message appears in front of his eyes and announces the tower's call, assigning him to nightmare difficulty. The messages lay out the stakes with brutal clarity: 4 difficulties, 100,000 climbers each, and if Nightmare's time limit expires, 99% of humanity dies. On November 13, 2025, the world changes overnight as a global earthquake hits and a giant black tower rises from the Pacific Ocean. People learn that chosen climbers can enter the tower from anywhere, and the first volunteers quickly discover that clearing a floor adds a full year to that difficulty's deadline. Governments rush to organize support, but Seo Hyun quietly hides that he is a climber and never reports himself. As the months pass, he watches the numbers update in front of his eyes: easy races upward, normal and hard inch forward, and Nightmare stays stuck on floor 1. He refuses to enter, because inside the tower you cannot leave until the floor is cleared, and every Nightmare challenger so far has simply died. Telling himself someone else will clear it in time, Seo Hyun enters medical school and keeps living a normal life, while the world slowly drifts toward collapse. But the Nightmare timer keeps falling from months to days, and still nobody clears floor 1. By the final week, the news is all panic, governments are desperate, and people online start raging at the hidden Nightmare climbers. Seo Hyun sees the fear in the streets too, where doomsayers shout that the end has really come. On the final day, the Nightmare timer drops to just a few hours, and Seo Hyun can only laugh bitterly at a floor 1 no one has ever beaten. He finally faces the number he has been avoiding. If this fails, roughly 8 billion people die and the world he knows is finished. He wants to keep hoping someone else will save everyone, but with his family's lives on the line, that excuse finally collapses. After a long, miserable silence, Seo Hyun opens his eyes and decides to enter the tower himself. He leaves behind a farewell letter and sets an alarm so his family will find it if he never comes back. When he steps into the living room, his mother, father, and younger sibling are all waiting under the giant countdown on the TV. He lies that he just wants fresh air, and his family, already understanding more than they say, lets him go without stopping him. Seo Hyun walks alone through empty streets, carrying the full weight of a goodbye he cannot say properly. In a back alley, the tower prompt appears again and asks whether he will enter Nightmare floor 1. Knowing he is probably walking to his death, Seo Hyun curses the tower and accepts anyway. The world flashes away, and Seo Hyun is thrown into Nightmare difficulty, floor 1. The moment he arrives, he freezes time and starts taking in every detail before anything can attack him. He finds himself in a bright cave with a straight corridor ahead and no enemies in sight yet, which matches the basic floor 1 reports he studied. Panic almost overwhelms him now that he is really inside, but he forces himself to stop spiraling and focus on surviving. He grabs the longsword resting on the stone block and feels a small flash of relief that Nightmare did not strip him of even that. As he waits facing the corridor, Seo Hyun remembers that he did prepare for this possibility in secret, even while swearing he would never enter. He had spent spare time studying every first-floor guide he could find, because he always believed life could still corner him one day. He also quietly trained in boxing and kendo for months, because climbers cannot bring in weapons and floor 1 is known to hand out a sword. Those months taught him that his time stop is not invincible, but with the right timing it can absolutely work in a real fight. Then the first enemies finally step out of the corridor, and Seo Hyun freezes time on instinct to inspect them safely. Nightmare opens with 3 goblins instead of the lower-tier patterns, 2 with swords and 1 with a spear. His resolve wobbles again, but with time frozen and no other way out, Seo Hyun builds a plan to split them apart and kill them one by one. He releases time, and the front goblin lunges first, giving him the opening he was hoping for. Seo Hyun uses rapid stop-start bursts he calls time slicing, slowing the attack into tiny readable pieces so his normal body can keep up. Reading a thrust in slow motion, he slips aside and drives his sword clean through the goblin's throat. The sword sticks for a scary second, and Seo Hyun has to think through the extraction before he can move again. He twists, kicks the corpse free, and runs before the other 2 can box him in. That first real kill proves his ability works here, and for the first time inside the tower, Seo Hyun feels a flicker of confidence. He curves left to widen the gap between the sword goblin and the spear goblin, setting up another isolated fight. The second sword goblin rushes in alone and raises its weapon for a simple overhead strike. Seo Hyun catches the timing with time slicing, knocks the blow offline, and stabs the second goblin through the throat too. The last goblin does not throw itself at him like the others, and its spear suddenly feels much more dangerous than either sword did. Instead of forcing a bad approach, Seo Hyun slows down and circles, waiting for the spear user to commit first. When the goblin refuses to bite, Seo Hyun deliberately mocks it, betting that anger will be easier to fight than patience. The taunt works, and the moment the spear goblin lunges, Seo Hyun freezes time and reads the thrust. He dodges inside the line, buries his blade in its neck, and kicks the body away to free his sword. With all three goblins down, Seo Hyun looks around for the clear message he expected. When nothing appears, he realizes the real nightmare test has not even started yet. He sits down to recover and checks the nightmare status, shocked that less than 5 minutes have passed despite how long the fight felt in frozen time. That tiny success lets hope flare up at last, and Seo Hyun starts believing he might actually survive this tower. Then another goblin cry echoes through the cave and rips that hope away immediately. A second wave pours out, and Seo Hyun freezes time again to inspect the new lineup. This time the threat is worse: 1 sword goblin, 1 shield and sword goblin, and 1 goblin carrying a bow. Staring at the bow goblin in frozen time, Seo Hyun realizes dodging an arrow on reaction is nothing like dodging a sword. He forces himself to accept it anyway, because this fight is simple: deal with 2 melee goblins and a sniper at once, or die here. The moment time resumes, the 2 melee goblins rush him, while the bow goblin calmly knocks an arrow behind them. Seo Hyun cuts diagonally across the room, trying to force the chargers into a line while keeping distance from the archer. When the bow goblin finally takes aim, he starts time slicing early and braces for the release. The arrow fires, and Seo Hyun instantly understands the real problem. It is far faster than he imagined. He twists with everything he has and barely saves himself, but the arrow still slices across his right forearm. Shaken, he admits this is not a skill issue at all. At that range, reading an arrow and dodging it is basically impossible. He drops the panic for a second and turns back to the threat in front of him just as the sword goblin lunges into his face. The sword goblin attacks as recklessly as before, and this time that gets it killed. In frozen time again, Seo Hyun checks the angles and sees one lucky break. The dying goblin's body can screen him from the archer. He sidesteps the shield goblin's thrust and uses the collapsing corpse to cut down the archer's angle for a precious moment. Now he can think, and the answer is ugly. That shield covers too much, so he will have to cripple the goblin from below. He kicks the dying goblin away, rips his sword free, and times the next thrust so he can catch the shield goblin's wrist. With the goblin trapped, Seo Hyun drives his blade straight down into the top of its foot. The goblin answers by smashing its shield into his forehead, and the two of them crash to the ground in a messy grapple. Flat on top of the goblin, Seo Hyun jerks his head up and sees another arrow skim past overhead by inches. Before the shield goblin can recover, he uses the fall to his advantage and stabs up through its lower jaw. Blood runs from Seo Hyun's split forehead into his eyes, so he grabs the fallen shield and turns it into his lifeline. In frozen time, he stares at the last goblin aiming again and feels his fear turn into hot, dangerous anger. He gets back on his feet with the shield high and realizes the fight has changed. Blocking arrows is finally possible, but the bow goblin has figured that out too, and instead of firing, it keeps its bow trained on him and waits. Seo Hyun circles with shield forward and sword loose, but the goblin only tracks him, too cautious to risk one bad shot. He tries insults and taunts to bait a shot, but the little bastard refuses to take it. Then the dungeon itself interrupts them. A huge stone gate starts dropping over the only corridor out. He freezes time and realizes the choice is brutal: stay in a room that is changing, or gamble on escaping before the gate seals. With no real answer, Seo Hyun trusts his gut and decides to break through the bow goblin before the corridor closes. He explodes forward with the shield covering his vitals and keeps just enough vision to read the goblin's shot. At around 10 meters, he catches the bow tilt downward for a leg shot and instantly drops the shield to meet it. The arrow slams into the shield instead, and Seo Hyun knows the fight is over. He reaches point-blank range and stabs the retreating bow goblin in the flank. There is no time to make sure of the kill, so he yanks the blade free and sprints through the corridor before the gate can crush the chance. The stone gate slams shut behind him, and for one breathless second Seo Hyun thinks he made it out alive. Looking at the shield, he sees just how close he came. The arrow landed near the rim, only a little off from his knee. Now that the rush fades, he finally studies the corridor ahead and notices something waiting at the top of the gentle slope. What first looked like a ball turns into a nightmare when he realizes it is a gigantic silver iron sphere. Then the iron sphere starts rolling straight at him. Seo Hyun stops time again and feels the trap click into place. Behind him is a sealed gate, ahead is certain death. Refusing to give up, he desperately scans the walls and spots a narrow indentation just big enough for one person. He drops both sword and shield and sprints straight toward the oncoming sphere, because the only safe spot lies between them. Screaming in raw terror, he reaches the alcove by a hair and wedges himself inside as the sphere fills his vision. The iron sphere roars past close enough to blast wind over him, and only after it crashes onward do his legs finally give out. After a long stunned pause, he steps back out and sees the sphere has smashed through the stone gate below. He goes back for his weapons and finds the room transformed into another death trap, the entire floor packed with iron arrows. That is when he understands the dungeon's cruelty. Escaping the chamber really was the right call, or he would have been turned into a pincushion. His shield is destroyed, so he salvages an intact sword and grabs a spear too before pushing onward again. Even worse, no clear message appears, so he can only rest, dread the next trap, and force himself to keep walking. The slope levels out into a flatter passage, where a long stone slab ahead is covered with weapons like a dungeon armory. Instead of feeling lucky, he gets more nervous. After everything so far, this kind of generosity only means something worse is waiting. He picks the sensible option, dropping the spear and old sword so he can take a fresh sword and shield set. Armed again, he advances into a widening passage that opens into a giant cavern glowing with ominous red light. At the center stands exactly what he feared, a lone armored figure that looks like a boss waiting in its room. Time stopped, Seo Hyun studies the monster and sees the worst part. It is a giant goblin in full plate armor, carrying a huge morningstar. He knows a sword cannot cut through plate, and the usual answer, wrestling for the gaps, sounds like suicide against something that big. So he settles on the only plan he has left: survive the attacks, find a gap, and counter into it. The second time resumes, the Goblin Knight proves how wrong his expectations were by exploding forward in a sudden lunge. The mace is already crashing down on his head, and Seo Hyun has no time to dodge, only to throw up the shield. One hit is enough to shatter the shield and hurl him backward across the cavern floor. When he scrambles up in frozen time, Seo Hyun immediately revises the rules again. This thing cannot be blocked at all. He throws the ruined shield aside and runs, because now the fight is simple in a different way. If he gets hit cleanly, he dies. He forces himself to turn and face it, then freezes time to read the next diagonal smash. He barely slips the swing, but the huge spiked head is so hard to read that even the wind of it lashes his face. Seeing no other target, Seo Hyun decides the visor slit is the only weakness that matters. He commits to the thrust, but the first attempt scrapes off the helmet with a useless clang. The miss nearly gets him killed. He has to backpedal through a storm of mace swings that keep grazing closer and closer. After several desperate dodges, he finally stabilizes just enough to bet everything on one more charge inside the weapon's arc. This time the angle is better, and Seo Hyun pours all his focus into one precise thrust at the slit. The blade finally slips through the visor and drives deep into the Goblin Knight's head. He lands the hit, but the dying monster still lashes out and smashes Seo Hyun away with a wild punch. When he stops tumbling, the pain catches up all at once, and he sees his right arm bent at a horrible angle. He forces himself to look up, and the Goblin Knight staggers with the sword still lodged in its helmet before finally collapsing. It looks dead, but with no clear message appearing, Seo Hyun limps over to make sure. He reaches for the sword in the helmet with his left hand, and that is when another hidden enemy springs the real ambush. On pure reflex he freezes time, and the bolt is already hanging inches from his abdomen. That frozen instant tells him the truth. At this distance, dodging is physically impossible. So Seo Hyun corners himself into one final gamble: take the bolt, reach the ambusher, and kill it before he dies. He talks himself into it, tries to imagine enduring the pain, and still nearly breaks under the thought alone. At last he releases time, and the bolt punches straight through his abdomen. The agony wipes his mind blank and drops him on the spot, so he stops time again just to escape the pain for one breath. In that numb stillness he almost gives up, then snaps at himself and decides that if he is dying, the ambusher dies with him. He releases time again and forces himself upright through blinding pain, grabbing the sword with his left hand. Ahead of him, the crossbow goblin is already trying to load another bolt, and that fresh danger is the only thing keeping Seo Hyun moving. He runs with the wound tearing at him, knowing if he hesitates even once, his body will fold for good. He closes the distance just before the goblin can finish, and the ambusher panics and tries to run instead. Seo Hyun spends the last of his strength on one ugly tackle, driving the sword into the goblin's back as they crash down together. Half delirious, he keeps stabbing and hacking until the goblin manages one last spiteful move and buries a dagger in his neck. With the goblin finally still, Seo Hyun's own consciousness starts slipping away, and all he wants is proof that this hell is finally over. At the edge of blackout, the answer finally appears: Seo Hyun has cleared nightmare difficulty, floor 1. More messages stack up after it. The status window and communication channel unlock, the floor's power is absorbed, and his level starts climbing again and again. The dungeon saves its last reveal for the end. Seo Hyun is the first person to clear this floor on Nightmare. The hidden route unlocks, and he is transferred to the reward room. At the White House Situation Room, the countdown to humanity's extinction hangs over the room while every top official stares at the screen in silence. When the president asks for an update, Director Ban admits the death toll is accelerating and fears the number of survivors could suddenly collapse as the time limit drops. The room understands the brutal truth: tens of thousands have died in Nightmare already, and even facing extinction, almost nobody can willingly walk into a challenge with no visible chance to live. They reflect on how the tower rewrote the world in a year, But even nations that prepared early found Nightmare so impossible that not one floor had been cleared. With the tower's promised curse nearing, the government has already agreed on a final act of defiance. If no one clears it before 30 minutes remain, the world's major powers will launch nuclear bombardment at the Pacific Tower. But everyone in the room already knows the strike is probably meaningless, because every test says the tower's barrier ignores normal physics and cannot be destroyed. Ben quietly says that if the timer falls to 1 hour, he will enter Nightmare himself, because after so many deaths he feels he owes humanity that much. The room answers his resolve with solemn gratitude, even though everyone knows one more climber barely changes the odds. Then everything changes in an instant when a system message appears announcing that every difficulty's first floor has been cleared. Ben checks Nightmare's status with disbelief and sees the impossible on the screen. Floor 2 unlocked, the time limit extended by a year, and the personnel count surging upward. Ben completely loses his composure and shouts that Nightmare Floor 1 has finally been cleared. The room explodes into raw relief as officials cheer, cry, and grab each other, because for the first time all day humanity is not about to die. Ben hugs his deputy director Samuel and laughs with relief, even as they realize the population increase means a new wave of climbers has just begun. Their celebration turns practical fast, because now the whole world has to identify the unknown hero who cleared Nightmare and deal with the flood of new climbers. Far inside the tower, Seohyun opens his eyes in confusion and realizes he is somehow alive after taking an arrow through the stomach and a fatal wound to the neck. He checks his body and the vanished wounds confirm something unbelievable. Clearing the floor restored him completely. When he pulls up Nightmare status, the new floor number and the extra year on the timer finally make it real. He actually saved the world. The relief hits him awkwardly and all at once, because after betting his life on a desperate gamble, he actually won. He also notices every difficulty gained 100,000 people and guesses this circular chamber must be the reward room climbers reach after a successful clear. Remembering the final messages, Seohyun calls up his new status window and sees the first real reward of clearing floor 1. Seeing level 10 on a first floor clear makes him realize Nightmare's rewards are wildly stronger than normal difficulties. Once he stands, the new strength rushing through his body feels so real that he has to test it. A casual jump sends him several meters into the air, and a few punches later he knows leveling up has changed his body completely. Then he turns to the actual loot and finds 2 stones on the ground, each glowing with a different color. The gold stone identifies itself as a supreme magic stone, a valuable tower resource that climbers can sell outside. The green teardrop stone turns out to be a rare skill stone for flame strike, which is far better than he expected from a first floor. He uses it immediately, and the stone dissolves into light as the new skill sinks into his body. The skill description reveals a concentrated fire blast that explodes on impact, but the cast time and willpower costs are steep enough to make him pause. Before testing anything, he suddenly remembers the outside world and realizes he should get home instead of wasting another minute in the tower. When the tower offers an exit, Seohyun accepts without hesitation. The next moment he is back in the same alley, alive, carrying his reward, and too drained to want anything except home and sleep. After sleeping from yesterday afternoon until dawn, Seohyun wakes to a world flooded with headlines about the Nightmare clear that saved humanity by the skin of its teeth. He feels refreshed and grateful to be alive, but the extra year on the clock also leaves him with a new fear. What if he has to face floor 2 next? Thinking back on the fight, he bluntly concludes that Nightmare is not built for humans to clear and that he survived only by luck and his strange ability. Then a more hopeful idea takes shape. If he shares what he learned about floor 1, other climbers might finally start clearing it too. If that happens, stronger people could push farther up Nightmare instead of leaving the burden on him, and maybe he could get his ordinary life back. To make that possible, he finally opens the communication channel he unlocked after clearing the floor. The system makes him choose a permanent nickname, and after barely resisting the urge to overthink it, he settles for Person 123. 4 difficulty channels appear, and the numbers beside them show just how few people have reached the communication channel compared with the total summoned. He learns that posting is locked to your own difficulty, but reading other channels is allowed, so he slips into the easy channel first to see how climbers talk. Inside, climbers from around the world are all obsessing over the same mystery: who cleared Nightmare, and why has no government claimed them yet? Their guesses land right on the truth when they wonder if the clearer is an unregistered climber hiding from the government. Seohyun weighs the benefits of registering, because official support could get him skills, items, and investment for future climbs. But the cost is obvious too. Once he reveals himself as the Nightmare Clearer, everyone will expect him to keep risking his life for humanity. He rejects that future on the spot and decides staying hidden is the only way to protect any chance at a normal life. A moment later, the other climbers notice the Nightmare channel count has risen to 1 and immediately realize the clearer must have logged in. Not wanting to get dragged into the frenzy, he closes the channel and steps out into the ordinary morning at home. When Seohyun leaves his room, his father is watching the news and his mother is in the kitchen making breakfast, and the ordinary home routine feels almost surreal after yesterday's near-apocalypse. His father asks the question Seohyun was dreading, and Seohyun lies smoothly that he was never summoned by the tower. His father immediately tells him never to enter that tower even if he is ever chosen, because no amount of money is worth a person's life. That reaction only hardens Seo Hyun's resolve to keep the truth from his family, because he can already imagine how much it would crush them. After breakfast, his father leaves for work and the younger sibling goes to school, while the country keeps moving like yesterday's near-apocalypse never happened. Back in his room, Seo Hyun opens the empty Nightmare channel where he is still the only user and prepares to post what he knows before leaving for class. He knows it feels twisted to hope others will go through what he survived, but he also knows he cannot carry Nightmare on his own if the world is going to keep living. So he organizes the brutal details in his head and starts writing the Nightmare Floor 1 strategy for whoever comes after him. Around the world, governments and markets are still reeling from the panic of almost being wiped out, but now everyone is scrambling to prepare for the single extra year the clear bought them. The US president publicly thanks the unknown hero and promises a stronger worldwide push to conquer Nightmare before the next deadline arrives. At the same time, intelligence teams everywhere grow desperate to identify the clearer, because the information from Nightmare Floor 1 could decide humanity's future. The fear behind that search is simple. If one nation or one hidden climber hoards the Nightmare information, everyone else could be left in the dark. Then around noon, the empty Nightmare channel finally updates, and the first post appears under the name Person 123. Its title says exactly what the whole world has been waiting for: information on clearing Nightmare Floor 1. After posting Nightmare 1F clear info as Person 123, Seo Hyun heads to school and leaves the strategy work to the experts. When he checks the communication channel again, the place is exploding with disbelief, fear, and shock over a boss monster on the first floor. Only then does Seo Hyun notice he has over 1,000 private whispers waiting for him. Most messages are just thanks and questions, but several are direct approaches from governments trying to open national-level talks with Person 123. Seo Hyun shuts the whole thing down and decides he wants no part in political talks after already giving everyone the information. Lying on his bed, he grimly reminds himself that even if others step up, someone still has to be ready for Nightmare 2F within a year. He decides he cannot leave his own preparation to chance, because he also wants to survive and stop the world from ending. That leads him to the one clue still bothering him. After clearing 1F, the tower said a hidden route had unlocked. He searches online for hidden routes and finds nothing, which makes the mystery feel tied to his first clear reward alone. With no other way to verify it, Seo Hyun decides he will re-enter Nightmare 1F and check the floor himself. He reassures himself that repeat clearing is safe enough, because cleared floors can be exited freely and he is far stronger now than on his first desperate run. A few quiet days later, lunch with friends takes a turn when Sankyeol suddenly announces that he became a climber too. When Seo Hyun asks what difficulty he got, Sankyeol says easy and admits he is seriously considering taking a leave from school to climb. His friends call him crazy, but Sankyeol pushes back with survival stats and the promise of money, military exemption, and benefits. The argument gets more personal when they remind him he worked too hard to become a doctor, but Sankyeol says 7 more years is a long time in a world this unstable. Seo Hyun warns him to be careful, and Sankyeol says he has already looked into training facilities and sword instruction. Even while everyone else calls Sankyeol reckless, Seo Hyun cannot dismiss the choice so easily anymore. Back home, Seo Hyun finds a new whisper from someone named Rhino, and this one feels different immediately. The sender introduces himself as Max from the US Bureau and asks for practical advice, not a political deal. When Max explains they are launching a large-scale project to train Nightmare challengers for humanity's survival, Seo Hyun finally sees the kind of effort he wanted. Because this is exactly the sort of serious preparation he hoped for, Seo Hyun chooses to reply. At US Bureau headquarters, Director Ban asks Max the brutal question: with perfect preparation, how viable is Nightmare 1F really? Max answers with a savage comparison. Like clearing a rifle-filled building alone with a handgun while a nuclear trigger is ticking, you do it only because you have no choice. When Ban still asks if it is really that bad, Max says yes, and admits he is starting to wonder whether the person who cleared it blind was even human. Max runs through the floor's nightmare sequence in his head: 6 goblins in 2 waves, a closing stone door, a rolling iron ball, a plated goblin knight, and a hidden crossbow ambush. To Max, the whole run is pure insanity because an ordinary first-floor climber starts with almost nothing and no way to heal. Even so, the government has committed to a nightmare training project, recruiting candidates nationwide and preparing to throw everything into that kill zone. Ben pushes again for more direct involvement from Person 123, but Max immediately warns him to stop pestering the one person who is actually answering. Max reflects that Person 123 ignored official pressure, but replied the moment the request was honestly about clearing advice. That pattern convinces Max that the anonymous clearer truly cares about humanity, and simply wants more nightmare clearers to exist. After Ban leaves, Max steadies himself with one small source of hope: a terrifyingly capable former comrade has already volunteered for the project. Thinking of the man nicknamed God of the Battlefield, Max decides he will pour everything into producing as many Nightmare 1F clearers as possible. On Saturday before dawn, Seo Hyun wakes early at home and chooses the quietest possible moment to enter the tower again. When the prompt appears asking if he wants to enter Nightmare 1F, Seo Hyun accepts and starts a repeat clear. Before the fighting begins, Seo Hyun thinks back on why Flame Strike looked amazing at first, and why almost every climber now calls magic-type skills trash. The problem, as top climber interviews made clear, is that magic skills hit hard but devour willpower and force the user to stand still through long mental concentration. Seo Hyun finally checks Flame Strike properly, and sees why everyone trashes magic skills. His rare spell needs 20 seconds to cast, and costs all 100 willpower in one shot. Still, because raw power is the one good thing about magic skills, he enters the familiar cave planning to test it on the Bao Goblin. As the first 3 goblins rush him, Seo Hyun realizes his body has grown so much stronger that he does not even need time slicing anymore. He proves it instantly by dodging the lead sword goblin and splitting its upper body clean in half with one swing. The other 2 freeze at the sight, and Seo Hyun almost laughs at how overwhelming the gap has become. Seo Hyun cuts down the second sword goblin just as easily, before it can put up any real fight. The last spear goblin breaks and runs, but Seo Hyun chases it down in an instant, and drives his sword through its neck. The whole first wave ends so fast that Seo Hyun barely feels like he fought at all. Now wanting to erase the Bao Goblin first, he begins casting Flame Strike before the second wave even appears. The moment casting starts, his body locks up completely, and he experiences mental concentration like an hourglass running inside his head. When the cast finishes, he gets a nasty surprise. He is still immobilized and cannot move until he actually fires the spell. That awful restriction makes the reputation of magic-type skills instantly make sense to him. The second wave finally steps out of the passage, and Seo Hyun is still stuck in place with Flame Strike primed for the Bao Goblin. Seo Hyun fires Flame Strike the instant they step out, sending a blazing projectile screaming into the group. The explosion is so violent that all 3 goblins are simply erased into blackened scraps and a cratered floor. The sheer power impresses him, but even now Seo Hyun still sees Flame Strike as brutally impractical in a real fight. As the stone gate starts closing, Seo Hyun sprints into the passage and slips into the wall groove before the giant iron ball can crush him. After the trap passes, he checks his status and finds that a single cast has gutted his willpower to almost nothing. Wanting to test Flame Strike on the boss too, Seo Hyun stays in the corridor for the full 100-minute recharge before moving on. He passes the unattended weapon shop without stopping and heads straight into the red-lit boss room. The Goblin Knight appears in the center of the cavern, and Seo Hyun starts casting Flame Strike on sight. The boss rushes him too quickly for a normal cast, so Seo Hyun reflexively stops time. Inside frozen time, Seo Hyun notices something impossible. Mental concentration keeps progressing anyway. He realizes the cast may be tied to mental time rather than the world's time, and that possibility hits him hard. The instant he releases time, Seo Hyun fires Flame Strike straight into the Goblin Knight. One blast is enough to launch the boss across the room and leave it dead in shattered armor and flesh. That raw power is impressive, but Seo Hyun's real focus shifts to the stranger rule he just uncovered about mental concentration. Following the logic further, he wonders if willpower recovery might also count as something happening inside his mind while time is stopped. He tests the theory by stopping time again with his willpower at 0 and simply waiting inside the frozen world. A moment later, the number climbs from 0 to 1 even though time is still frozen, proving willpower regenerates there too. In that instant, Seo Hyun realizes he has found a broken cheat that only he can use. With time frozen, Seo Hyun realizes magic-type skills are ridiculous for him because mental concentration still works and his willpower keeps recovering. He even tests the limit by waiting 100 frozen minutes, then confirms the only thing time stop does not cheat his skill cooldown. That is still more than enough for him to grin at the broken synergy, because instant casting plus endless recovery turns Flame Strike into a repeatable nuke. When no clear message appears after the Goblin Knight dies, Seo Hyun realizes the hidden route is not over yet. A system prompt tells him he can leave anytime, so he decides to search the boss room more carefully first. Then a small boulder shifts, and Seo Hyun finally spots the hidden passage where the crossbow goblin came from. The crossbow goblin scrambles out and tries to aim, but Seo Hyun instantly stops time to set up another free kill. He releases time and blows the crossbow goblin apart with a point-blank Flame Strike. Seeing the slope beyond the hole, Seo Hyun decides this rabbit hole tunnel has to be the real hidden path. He squeezes inside on hands and knees, unnerved by the cramped darkness but trusting that he can still emergency exit if things go bad. The tunnel opens into a bright hidden cavern, and Seo Hyun freezes when he sees a hooded figure sitting silently in the center. Up close, the figure is not a goblin at all but a rotting old mage with a melting face, and the sight alone makes Seo Hyun recoil. Seo Hyun cautiously calls out, but the old mage opens his eyes, questions him, and makes it obvious this intruder is about to become a test subject. The moment the mage makes his hostility obvious, Seo Hyun backs off and starts casting first. Seo Hyun lands a direct Flame Strike on the old mage, but when the smoke clears a translucent barrier has absorbed everything. Malphitous sounds startled that Seo Hyun is a mage too, then immediately screams for his goblins to kill him. Dozens of goblins pour out of the wall tunnels at once, turning the hidden cavern into an instant swarm. Seo Hyun checks that Flame Strike is nearly ready, stops time again, and refuses to take a reckless fight against that many blades. After another long frozen wait to refill willpower, he aims at the thickest cluster and prepares to erase most of the room in one shot. The blast tears through the horde and leaves the cavern full of gore, smoke, and screaming stragglers. Seo Hyun rushes the survivors with his sword and cuts them down one by one before they can regroup. When the room quiets down, Malphidus is still sitting inside his barrier with his eyes closed like nothing happened. Seo Hyun hesitates over the barrier, and that pause is exactly what the old mage was waiting for. Malphidus snaps his eyes open and floods the cavern with dark power, turning the ground into a black swamp under Seo Hyun's feet. The mage mocks him for letting a spell finish, while tentacle-like shadows rise from the mire and trap Seo Hyun in place. Seeing death coming fast, Seo Hyun abandons the fight and spams the emergency exit in his head. He is yanked back to his bedroom gasping, alive but hit with a brutal warning that the hidden route only allows 3 failures total. Shaken but stubborn, Seo Hyun identifies the old man as the hidden boss and starts searching for some way around that impossible barrier. He spends the whole night thinking, and by breakfast the problem is still stuck in his head. His mother scolds his little sister for picking out carrots, and the ordinary family chatter accidentally gives Seo Hyun room to think. Then the mage's taunt clicks for him. Malphidus must have been completing his barrier spell the whole time he sat there with his eyes closed. Once he understands that, the answer is simple and vicious: hit the mage before he finishes casting anything at all. After waiting until the house is empty, Seo Hyun heads back into the tower for a second hidden route attempt. He tears through floor 1 again and rushes straight down the underground tunnel as fast as possible. Malphidus is still sitting there with his eyes closed, and this time Seo Hyun attacks the instant he sees him. The fireball lands before any barrier can go up, and the hidden boss is reduced to charred ash in one clean ambush. The hidden route clear message finally appears, and Seo Hyun can only laugh at how stupidly simple the solution was once he saw it. The tower floods him with power, pushes him up to level 15, and moves him into the hidden reward room for floor 2. Among the rewards, the first thing he grabs is an old grimoire called Malphidus's spellbook. The spellbook shocks him by offering not one skill but a choice of 5 rare plus magic spells. He reads Lower Mind Control first, and suspects it was the spell Malphidus used to command the goblins. Teleportation catches his eye next, because for anyone else it is laughably slow, but for him it could become instant combat movement. Corrupted Flame tempts him as an endless flamethrower-style attack, especially since he barely cares about draining willpower. Shadow Swamp also looks strong because he has already seen how nasty it is, even if the cooldown is heavy. He quickly cuts Lower Mind Control and Life Drain from the list because both feel too vague or too situational to trust. What finally decides it is floor 2 itself, because he remembers the next floor is a rising lava jump map where instant repositioning could save his life. He chooses teleportation, and the book vanishes once the skill is absorbed. He tests the new skill right away and is impressed when his body really blinks across the room in a single jump. The next reward is a rare skill enhancement stone, and Seo Hyun decides there is no point hoarding it when floor 2 is waiting. He uses the stone on Flame Strike, upgrading it into a +1 version that now fires 2 explosive projectiles instead of 1. Teleportation drains him dry, so he skips field testing the upgraded Flame Strike for now. The last reward is a Supreme Magic Stone, valuable to normal climbers but basically dead weight to an unregistered illegal one like him. Looking over everything he gained from floor 1 alone, Seo Hyun grows uneasy because rewards this generous usually mean the next floor is going to be awful. His brave self-sacrifice routine collapses immediately, and he openly wishes someone else would just clear floor 2 for him. He exits the tower at last with a much simpler priority in mind: leftover braised short ribs and rice. Over the next 3 months, Seo Hyun keeps running Nightmare Floor 1 repeat clears just to stay sharp for what comes next. The hidden mage never returns in repeat runs, confirming that the secret route was a one-time clear. He also keeps helping people through the communication channel, trading detailed Nightmare Floor 1 advice with Rhino and anyone serious enough to ask. He ignores anything outside Floor 1 strategy, because all he really wants is for somebody else to prove the impossible can be done too. Then one day the communication channel's nightmare count jumps from 1 to 2, and after 3 long months Seo Hyun finally sees proof that another clearer exists. Rumors about the first nightmare clearer spread everywhere, but one thing became clear: Person 123 was an unregistered climber who refused to reveal their identity. People even tried to guess the clearer's country by dissecting tiny traces in translated posts, yet nobody could prove where Person 123 came from. For 92 days, all anyone could do was stare at Nightmare 1 and wonder who would dare challenge the next floor. Then the count suddenly jumped to Nightmare 2, and the whole community exploded because a second person had finally survived Nightmare 1F. The second clearer was linked to America, and that breakthrough opened the floodgates as more Nightmare survivors started appearing one after another. With only a month left, Nightmare 6 looked less like progress and more like a brutal reminder that almost everyone who tried had died. The tower's overall difficulty board kept updating, and Nightmare now showed highest floor reached, 2F, meaning someone had finally gone in. Back in the tower, Seo Hyun treated the Goblin Knight like practice, dodging its Morning Star and smashing its armored torso with his bare fist. He stopped bothering to counter and just let the boss wear itself out, because at level 15 he had already outgrown this fight. When Seo Hyun decided to end it, his enhanced flame strike split into 2 fireballs and erased both the Goblin Knight and the ambushing crossbow goblin at once. The floor clear sent him back to the reward room, where repeat runs had piled supreme magic stones all over the place. He chose to exit the tower and return to his room, only to get the scare of his life when the door burst open immediately. His younger sibling had come home early from school with a headache, and Seo Hyun snapped at them for barging in without knocking. The sibling immediately got suspicious over the shoes in his room, but only wanted him to order chicken for lunch, which made Seo Hyun even more annoyed. After the sibling left, Seo Hyun was reminded why he only entered the tower when nobody could catch him disappearing. Later, Seo Hyun ate chicken in the living room while the news grimly reported that 6 people had cleared Nightmare 1F and the deadline had fallen under 30 days. Once the room was quiet again, Seo Hyun couldn't stop thinking about the real problem now hanging over everyone, Nightmare 2F. He had trained for this for a year with repeat clears, flame strike, teleportation, and floor research, but a new floor still scared him just as much as ever. What really ate at him was the ugly truth that he still hoped someone else would go first and survive. When he opened the Nightmare communication channel, the silent room was no longer silent. A user named Jackal claimed to be the second clearer, announced he would challenge 2F soon, and openly bragged that he could have taken the first clear too. The tone was provocative, but Seo Hyun barely cared because this was exactly the volunteer he had been hoping for. Instead of arguing back, he sent a short reply as Person 123, wishing you success. Behind that polite answer was a very honest plea from Seo Hyun. Please clear it, because I don't want to go either. The rare exchange between Jackal and Person 123 instantly became a spectacle, because everyone knew the Nightmare channel was usually dead silent. But after all that build-up, Person 123's calm one-line encouragement killed the drama just as fast as it started. At a specialized US facility built for Nightmare 2F, Max inspected brutal jumping courses made of towering pillars and hovering drones. Jack and Taylor moved through the course overhead, training on platforms far harsher than anything used for hard mode. When Jack came down, Max asked about his condition, and Jack answered with the same confidence he showed online. He felt ready to enter 2F right now. Max brought up Jack's post and warned there was no reason to needle the person whose 1F intel had helped them so much. Taylor stepped in and bluntly called Person 123 a benefactor, making it clear she thought Jack's stunt was petty and reckless. Jack brushed them off, insisting competition drives people forward and saying Person 123 clearly was not offended anyway. In Jack's mind, that post was almost a greeting, because he wanted to prove the legendary first clearer was not beyond him. Max finally gave him the news he came to deliver. Jack would get the date he wanted for the 2F attempt. Even when Max hinted he could wait longer, Jack refused, saying preparation was already finished and the only way to know was to go in. Jack framed it as a national mission too, promising he would put America at the front of the Nightmare race by clearing 2F first. On the day of the attempt, the tower's Nightmare display showed floor 2 with just over 22 days left, turning the moment into a live countdown. Inside a closed door gathering at Bureau headquarters, Jack made his final checks while officials stood around him in heavy silence. His status window showed how much America had poured into him, stacking mobility and survival skills far beyond what a normal 1F clearer would carry. After a final salute and a wish for Godspeed, Jack accepted the prompt to enter Nightmare 2F. A moment later, Jack vanished from the room, leaving everyone behind in a silence that felt worse than noise. Barely a minute passed before Taylor, checking the channel, went pale because something had already gone horribly wrong. Max checked for himself and saw the Nightmare answer in one brutal number. The count had dropped from 6 to 5, meaning Jack was already dead. Seo Hyun wakes up to grim news that the American who cleared Nightmare Floor 1 after him has already died on Floor 2. He checks the communication channel, sees one Nightmare clearer gone, and the death feels both disappointing and weirdly personal. That loss hits harder because Seo Hyun already knows his time stop setup gives him the best shot at clearing Floor 2, and he has still been hesitating. He bitterly curses the absurd world they live in, where a tower can threaten humanity into climbing or dying. After stewing in it, he finally decides he cannot just sit back and watch the other Nightmare clearers die one by one. Once he commits, his nerves calm down, and he starts leaning toward entering soon instead of dragging it out. He settles on a rough plan to challenge the floor the very next morning. He goes out for a walk to clear his head, but a fresh whisper message catches him before he can settle down. The sender, Chicken Sandwich, is once again begging him to take a skill stone called Leap because it might help on Floor 2. Seo Hyun recognizes the sender immediately, the world-famous billionaire Bylan Must, who already made a public spectacle of begging for a reply. Normally Seo Hyun would ignore him, but now that he has decided to enter Floor 2, the offer suddenly feels hard to dismiss. Leap catches his attention because Floor 2 is a jump map, so a jumping skill could make a real difference. He still worries that replying could expose his identity, and once that is gone, he can never take it back. But if he dies in the tower after refusing useful help, he knows he might regret that choice in his last moments. After a long, uneasy walk, Seo Hyun finally leans toward accepting because Bylan seems genuinely desperate to keep humanity alive. The story shifts to Bylan Must, a man whose real dream was sending humanity to Mars before the tower forced the whole world into survival mode. He threw his money into climber infrastructure and the magic stone industry because none of that future matters if humanity dies first. Now Jack Davis has failed Floor 2 almost instantly, and Bylan is furious that all that support bought humanity nothing. The truth is, Jack was only plan B. Bylan always believed the first Nightmare Clearer was the one person truly different from everyone else. Even though the US still has Taylor left, Bylan has already pinned his last real hope on the mysterious first clearer instead. Then Bylan's office erupts when his secretary announces that person 123 has finally replied and accepted the offer. The destination turns out to be Korea, and Bylan immediately starts moving as if even the North Pole would not have stopped him. To hide the real purpose of the trip, Bylan uses a business meeting as cover and quietly clears his schedule. Person 123 unexpectedly asks to receive the stone in person, so Bylan goes with only Ellen and leaves his security team behind. Ellen is tense because the man they are meeting is supposedly level 10, far beyond anything he could handle if this goes bad. A message confirms the black car by the utility pole, and moments later a masked young man knocks on the window. Seo Hyun climbs into the back seat, and Bylan greets him with a handshake, realizing at once that humanity's hidden savior is shockingly young. When Seo Hyun answers in fluent English, Bylan is even more taken aback by how ordinary and young he sounds. Bylan does not waste time and immediately hands over the leap skill stone he has been saving for this exact person. Seo Hyun accepts the stone and asks to use it on the spot, making sure it is real before he leaves. The stone bursts into light and disappears, and Seo Hyun confirms that leap has been added to his status. Bylan finally asks the question he has been dying to ask: when will Seo Hyun challenge Floor 2? Seo Hyun casually says he was planning to go in tomorrow, then corrects himself and says he will practice leap first and enter soon. Hearing that, Bylan lays his desperation bare and begs him to clear Floor 2 because he truly sees Seo Hyun as humanity's hope. Seo Hyun gives the only honest answer he has: he will do his best, because he does not want to die either. After Seo Hyun disappears into the alley, Bylan sits stunned by how young and ordinary the world's best chance at survival looked in person. On the drive away, Bylan and Ellen quietly dwell on how little that young man matched the image they had built in their heads. Bylan can only pray now, because if even this young man fails, the world will learn very soon what that means. On the way home, Seo Hyun is rattled by the fact that he actually met Bylan Must face to face, and may have exposed himself to someone dangerously powerful. He wonders if Bylan will investigate him, but in the end he forces himself to accept that the decision is already made. Bylan's plea still lingers in his head, but Seo Hyun decides there is no point overthinking a billionaire's motives now. Instead, he checks the new skill and sees leap is cheap, simple, and far easier to use than his magic skills. He jumps straight into Nightmare Floor 1 to test it instead of waiting around and guessing. The very first full power test launches him almost 20 meters up, nearly slamming his head into the ceiling. The landing jars his legs, but the huge boost tells him leap is far better than he expected from a normal grade skill. He keeps testing standing jumps and running leaps while casually cutting down the goblins that wander into his practice space. After a few runs, Seo Hyun decides the skill is manageable and worth a few days of practice before attempting Floor 2. Meanwhile, the communication channel explodes with chatter about Jackal's earlier arrogance and his sudden death on Floor 2. As the time limit shrinks again, the whole atmosphere starts to rot into the same fear the world felt last year. At the US Tower Climbing Management Bureau, Jack's failure leaves the whole place feeling like a funeral. Max tells Taylor the higher-ups want to delay her attempt, hoping to see what the other remaining Nightmare Clearers do first. Taylor sees right through it. Every country is waiting for someone else to go first, even with extinction only 20 days away. She says Jack may have been reckless, but at least he was moving in the right direction instead of hiding behind caution. So Taylor decides she will go in on schedule even without authorization, because someone has to step forward. Max can barely meet her eyes, because he helped direct the Bureau's resources toward Jack instead of her. Taylor does not blame him, because putting everything on the candidate who looks stronger was the obvious call at the time. Left with her thoughts, Taylor remembers why she chose Nightmare at all. After a brutal CIA career, this felt like one way to protect people without more meaningless killing. Even with fear shaking through her, she clenches her fists and chooses to see this through to the end. After several days of practice, Seo Hyun finally feels fully comfortable using leap. With the last excuse gone, he starts making real preparations to enter Nightmare Floor 2. He writes a will for his family and hides it in his desk drawer, praying it never has to be found. At dinner, his mother notices something is off and gently asks whether anything has been going on with him lately. Seo Hyun brushes it off, but his father's answer makes it worse by confidently saying someone else will surely clear it this time too. His father even repeats fake news that the mysterious first clearer is being backed by Russia, not knowing he is talking to that person. Seo Hyun plays along, smiles, and retreats to his room with even more pressure sitting on his chest. At his desk, he tries to steady himself, but this time the fear hits harder because he actually has something to lose now. For a moment he wavers and wonders if he can just wait for someone else to clear it, but he forcefully shuts that thought down. He waits until after midnight, confirms the house is asleep, and quietly prepares to leave from the center of his room. The entry prompt for Nightmare Floor 2 appears, and this time Seo Hyun answers it without backing away. Before he moves, Seo Hyun recalls the warnings. Floor 2 has no monsters at first, just tiny platforms over rising lava, and one bad landing means death. He enters Nightmare Floor 2, stops time instantly, and surveys a brutal enclosed course of tiny black platforms floating over an ocean of molten lava. The gaps look just under 10 meters and the platforms are barely bigger than breaking boards, so Seo Hyun realizes the jump distance is possible but the landings are the real nightmare. Teleportation could carry him safely, but a bad feeling tells him not to burn his best skill too early, so he decides to save it as an emergency lifeline. He releases time, braces against the furnace-like heat, and makes his first jump for real. He lands a little shaky but stays upright, and the grip from the approach shoes gives him his first burst of confidence. Trying to stay positive, he jumps again and instantly feels he used too much force. Before he drops, Seo Hyun freezes time in midair and uses mental concentration to line up a desperate rescue. He teleports to the third platform by the skin of his teeth and realizes his emergency move just saved him from dying stupidly. The skill cost is brutal, so he sees his willpower nearly emptied and decides to stop time and wait for both his willpower and teleportation cooldown to recover. Once he moves again, his next jump seems clean until the platform turns translucent under his feet and drops him straight through. He freezes time again while falling and realizes Nightmare added fake platforms that are basically instant kill traps if you do not know they exist. He teleports to the fifth platform, looks back at the vanished trap and the shifted route, and knows starting with blind teleportation would have gotten him killed. With time still stopped, he studies the remaining course, notices the starting platform already swallowed by lava, and assumes the big floor ahead is only a midpoint, not the finish. Because another illusion could kill him on contact, Seo Hyun decides he only needs one safe landing before trying to skip the last stretch with leap and teleportation together. He waits for teleportation to come back, commits to the plan, and barely sticks the next landing on a real platform. Now he goes for the full gamble, activating leap and launching himself past the remaining platforms toward the large floor. He comes up just short, freezes time in midair, and finishes the jump with teleportation for a perfect save. The large floor is not the end at all, and above it he finds a second section with rows of 3 platforms where one platform in each row glows blue. When the blue light starts fading almost immediately, he stops time and realizes the test is supposed to make him memorize the safe route in seconds. Since time stop makes memorization trivial for him, he calmly studies all 10 rows, restores his willpower, and prepares to cross. He steps onto the first platform he thought was marked safe, and it collapses immediately, exposing the nastiest fake out yet. He freezes time again and figures out the twist. The glowing platforms were the traps, so the safe path is the one that never lit up. After teleporting to a non-glowing platform, he takes the rest carefully, and reaches the next large floor without further trouble. A massive gate waits at the end, and Seo Hyun approaches it hoping this nightmare course is finally over. The floor suddenly bucks him sideways into empty air, but by now he reacts on instinct and freezes time before the trap can finish him. He teleports back onto the floor, curses the stage under his breath, and has to recover himself all over again before daring to move. At the gate itself, pushing and pulling does nothing, so he starts testing the only answer left, brute force. His punch splinters the wood, but it also triggers a terrifying surge as the lava below starts rushing upward far faster than before. He hammers the gate desperately, realizes he will be burned alive before it falls, and switches to Flame Strike as a last-second answer. Flame Strike blows the gate apart, and Seo Hyun dives through the opening just as lava floods over the floor behind him. On the other side he finds only a staircase, and with lava still pouring after him, he has no choice but to sprint upward. As he runs, the stairway spirals around the inside of a gigantic tower, but the climb keeps going far longer than it should. When exhaustion forces him to slow down, the lava somehow closes the distance behind him immediately, and Seo Hyun realizes the whole staircase is behaving wrong. To test it, he punches a wall beside a window, and one loop later he sees the same broken mark again and confirms he has been trapped in a repeating staircase. He stops time to think, but with lava behind him, sealed walls above, and no hidden path anywhere, Seo Hyun can find no obvious way out. He tests whether this is some kind of hallucination by slapping himself and forcing reality checks while running, but the loop never changes. Back in stop time, real panic starts creeping in because if he cannot break the loop, he will eventually collapse and burn to death. Then he notices the window differently and latches onto one ugly but possible answer. Maybe the escape route is outside the tower, not up the stairs. He releases time, scrambles onto the windowsill, and forces his body out just before the lava surges through the opening. He jumps, catches the outer wall above the window, and hangs there while lava vomits out behind him in a blazing red waterfall. Seeing the eerie forest and Dracula-like tower outside, Seo Hyun understands the staircase trap is broken and starts climbing the outer wall instead. The climb is physically manageable with his current strength, but he still braces for one more nasty surprise when he reaches the top. He pulls himself over the parapet onto a huge rooftop, and spots a central structure with another massive gate waiting in the distance. Weapons scattered across the ground tell him immediately that this part is not another puzzle but a boss fight. Before he even touches the doors, a heavy vibration races closer from inside, and Seo Hyun backs away on instinct. The doors explode outward and a bull-headed giant bursts through, revealing the Floor 2 boss at last. Seo Hyun answers the charge immediately with enhanced flame strike, blasting the Minotaur head-on. The explosion tears open the Minotaur's body and leaves it burning, but the monster is still alive and furious enough to keep charging. Once the first hit scrambles it, Seo Hyun stops treating it like a duel and just sidesteps the beast's drunken straight-line rushes until flame strike comes off cooldown. When the timing is right, he leaps into the air, freezes time mid-combat, and lines up one last flame strike from above. The second blast blows the Minotaur apart, and this time it finally stays down. Even after the boss dies, no clear message appears, so Seo Hyun refuses to relax and restores himself while waiting for the real last trap. His paranoia is right, because a violent tremor rips through the rooftop and the entire floor starts collapsing into the lava-filled tower below. He barely saves himself with leap, but momentum carries him out over the void and he starts falling anyway. Mid-fall over the lava, he freezes time one more time and spots the outer wall just barely within teleportation range. He teleports to the wall, clings to the stone, and scrambles back up before the heat below can finish what the floor collapse started. From the intact parapet, he looks down into the tower's lava-filled interior and sees even the Minotaur's corpse sinking and burning away. At last the system confirms it. Seo Hyun has successfully cleared Nightmare Floor 2. Relief crashes into him all at once, and with terror and exhilaration still mixed together, he laughs at the nightmare that threw everything at him and still failed to kill him. He remembers that clearing this floor bought the world another year, and he even thinks gratefully of Bylan Must because the leap's skill made several saves possible. The reward messages roll in one after another. His level rises repeatedly. He is the first person to clear Nightmare Floor 2, and a hidden route on Floor 2 has now been unlocked. With the hidden route unlocked and his first clear reward secured, Seo Hyun is transferred away to the reward room. Seo Hyun lands in the reward room and immediately gets hit with a brutal new system rule. Any chosen climber who never enters the tower within 3 years will die. He realizes the tower is still changing the rules as humanity climbs higher, and that means even people who kept avoiding Floor 1 are now marked for death. When he checks his status, the payoff is huge: Nightmare Floor 3, level 25, and a massive jump to 450 willpower. He tests his stronger body with a jump so explosive it cracks the floor, and the force even shreds the soles of his shoes. Looking at the ruined shoes, Seo Hyun is struck again by how far from normal human strength he is becoming. Then he turns to the rest of his rewards and spots 2 glowing stones waiting for him, a skill stone and a rare enhancement stone. The new skill turns out to be Exaltation, a rare passive that boosts his physical abilities the longer he keeps moving. He clicks his tongue at getting another physical skill instead of magic, but a free always-on passive is still too good to ignore. Seo Hyun uses the stone on the spot and learns Exaltation immediately. To test it properly, he starts running laps around the reward room without stopping so the passive can stack up. As he keeps moving, he feels the effect kick in hard. His blood races, his senses sharpen, and his body gets noticeably faster. Once the boost levels off, he judges Exaltation as roughly a 20 to 30% stat increase, which is strong enough to feel like several free levels. That leaves the rare enhancement stone, and this time he has a real choice between boosting Flame Strike again or upgrading Exaltation. He leans toward Flame Strike because magic keeps giving him the best return, but decides not to spend the stone in a rush. With the system asking if he wants to leave, Seo Hyun chooses rest and exits the tower for the night. Elsewhere, on the Jude Noise, commentator Arlo opens a podcast segment on Nightmare Floor 2 by flatly declaring that humanity is finished. Jude pushes back that 5 nightmare climbers are still left, but Arlo answers with the ugly numbers. Nightmare survival odds are so low that hoping for one clear is almost absurd. Arlo drives the point harder by comparing it to lightning strikes, saying one nightmare clear would be even less likely than finding a struck victim among random people. When Jude argues that the remaining nightmare climbers are elite survivors, Arlo shuts that hope down too, saying every floor gets deadlier faster than climbers improve. He points to America's failed Floor 2 attempt as proof that even pouring every possible resource into one challenger still was not enough. Arlo says people should stop waiting for miracles, accept the end, and spend their last weeks in peace instead of clinging to hope. Jude calls him a doomist, and the conversation briefly widens to the chaos outside: crimes, cults, and social panic spreading as people give up on the future. Arlo says he is not calling for chaos at all. He has sold his assets, chosen family and travel, and plans to enjoy what time is left. Then the room suddenly stirs, and a staff member rushes in with breaking news that Nightmare Floor 2 has just been cleared. Both men freeze in disbelief, and after a beat Arlo awkwardly admits that miracles, apparently, do happen. As the announcement spreads, the world explodes with relief and questions, especially over who cleared it and what the new death rule really means. In his office, Bylan Must reacts very differently. He throws a triumphant fist in the air because he already suspects exactly who saved the world again. Ellen reports that person 123 answered right away and confirmed it was him, even thanking Bylan for arranging the leap skill. That one reply hits Bylan hard because the man he bet on has now cleared Nightmare twice and turned from a gamble into humanity's only real hope. Bylan immediately decides to go all in and gather every useful skill stone, enhancement stone, an item he can to keep feeding Seo Hyen's growth. When Ellen brings up the new rule, Bylan brushes off the danger to himself but notes that the climbing bureau is about to be swamped by panicked new entrants. By the end of the meeting, Bylan is no longer just helping from the side. He is actively planning how to bind himself closer to person 123 as his patron. The next day, Seo Hyen finally wakes around lunchtime and joins his family in the living room just as the news reports his secret floor to clear. His father smugly says someone was bound to clear it if the world depended on it, then quickly loses momentum when mom gives him a look. Seo Hyen watches his sibling blankly devour all the ham and realizes this dread of yearly extinction may be becoming everyday life for everyone. The TV follows up with the real sting of the update, explaining that the 3-year death rule applies retroactively to earlier waves of climbers too. Seo Hyen grimly translates what that means. Anyone chosen but still avoiding the tower now effectively has to beat floor 1 before the deadline or die. He is especially chilled by what it means for Nightmare picks, who are basically trapped in a death sentence from the start. He still asks his family if any of them were selected as climbers, and the answer is an easy no across the board. The odds are so tiny that Seo Hyen can only think how ridiculous it is that he was chosen at all, even if the world owes its survival to that freak chance. Later in his room, he opens the communication channel to post floor 2 information, but stops because too many trap details are still uncertain. Rather than risk misleading other climbers, he decides to verify the illusion platform and hidden trap positions through repeat clears first. That choice ties neatly into his next goal anyway, because every return to floor 2 is also another chance to crack its hidden route. That night he heads straight back into Nightmare floor 2, stepping once again into the lava heat with a much stronger body and better tools than before. Instead of taking the old careful route, he decides to skip the illusion platform entirely by jumping straight toward the 5th platform and patching the gap with teleportation. One powerful leap and one clean blink later, he lands on the 5th platform and cuts out more than half the stage in a single move. After waiting out cooldowns, he repeats the trick and reaches the big midpoint platform in just 2 jumps. The glowing platform is still in the same place as last time, which confirms at least that part of the floor is fixed. He advances slowly through the passage and deliberately triggers the hidden floor trap to pin down its exact location. The floor suddenly shoots upward right where he expected, and Seo Hyen instantly teleports back with the trap location finally confirmed. With his bigger willpower pool, he can afford the test and simply waits for it to refill before opening the route properly. Once ready, he blasts the door with Flame Strike, sending the lava into a frenzy and opening the staircase just like before. He races up the stairs thinking floor 2 might be manageable for others with enough information, then immediately doubts that optimism. After climbing out through the window and onto the outer wall again, he heads for the boss without even bothering to pick up a weapon first. When the Minotaur bursts out charging, Seo Hyen does not cast a spell this time because he already knows he can beat it barehanded now. He sidesteps the first rush and drives a straight punch into the monster hard enough to shatter bone on impact. From there the fight turns one-sided, with Seo Hyen's speed making the Minotaur's clumsy attacks almost impossible to land. As exaltation builds on top of that, his punches keep piling up until the Minotaur is reduced to staggering wreckage. He finishes it by leaping up and crushing its skull, dropping the boss in a heap. After a quick check to make sure it is dead, he grabs a fallen sword and bolts for the railing before the arena starts collapsing. Perched on the railing above the destruction, he lets exaltation cool off and tells himself the real work is only starting now. Since the whole tower has become a lava trap, Seo Hyen decides the hidden route has to be somewhere below, and jumps off the tower into the darkness. Just before the ground would have splattered him, he stops time and teleports, bleeding off the fall into a clean landing. At ground level he finds only forest under a pale blue moon, and the quiet immediately feels wrong enough to keep him on edge. He circles the tower, and soon finds a massive gate, where lava has pooled and writhed around the entrance in a half-molten mess. A single path leads from that gate straight into the forest, and even though it looks like a monster's mouth, it is the only way forward. He enters carefully, moving through the moonlit woods with his guard up and his hand ready to exit the tower the instant anything goes wrong. A tiny sound behind him breaks the silence, and when Seo Hyen whips around he finds a blade already inches from his throat. He stops time a split second before dying and finally gets a clear look at the attacker, a horned, pale-skinned demon woman with slit pupils. With no room to dodge, Seo Hyen uses stop time to set up the only safe answer, teleport behind her and chain straight into Flame Strike. The moment time resumes, he blinks behind her and nearly fires on top of the teleport, catching the demon in a violent explosion. She survives the first blast but crashes to the ground badly burned and unable to control her body. Even half destroyed, she glares at him with pure hatred and snarls for him to kill her. Seo Hyen refuses to get reckless, waits out Flame Strike's cooldown from a safe distance, and only then fires again. The second explosion finishes her, and for a brief second it looks like the hidden route boss went down almost too easily. Then the system slaps in with a failure notice instead of a clear, and Seo Hyun is kicked out of the tower in total disbelief. Back in his room, Seo Hyun replays the hidden route failure, and realizes the demon woman was probably someone he was not supposed to kill. Even though she attacked without warning, he decides the real answer is to survive the encounter without killing her. After drinking water and refilling his willpower, Seo Hyun dives straight back into Nightmare Floor 2 to try again. He rushes through the familiar route, clears the platforms, defeats the Minotaur, and heads back into the forest on full alert. Near the ambush spot, he catches a presence in the bushes only because every sense is strained to the limit. The demon woman bursts out at high speed, but this time Seo Hyun is ready and catches her blade with his own. Seo Hyun backs off with both hands raised and tries to stop the fight before it starts. Instead of listening, she calls him a shameless human and accuses him of burning her castle down with lava. Seo Hyun finally understands the mix-up. The tower he escaped was her castle, and she thinks he caused the disaster. He tries to explain that he was a victim too, but every answer only makes her more suspicious. The negotiation collapses completely when Hyland charges again and forces Seo Hyun back into a real sword fight. Because killing her would fail the route again, Seo Hyun switches his goal from victory to subduing her alive. Their blades crash again and again, and Seo Hyun realizes her swordsmanship is far cleaner than anything he has faced before. He stays alive by stopping time at critical moments, and leaning on teleportation whenever her technique corners him. As exaltation keeps stacking, Seo Hyun's body gets faster and faster until he finally starts matching her speed too. Once his strength and speed both pull ahead, Hyland is the one who starts looking cornered. Even with the advantage, Seo Hyun still cannot finish the fight cleanly without risking her life, so he looks for another answer. He stops time, finishes the cast, and slips behind Hyland with teleportation, while her killing swing cuts through empty air. Seo Hyun drives a full-force spinning kick into her ribs and sends the demon noblewoman rolling across the dirt. She scrambles back up and keeps fighting, but the injury is real and her attacks have already lost their bite. Seo Hyun keeps asking for a conversation, and this time his calm insistence finally starts breaking through her fury. He points out the obvious. If he really wanted her dead, he could have killed her instead of stopping to talk. Forced to admit he is stronger, Hyland finally cools down enough to question why a human is in demon territory at all. With no better story available, Seo Hyun claims he is just a traveler with a terrible sense of direction who got lost. The excuse is absurd, but Hyland is so thrown off by his confidence that she does not have a clean way to reject it. Seo Hyun presses the point harder, reminding her again that the stronger side is the one choosing to talk instead of kill. That logic finally lands, and Hyland's rage gives way to wary confusion instead of open hostility. Once the fight cools, she demands his name, and Seo Hyun gives it plainly, Kim Seo Hyun. Hyland immediately gets sidetracked, mocking how strange his human name sounds to her. She introduces herself in full noble style as Hyland Dafria, rightful heir of the great house of Dafria. When Seo Hyun admits he is not noble, Hyland instantly gets smug and demands the respect due to a lady of rank. Seo Hyun realizes he has survived the encounter, but he still has no idea what the hidden route expects him to do next. He gets his answer fast when Hyland orders him to act as her temporary escort. Hyland explains that her castle's self-destruct magic should only trigger against a serious intruder, so if Seo Hyun is innocent, someone else must still be inside. She reveals she was away on a solitary night walk, came back to find the disaster, followed footprints from the gate, and ended up accusing the wrong person. Seo Hyun bluntly asks why any of this should be his problem, and Hyland answers by half threatening him and half dangling a proper reward. The mention of a reward makes Seo Hyun suspect this may be the hidden route payoff, so he agrees to help. Hyland decides their first move is to return to the castle and search for any survivors from her household. As he walks behind her, Seo Hyun is hit by the eerie feeling that this hidden route is less like a dungeon and more like a real world resetting itself. He tests the idea out loud by asking Hyland about the tower and its difficulty structure, but she has absolutely no clue what he is talking about. Changing course, Seo Hyun asks what world this is, and Hyland matter-of-factly names the Pandaren continent. Hyland has a question of her own and demands to know how Seo Hyun suddenly moved behind her during the fight. When he casually calls it teleportation magic, Hyland is shocked because in her world magic needs casting time and leaves the caster unable to move. Seo Hyun brushes the question off, and their uneasy conversation ends as they reach the castle again. The sight waiting for them is worse than before. The lava has kept rising until the castle is almost completely swallowed. Hyland goes pale and quietly realizes there are probably no survivors left at all. She struggles to think through her next move, torn between hunting the intruder's trail and going straight to her father. Then both of them feel an utterly different presence, so dark and overwhelming that Seo Hyun instantly knows this is no ordinary enemy. With a violent crash, the gates and the hardened lava explode apart as a knight in jet black armor walks out coated in molten lava. At the lava-buried castle, Seo Hyun sees a black-armored knight step out of the molten ruins and instantly knows this monster is on a different level. Hyland calls him Sir Carlos with sudden relief, so Seo Hyun hopes the knight is an ally. Carlos answers with a cruel joke about her dying in the lava, and Hyland's face hardens on the spot. When Hyland demands the truth, Carlos calmly admits he caused the disaster and says he plans to kill her father too. Seo Hyun does not wait for the cutscene to finish and fires a surprise flame strike at Carlos first. The blast clears, and Carlos is completely unharmed, making Seo Hyun realize his strongest attack did nothing. Carlos silently swings once, and Seo Hyun stops time just in time to see a net of dark crimson sword aura about to erase him. He teleports to a gap when time resumes, but the explosion still sends him flying like he barely survived by luck. Dazed on the ruined ground, Seo Hyun looks up and sees Carlos ignore him completely, and walks straight toward the fallen Hyland. Carlos executes Hyland in one clean slash, and the hidden route instantly fails. Back in his room, Seo Hyun lies there in shock and accepts the ugly truth that Carlos is not an enemy he can beat. Thinking through the route, he realizes the real objective must be keeping Hyland alive and escaping with her, not fighting Carlos. With only one attempt left, Seo Hyun goes back into Nightmare 2F ready to try a pure rescue run. He returns to the forest ambush point, and Hyland attacks him exactly like before. After proving he is stronger again, Seo Hyun gets her to stop long enough for the same uneasy escort deal. This time Seo Hyun cuts in at the key branch and tells Hyland they cannot go back because a terrifying intruder already wiped out the castle. Hyland hears none of the warning and decides she would rather march back than abandon her ruined home like a coward. Seo Hyun blocks her path and tries one last calm argument, but Hyland only grows more suspicious and swings at him again. When reason fails, Seo Hyun teleports behind her and kicks her down to stop her by force. Even on the ground and in pain, Hyland refuses to bend and snarls at him to kill her instead. Seo Hyun finally gives up on persuading her, chops the back of her neck, and hoists the still conscious Hyland over his shoulder by force. He runs down the path with Hyland struggling in his arms, while she finally breaks into furious, humiliated tears. Once she quiets down, Seo Hyun asks where they can actually escape, because he still has no idea how far is far enough. Then both of them feel Carlos's presence behind them, and Seo Hyun's desperate rescue turns into a full chase. Hyland disastrously starts shouting for Sir Carlos to save her, while Seo Hyun yells back that Carlos is the traitor. Knowing he needs power in reserve, Seo Hyun briefly stops time during the sprint and restores his willpower before pushing on. The next threat is not Carlos himself but a pack of black tracking familiars rushing at them with red eyes and heat-hazed bodies. Seo Hyun blasts the first wave with Flame Strike, but more of the hounds keep pouring in. Right then Hyland thrashes hard enough to knock them both down, finally breaking free at the worst possible moment. Hyland triumphantly calls the familiars over to restrain Seo Hyun, and the next second they pounce on her instead. That brutal mistake finally proves the truth, and Seo Hyun rushes in to cut the hounds off Hyland. To clear the rest, Seo Hyun grabs Hyland by the waist, leaps high into the air, and drops a second flame strike onto the pack below. After landing, Seo Hyun tells the stunned Hyland that Carlos was never hunting him at all, only her. Shaken at last, Hyland stops arguing and reveals the real escape condition. They only need to cross the bridge beyond Daphria's domain. But Hyland's injuries slow her down, so Seo Hyun picks her up again and runs with everything he has left. Carlos catches up enough to fire another Crimson Sword attack, and Seo Hyun uses Leap just before the shockwave tears through the forest behind them. The shockwave still sends both of them rolling, but Seo Hyun drags himself back up, grabs Hyland, and keeps running. Then the bridge finally comes into view, a huge span over a dizzying chasm that marks the edge of Carlos's reach. They race onto the bridge, and from the midpoint Seo Hyun sees Carlos stop at the far end exactly as Hyland said. Carlos still has one last move, driving his sword down and sending a tidal wave of crimson power through the bridge itself. A third of the bridge vanishes, the rest starts collapsing after them, and Seo Hyun sprints with the abyss opening at his heels. At the very end, Seo Hyun makes one final leap, but even that jump will not quite reach the far cliff. So in midair he throws Hyland first, stops time, teleports ahead, and catches her safely on the other side. Behind them the whole bridge collapses into the chasm, and Carlos finally gives up from the far side. Seo Hyun collapses in relief, thinking he somehow managed to rescue the impossible problem child. Now safe, Hyland stares at him and demands to know what he is and why he went this far to save her. When Seo Hyun shrugs that he saved her because he wanted to, Hyland completely misreads it as a clumsy confession. Flustered but suddenly gentle, Hyland introduces herself properly and asks for his name too. As a reward for saving her life, Hyland offers him one choice from 3 treasures she has been wearing. Hyland explains the necklace can form a familiar contract, though even she does not know exactly what kind of familiar it summons. Then she says the bracelet houses a darkness spirit that can at least let its owner see through darkness, with more power if affinity grows. The ring has no direct power at all, but it can claim one favor from the Daphria family if he ever brings it back. Seo Hyun hesitates between the necklace and bracelet, then decides to push his luck and ask for all 3 instead of choosing. He kneels, takes her hand, and politely asks if he may have all of Lady Hyland's treasures because he would cherish every one. The move works perfectly, and a blushing Hyland shyly tells him to take them all. That finally triggers the hidden route clear, 5 level ups, and the transfer out of the scene. Seo Hyun lands in the reward room and sees the real hall waiting for him. Hyland's 3 accessories plus a skill stone. Back in the reward room, Seo Hyun looks over the full hidden reward hall and realizes taking all 3 of Hyland's accessories was the right call. He picks up the silver necklace first, and the item window finally explains that it can summon Pligas for a familiar contract battle. The level 50 recommendation kills his excitement fast, because at level 30 he knows trying it now would be suicide. With no way to use the necklace yet, he sets it aside and moves on to the bracelet. The bracelet's description says a dark spirit named Bandiel lives inside it, and this one looks usable right away. As soon as he puts the bracelet on, dark wisps spill out and gather into a tiny floating spirit. Seo Hyun reaches for the little spirit, only for his hand to pass straight through the smoke-like body. He awkwardly greets Bandiel instead, hoping friendliness will raise their affinity. Bandiel circles his head like it is judging him, and Seo Hyun suddenly feels a faint emotional link between them. The spirit's mood comes through as a grudging approval, so Seo Hyun immediately asks if that means he can use its power. He remembers Hyland saying the bracelet grants sight through darkness, but the bright reward room gives him no way to test it. When he pesters Bandiel to show something else, the spirit turns openly annoyed, and he backs off with a quick apology. Bandiel slips back into the bracelet, leaving Seo Hyun to decide this is probably a growth-type reward worth nurturing later. Last comes the Dafria family ring, and its bare description makes it look almost useless. He turns the ring over in his fingers, wondering why a reward with no obvious effect was hidden here at all. He can only guess it might matter if he ever meets Hyland again, so for now he just keeps it. Then he checks the real prize, a hidden skill stone that grants the passive skill 6th Sense. The rare plus grade sounds impressive, but the vague description still leaves him feeling a little underwhelmed. He grumbles that the whole second floor gave him no magic-type skills at all, even after a hidden clear. His status now shows floor 3 unlocked, level 30, and a bigger stack of abilities, but the rewards still feel oddly hollow in the moment. Remembering the extra supreme magic stone, he casually tosses it onto the useless pile in the corner. Looking at the Pliga's necklace again, he starts thinking long-term and realizes it might become usable after another hidden clear or two. That thought leads him to a harder truth. Nobody is coming to clear this nightmare route for him, so he has to stop waiting and climb himself. After resting a day, Seo Hyun dives back into the second floor for a repeat clearing, this time to gather exact trap data for a guide. He uses leap and teleportation to climb back toward the infamous 4th platform and study the illusion trap more carefully. Instead of stepping on it this time, he tests a smarter idea and fires Flame Strike from a distance. The fire passes straight through the fake foothold, and the real hidden platform appears beside where the illusion vanishes. Seo Hyun confirms the trick works, which means a ranged attack can replace a mid-air movement skill here. He tries to make the jump without teleporting, messes it up, and has to blink onto the platform at the last second. Even after the save, he notes this section could become useful training for sharpening his movement in mid-air. He checks the remaining platforms one by one, and everything seems normal until he stops in front of the 8th. At the 8th platform, a vague warning prickles in his mind before he knows why, and he realizes this must be 6th Sense kicking in. He fires another flame strike, and the 8th foothold also collapses into an illusion with a hidden platform beside it. That small warning is enough to impress him, because even vague danger sense could save a first clearer from walking blind into unknown traps. He pushes on across the large floor and rechecks every other trap, from glowing platforms to the rising slabs. After several repeat entries, he confirms the trap positions stay exactly the same on his runs. That gives him enough confidence to finish compiling the second floor guide, even if he still plans to warn others about possible differences. Back in his room, he lies on the bed and starts writing the post for the Nightmare Communication channel. Several days after the second floor clear, the whole Nightmare community is still obsessing over one question: who actually did it? With the United States publicly denying it, the channel fills up with guesses about China, Russia, and whether Person 123 could possibly have done it again. Most people dismiss that idea, arguing an unregistered climber could not keep up once national teams started pouring support into their own nightmare candidates. Then the silence breaks when a new post appears from Person 123, as blunt and calm as before. Here is the clearing information for the second floor. The world realizes the Nightmare Floor 2 clearer was Person 123 again, because the same anonymous user posted the full clear guide himself. As people read the details, the reaction turns from curiosity to disbelief at how cruel Nightmare Floor 2 really is. The sheer list of hazards makes one thing obvious to everyone trying Nightmare: a blind first clear should have been impossible. Reading the post, Max realizes that if he had attempted Nightmare Floor 2 blind, he would have died. Taylor turns pale and admits that even with the guide, she still cannot imagine surpassing Person 123 as the Nightmare frontrunner. In that moment, Max and Taylor both understand their plan to lead the world in Nightmare has already been crushed. Max is left wondering whether Person 123 can really be an unregistered climber at all, because his lead over every nation no longer feels normal. After posting his clear write-up, Seo Hyun slips back into ordinary life and rides the subway while scrolling Tower news on Babbel. One headline catches his eye: a professor warning that powerful climbers could become impossible for society to control. The interview claims that once a climber passes around level 20, even a 9mm handgun can barely hurt them. The professor pushes it further, warning that if stronger and stronger climbers ever decide to abuse that gap, normal society may have no way to stop them. Seo Hyun finds that less alarming than interesting, especially when he quietly realizes his own body already makes that benchmark feel believable. When the train reaches Silem, he heads out to meet friends for dinner like any normal college-age guy. His friends tease that Sankyeol is late again, and the mood is easy until a foreign car suddenly pulls up beside them. Then Sankyeol leans out of the driver's window with a smug grin, making it obvious climber money has already changed his life. At an expensive beef restaurant, Sankyeol happily plays host and basks in everyone's impressed reactions. Sankyeol brags that Easy Floor 1 is manageable, that he is already making money off repeat clears, and that he is even thinking about trying Easy Floor 2. When one friend challenges him, Sankyeol crushes the arm wrestling match so easily that everyone gets loud about how strong even level 1 really is. Amid the joking, Seo Hyun casually asks what handle Sankyeol uses on the communication channel and learns it is Kyeolsang. After dinner, the group drifts into the entertainment district and starts fooling around with arcade punching machines. That easy mood shatters when a huge bang erupts beside them and a nearby group's punching machine is left completely wrecked. The guy who broke the machine just laughs it off, acting like smashing it was not his problem. When the terrified employee tries to stop him, the thug openly threatens him and boasts that a climber could kill someone by accident. Sankyeol finally steps in, but he is visibly nervous even before the thug turns on him. The moment the thug says he is on normal floor 4, Sankyeol freezes and cannot answer back. Seo Hyun cuts in, tells the thug to stop before he calls the police, and calmly treats him like a drunk idiot instead of a threat. The thug storms up ready to fight, but his friends drag him back before the scene gets even worse. After the thug leaves with a parting threat, Seo Hyun goes straight to the shaken employee and offers to help file a police report. Since the employee is too rattled to act, Seo Hyun makes the report himself and does the ordinary civic thing. His friends praise his nerve, but Seo Hyun admits he was honestly tense the whole time because a real fight would have been messy fast. The night winds down after that, and the group splits up for home instead of trying to salvage the mood. On the way back, Seo Hyun suddenly feels something off and realizes someone is tailing him. Trusting that instinct, he lies to his friends, sends them ahead, and deliberately heads into a secluded alley alone. A moment later, the thug follows Seo Hyun into the alley, confirming that the hostility his sixth sense picked up was real. Instead of panicking, Seo Hyun checks the empty alley and coldly asks why the thug insists on acting like one. That only enrages the thug more, and he drops the act and decides to really kill Seo Hyun. His first punch lands nowhere, because Seo Hyun catches it so easily that the thug cannot process what just happened. When Seo Hyun squeezes a little, the thug screams and stumbles back in sudden fear. Even after realizing Seo Hyun is a climber too, the thug is too angry and stupid to back off. He whips out a knife, bursts forward with a speed skill, and makes it clear this is no longer drunken bluffing. To Seo Hyun, even that desperate burst is still painfully slow. Seo Hyun catches the knife wrist and breaks it cleanly, dropping the thug to his knees with one crack. Looking at the whimpering thug, Seo Hyun feels more disgust than pity, because this is what some people do with the power others are risking their lives to gain. Then Seo Hyun tests a new idea and deliberately calls up the same raw killing intent his sixth sense had warned him about. It works far too well, and the thug goes white, starts shaking, and pisses himself on the spot. Once the thug is fully broken, Seo Hyun orders him to turn himself in for the arcade damage and keep this alley incident buried. To make sure the warning sticks, Seo Hyun reads the man's ID aloud and says he will hunt him down and kill him if he causes trouble again. Seo Hyun leaves the alley irritated by the whole ugly mess, but he also walks away knowing his understanding of sixth sense just got sharper. At Korea's Tower Agency, the nightmare's second floor clear creates a fresh disaster as the new rule says anyone who never climbs within 3 years will die. One hollow-eyed employee keeps typing through the madness, joking to herself like she has already gone numb from the workload. During a hallway coffee break, drained civil servants complain that the work never ends and half-joke about quitting. The mood shifts when Shin Soo-jin walks by, and even the burnout staff bow because she is one of the few people here they genuinely respect. The employees quietly admire her because a level 20 climber who reached normal floor 11 could live comfortably anywhere, but she still stays here doing thankless public work. Over a month later, Seo Hyun spends his time on Nightmare Floor 2 trying to befriend the dark spirit Bandiel by treating it like a moody best friend. He keeps coming here because Bandiel seems happiest in real natural darkness, and Seo Hyun hopes that indulging it will slowly raise their affinity. Through dark vision, Seo Hyun sees the pitch-black forest and eerie white outlines, proving Bandiel at least gave him a useful way to move through darkness. Hyland never appears on this floor anymore, and even the bridge where Seo Hyun escaped from Sir Carlos is now just a dead end of collapsed stone. Back in his room after another walk, Seo Hyun opens his communication channel and spots a new whisper from Bylan Must. Bylan says he has found 2 more skill stones, swing and minor poison resistance, and offers to deliver them just like before. Seo Hyun hesitates because Bylan keeps giving him rare help, but he finally accepts that Bylan is investing in nightmare clears, not handing out charity. On the meeting day, Seo Hyun hides his face under a hood, cap, and mask before approaching the same quiet black sedan in an alley. Inside the car, Bylan skips the small talk and hands over the 2 skill stones immediately. Seo Hyun absorbs the stones on the spot, adding swing and the rarer minor poison resistance to his growing skill list. When Bylan says he wants to keep supplying him with items and skill stones, Seo Hyun finally asks why he trusts him this much. Bylan answers without wavering that Seo Hyun is the only person who might save humanity, because he cleared Nightmare Floors 1 and 2 with no support, while others failed. That blunt faith forces Seo Hyun to admit the ugly truth he learned on Floor 2. Nobody else is likely to lead the nightmare climb if he backs away. Even without confidence, Seo Hyun decides to stop dodging it, and tells Bylan to invest everything in him. Bylan breaks into a bright smile, and their handshake feels less like a favor now and more like a serious pact. Seo Hyun immediately tries to balance the scales by pulling out a golden supreme magic stone and offering it to Bylan. Ellen estimates that a stone that small could still be worth at least 30 billion won, because nightmare rewards are so scarce the market barely makes sense. Bylan explains he can move supreme stones through private channels, but Seo Hyun is more interested when Bylan offers a cleaner solution to his real problem. The plan is simple. Seo Hyun will register publicly as a lower difficulty climber, and Bylan will quietly supply matching low-grade stones for him to sell as cover. Seo Hyun realizes this fake easy identity would solve almost everything at once, from money and legal sales to hiding Nightmare from his family while quitting school. He agrees on the spot, and after some stubborn back and forth he forces Bylan to keep the supreme magic stone anyway. Before leaving, Seo Hyun adds one more request and tells Bylan he would actually prefer magic-type skills if possible. Then Seo Hyun drops his real name, Kim Seo Hyun, as a sign that he is finally trusting Bylan back. A week later, one of Bylan's trusted men hands Seo Hyun a bag full of low-grade magic stones at a fixed pickup point. With his cover materials ready, Seo Hyun finally heads to an agency branch to register as a climber after hiding for 2 full years. He publicly registers as Kim Seo Hyun, easy difficulty, currently on floor 2, locking in the fake identity Bylan designed for him. Once he gets his climber license, Seo Hyun can finally sell magic stones openly instead of hiding every move. At a certified exchange, he sells the supplied stones and walks away with about 130 million won, finally understanding how climbers can live so freely. That night after dinner, Seo Hyun sits down with his parents and finally tells them he has become a climber. Their shock eases a little when Seo Hyun quickly claims it is only easy difficulty, and that he already cleared floor 1 safely. Then Seo Hyun drops the real bomb and says he wants to leave medical school and work full-time as a climber. His mother flatly refuses, horrified that he would throw away the medical path he worked so hard to enter. Seo Hyun keeps his cover story steady, insisting he would only farm safe, easy floor 1 repeat clears and make enough money to actually live his life. After listening in silence, his father finally asks the one thing that matters most, whether Seo Hyun has truly made up his mind. When Seo Hyun answers yes, his father unexpectedly gives permission, leaving Seo Hyun surprised and his mother staring in disbelief. His mother still refuses to trust words alone, so Seo Hyun tears a book apart with his bare hands to prove even low-level climbers become far stronger than normal people. That display does not win full approval, but it does drag his mother to a reluctant "I'll think about it," which is enough for now. Later in his room, Seo Hyun calls Bandiel out from the bracelet and feels quietly relieved that he can finally stop sneaking around at home. The piece lasts about 2 seconds before his younger sister bursts in without knocking, forcing Seo Hyun to shove Bandiel back into hiding. She acts annoyed that he never told her he was a climber, but under all the attitude she really wants to know if the tower is manageable. When Seo Hyun says easy difficulty is manageable, she snaps at him for teasing her and storms right back out. After the interruption, Seo Hyun calls Bandiel out again, jokes about his impossible little sister, and gets ready for another late-night walk on floor 2. He accepts the tower prompt for Nightmare Floor 2 and steps back into the routine he has chosen for himself. Elsewhere that night at Kangwon Northern Correctional Facility, a guard hears repeated banging from one prison cell during his rounds. When he looks through the observation window, inmate Seo Dongwoo is already pressed against the glass with a lazy grin that feels deeply wrong. Seo Dongwoo starts rambling that his friends inside are really hurting, speaking with lazy amusement, while the guard still does not understand the danger. Then the smell hits, and as Seo Dongwoo shifts aside, the guard sees the cell behind him is a slaughterhouse full of mangled corpses and blood. Before the guard can react, Seo Dongwoo grabs him through the opening and crushes his skull while still joking about medicine. With the guard dead, Seo Dongwoo backs up and hurls his whole body into the steel door again and again until the frame and even the walls start to break. The entire wall finally gives way, and Seo Dongwoo steps into the corridor with blood-smeared hands and casual pride in his own strength. The rapid response team arrives too late, freezing in horror as Seo Dongwoo smirks at them like this is all just a joke. That night, the prison erupts into chaos as screams and gunfire echo through the facility. On a bright Monday morning, Seo Hyun wakes up to shocking news that a climber prison escapee named Seo Dongwoo is still on the loose after a massacre. When Seo Hyun opens the hard difficulty communication channel, the same chaos is waiting there too, with someone named So Young bragging that everyone is trying to catch them. Seo Hyun immediately reads the post as pure provocation from a complete madman. Elsewhere, after surveying the prison massacre, the agency team drives away sickened and convinced they have to find Seo Dongwoo fast. In the car, they go over how insane it is that Seo Dongwoo hid his climber status in prison, climbed in secret, and broke out by brute force. Shin Soo-jin estimates Seo Dongwoo is around level 20, since bullets barely worked and ordinary armed guards could not stop him. The bigger problem is that even if they corner him in the mountains, a high-level climber might just vanish into the tower before anyone can secure him. They also start suspecting the lunatic posting as So-young on the channel is Seo Dongwoo himself. When Ju Hyuk checks on her, Shin Soo-jin shuts him down, but her cold stare says this is more than professional anger. Even his younger subordinate sees Shin Soo-jin as one of the rare level 20-plus climbers who chose public service over an easier life. Even while offering to take over the driving, Shin Soo-jin keeps watching the channel with teeth clenched hard enough to crack. That same day, Seo Hyun's father Kim Song-ho spends work hours distracted, unable to stop worrying now that his steady eldest son has become a climber too. At work, Song-ho asks a coworker how any parent is supposed to stay calm if their child becomes a climber, and the awkward answer only deepens his worry. On the way home, Song-ho stops for a rare beer and grimly watches the news say Seo Dongwoo still has not been caught after 3 days. A little tipsy and wanting air, he takes the long way home through a quiet alley under orange street lamps. A big man in a cap, hood, and mask stops him for directions, and Song-ho answers politely even though every instinct says the stranger is dangerous. Just when it seems over, the stranger calls him back, studies his face, and says he looks like the father who used to beat and abandon him. Seo Dongwoo laughs it off as a joke, then casually decides to hit Song-ho once just because seeing his face annoys him. One punch sends Seo Hyun's father flying into the wall and drops him unconscious on the spot, while Seo Dongwoo strolls away whistling. Late that night, Seo Hyun gets a call from his father's phone and rushes his family to the trauma center in panic. After emergency surgery, the doctor tells them Song-ho will live, and Seo Hyun's mother nearly collapses in relief and shock. Seo Hyun stands over his unconscious father and learns the injuries were not from an accident but from a brutal assault. When the police say Seo Dongwoo may be involved, the whole explanation turns unreal for Seo Hyun's family. The CCTV footage shows Seo Dongwoo calmly talking to Song-ho in the alley, then launching him into a wall with one horrifying punch. The moment Seo Hyun sees that punch, something in him snaps completely. After the police leave and his mother stays behind at the hospital, Seo Hyun goes home still burning with rage. At his desk, he opens the communication channel and finds So-young still posting about murder, revolution, and climbers ruling the world. Staring at the nickname until his eyes burn, Seo Hyun sends a whisper with one blunt message, Seo Dongwoo. The reply comes back immediately, and Seo Dongwoo guesses he might be talking to the first nightmare clearer. Seo Hyun swallows his fury and lies, pretending to be another hidden climber who is curious about Seo Dongwoo's plans. To gain Seo Dongwoo's trust, Seo Hyun claims the government could use his nightmare clear against him and even says he agrees that climbers should rule the world. Seo Dongwoo eagerly bites, bragging that he has too many ideas for his next massacre, from crowded places to a hostage situation. Then Seo Dongwoo makes an insane offer of his own and asks to meet in person because he wants to see the first nightmare clearer for himself. Seo Hyun agrees without hesitation, and Seo Dongwoo names an abandoned school in Incheon as the meeting point. Before closing the chat, Seo Hyun fishes for one more clue and learns Seo Dongwoo is somewhere in the 20s. As he heads out, Seo Hyun knows this is reckless, but his anger and the thought of more victims make turning back impossible. He finally settles on one answer. He is going to break every bone in Seo Dongwoo's body and stop him before anyone else gets hurt. Seo Hyun takes a taxi alone toward Incheon in the dead of night. At the same time, Kang Ju-hyuk races toward the capital region after word comes that Seo Dongwoo has suddenly surfaced near Seoul. What scares the pursuing agent most is that Shin Soo-jin, the one climber on his team who might beat Seo Dongwoo, is not answering any calls or messages. The reason becomes clear at dawn, when Shin Soo-jin follows Seo Dongwoo's taunts to the abandoned school in Incheon and enters alone. Inside the decrepit gym, she finds Seo Dongwoo sitting there waiting like this was all just a game to him. Shin Soo-jin does not waste a word and demands to know why his communication channel nickname is So Young. Seo Dongwoo answers with a smile that it was her mother's name, twisting the knife on purpose. The old trauma crashes back as Shin Soo-jin remembers the burglar who murdered her father and then her mother in front of her 10 years ago. Seo Dongwoo keeps talking, even boasting that her mother stayed silent while being stabbed so he would not kill her daughter first. Shin Soo-jin finally spits out what she came for. His escape has given her the chance to kill him with her own hands. She launches first with Leap, cracking the gym floor as she tries to cave him in before he can start playing games. In the first exchange, Shin Soo-jin reads his movement and judges that their raw physical stats seem roughly similar. She slips his counter, grabs him cleanly, and throws him hard enough to embed him in the gym wall. Blue aura blade ignites around Shin Soo-jin's fist, and her follow-up punch tears into the building when he barely twists away in time. Now that aura blade is in play, Seo Dongwoo stops blocking and starts surviving on pure evasion, while Shin Soo-jin watches for the rare skill he still has not shown. Cornered at last, Seo Dongwoo suddenly begs for mercy so pitifully that it almost looks like Shin Soo-jin has won. Right before the finishing blow, Shin Soo-jin hears laughter in his voice and realizes the desperate act was fake. In the next instant, Seo Dongwoo moves at a completely different speed and smashes Shin Soo-jin in the ribs before she can react. Seo Dongwoo cheerfully reveals the truth. He only let her think they were close because he has already reached level 28. Even after hearing he cleared hard floor 7, Shin Soo-jin throws herself back into the fight out of sheer fury. This time the gap is obvious, and Seo Dongwoo dodges her cleanly, mocks her confidence, and bats her away like she is nothing. He admits he is only keeping her alive because another special guest is on the way, and he wants something to play with until then. When Shin Soo-jin stands again, Seo Dongwoo drives a fist into her stomach, ruptures something inside, and lifts her by the throat. Choking in his grip, Shin Soo-jin hates the fact that even now, with all her strength, she is still helpless in front of the same monster. Right as her vision starts to go dark, a new voice calls Seo Dongwoo's name from the gym entrance. Seo Dongwoo lights up and drops Shin Soo-jin like trash when he recognizes the newcomer as person 123. Still gasping on the floor, Shin Soo-jin turns and realizes the man who arrived is the mysterious person 123 from the channel. Seo Hyun takes in the scene, asks who the woman is, and hears Seo Dongwoo dismiss her as a climber he was toying with while waiting. When Seo Dongwoo starts to say he will get rid of Shin Soo-jin first, Seo Hyun cuts him off with the truth he came there to deliver. Seo Hyun coldly tells Seo Dongwoo that he did not come to chat at all, but to kill him too. Seo Hyun heads to the abandoned mountain school Seo Dongwoo named, vaults the wall, and slips inside already expecting a trap. As he nears the gym, his guard goes up even higher when Sixth Sense picks up a noisy fight already happening inside. Inside, he finds Seo Dongwoo holding a badly injured woman up by the throat in a scene he never expected. When Seo Hyun calls his name, Seo Dongwoo cheerfully throws the woman aside and welcomes person 123 like this was a friendly meeting. Seo Dongwoo shrugs off the woman as just another climber who came to kill him, and Seo Hyun cuts through the act by admitting he came for the same reason. Sixth Sense tells Seo Hyun something important right away. Seo Dongwoo feels weaker than advertised, not like a real threat above him. Seo Hyun openly mocks him for pretending this was a chat, and Seo Dongwoo snaps and lunges first. They trade blocks and dodges, but Seo Hyun quickly plants a kick in Seo Dongwoo's stomach and sends him flying. Seo Hyun reads the gap more clearly during the exchange and pegs Seo Dongwoo at roughly level 28, dangerous enough to fight back but still below him. Trying to turn the tide, Seo Dongwoo goes all out and activates skin hardening, covering himself in green shell-like patterns. The hardened skin blunts the feel of Seo Hyun's punches, but not enough to stop him from taking control of the fight. As exultation keeps raising his physical edge, Seo Hyun caves in Seo Dongwoo's guard with a heavier body blow. He grabs Seo Dongwoo's arm and hurls him straight into the wooden wall above the gym stage with a crashing slam. Before Seo Dongwoo can pull free, Seo Hyun uses leap to rocket in and drives a knee into his abdomen. Seo Hyun dodges the wild counterpunches, hammers both ribs, and finishes the combo by booting Seo Dongwoo off the stage. By now Seo Hyun knows he does not even need teleportation or flame strike, because Seo Dongwoo is already getting overwhelmed by raw physical force. Then Sixth Sense suddenly screams a warning when Seo Dongwoo reaches into his back pocket for one last hidden move. Seo Hyun freezes time just long enough to see the danger clearly, an ice dagger item that needs to be dodged immediately. He finishes his concentration, teleports behind Seo Dongwoo, and lets the freezing blast miss him completely. With Seo Dongwoo still stunned by the miss, Seo Hyun kicks him from behind and confiscates the recharging hilt for himself. After waiting out teleportation's cooldown just in case, Seo Hyun confirms that was Seo Dongwoo's last trick and beats him down without mercy. The final chest strike breaks Seo Dongwoo's ribs and leaves him crumpled against the wall, barely alive and still grinning through the blood. Seo Hyun presses on the one thing that really hurts, calling him a coward who climbed high enough to rant about power but got too scared to keep going. Once the anger is out of his system, Seo Hyun hesitates over the aftermath and starts thinking about reporting this mess instead of just vanishing. Before he decides, the injured woman staggers over, lifts a fist glowing blue, and smashes Seo Dongwoo's head apart in one clean execution. Seo Hyun can only stare as the woman cries, catches her breath, and explains she had to kill Seo Dongwoo before his combat status wore off and let him escape into the tower. The mystery woman turns out to be Shin Soo-jin, a section chief from the Tower Monitoring Division, and she thanks Seo Hyun for helping neutralize the escaped convict. When she realizes he is person 123, Seo Hyun asks for one favor anyway: keep his involvement off the record. Shin Soo-jin agrees without drama because he saved her life, and the whole situation suddenly feels much less dangerous for Seo Hyun. Even hurt enough to sink to the wall, Shin Soo-jin insists she will handle the scene alone and tells Seo Hyun to leave before police arrive. Seo Hyun slips out of the abandoned school still unsettled by how strangely Shin Soo-jin cried after killing him. Left behind with the corpse, Shin Soo-jin finally feels the relief of a revenge that years of restraint never actually erased. She replays the fight in her head and is shocked all over again that the mysterious first nightmare conqueror was a young Korean man who toyed with a level 28 climber. Knowing he saved both her life and her chance for revenge, Shin Soo-jin calls her team and calmly reports that Seo Dongwoo is down. Time passes, the news credits a tower monitoring agent with killing Seo Dongwoo, and Seo Hyun realizes Shin Soo-jin really did protect his identity. A whispered message from Shin Soo-jin simply says thank you, and after a brief check-in both of them leave it at that. Back at home, the more personal relief is that Seo Hyun's father recovers and finally gets discharged without serious complications. For a while, every news debate turns into the same ugly argument over whether climbers are the future or just walking weapons waiting to explode. Seo Hyun understands why public fear is rising, but as a climber himself he still feels the sting of being lumped in with a monster like Seo Dongwoo. Even the global chat buzzes over the Korean Joker's death. But like everything else, the shock slowly starts fading with time. Half a year after clearing the second floor, the world keeps counting down while Seo Hyun keeps staring at the same question: can he clear the third floor in time? His ordinary life has shifted too, because he takes leave from college and tells his friends he became an easy-tier climber. His younger sister starts college too, and Seo Hyun quietly marks the moment by buying her a laptop. Now that his parents fully support his climber work, Seo Hyun spends his free time entering the tower mainly to deepen his bond with Dial. Even though the connection feels closer, Dial still answers all his hopeful talk with the same arrogant little attitude, and no new ability yet. The Nightmare Pool has grown from 5 to 8 challengers worldwide, but as far as Seo Hyun can tell, nobody else has cleared the second floor yet. After asking around and getting no success stories back, Seo Hyun stops expecting much from the others and quietly accepts that he has to lead the way himself. Then Bylan reaches out with a much better development. 3 stones are finally ready, including 2 magic skills and 1 enhancement stone. Because Bylan may be under bureau scrutiny, they agreed to stop meeting directly, and use the magic stone courier for future deliveries too. On the appointed day, Seo Hyun receives the stones from the silent foreign courier, and hands over a thick bundle of supreme magic stones in return. Back home, Seo Hyun cracks open the stones and learns exactly what he got: Blade Storm for short-range area destruction, and Fairy Light Bullet for rapid guided shots. He absorbs the new skills immediately and dives into Nightmare Floor 2 to test them on the Minotaur himself. He crosses the lava stepping stones, climbs the tower path again, and arrives before the Minotaur waiting like his regular test dummy now. When the Minotaur charges in, Seo Hyun freezes time and starts his test with Fairy Light Bullet. 3 little light shots curve out from Seo Hyun and pop against the Minotaur, weaker than Flame Strike but still strong enough to draw blood. What really sells Seo Hyun is the control, because unlike Flame Strike the Fairy Light Bullets can bend and track through the air. Between the absurdly short cooldown and his own broken advantages with cast time and willpower, Seo Hyun instantly recognizes Fairy Light Bullet as a very useful weapon. Then Seo Hyun lets the Minotaur rush into range, stops time again, and prepares Blade Storm at point-blank distance. Blade Storm erupts around Seo Hyun in a razor whirlwind, blasting the Minotaur away and shredding it to pieces on the spot. Looking over the Minotaur's corpse, Seo Hyun grins and thanks Bylan, convinced these new skills may be exactly what he needs before the third floor. With less than 3 months left before the nightmare timer runs out, Seo Hyun feels that old crushing fear again and forces himself to focus on one thing: prepare harder than ever. He spends the passing weeks running in and out of the tower, drilling his new skills until they stop feeling fresh and start feeling usable. Blade Storm comes naturally, but Fairy Light Bullet takes real work, so he burns time mastering how to control several light orbs at once. He uses Bylan's normal plus enhancement stone on Fairy Light Bullet, pushing it up to 5 orbs even if the willpower cost climbs with it. To test that upgrade in real combat, he batters the Minotaur with a barrage of light bullets until he can handle all 5 almost freely. When the Minotaur finally buckles, Seo Hyun finishes it with Flame Strike and confirms that his magic has grown stronger with his level 2. After another Nightmare Floor 2 repeat clear, he steps back outside and checks the communication channel, where the world is already spiraling as the deadline approaches. The channel now shows 11 Nightmare climbers, and with the US and China both announcing Floor 2 clears, Seo Hyun knows 3 people can now challenge Floor 3. For one uneasy moment, that tiny bit of hope tempts him to rely on someone else, but he shuts that thought down and decides he will still go first. He settles on a rule for himself: every time Nightmare reaches exactly 20 days, that will be his signal to enter the next floor. Part of that decision is practical kindness. If he is going in anyway, he wants other Nightmare climbers to wait instead of throwing their lives away before him. The other reason is bigger than that. If the world knows exactly when its best hope will move, maybe the panic outside the tower will ease for a while. He asks Bylan for a second opinion, and Bylan agrees the plan makes sense. So Seo Hyun posted publicly as Person 123, announcing that he will attempt Floor 3 at the 20-day mark unless something unavoidable stops him. Across the world in the US, Taylor has finally cleared Nightmare Floor 2 after brutal training, but the victory leaves her painfully aware that she is not built to lead the front line. Talking with Max, she hears that the Bureau is already shifting away from chasing first clears and toward accepting second place behind Person 123. China's own Floor 2 clear only sharpens that pressure, turning the US-China Nightmare race into a fight over who comes second to the same unseen leader. When Taylor asks about Person 123, Max says they still exchange messages, and the thought only deepens her shame at how far behind she feels. Then Taylor spots Person 123's new announcement, and both of them snap their attention to the post. The moment that 20-day declaration goes public, the whole world treats it like an official notice that humanity's next Judgment Day now has a scheduled date. Time keeps moving, and the whole world narrows its attention onto the one challenge Person 123 promised to make at the 20-day mark. As the day approaches, Seo Hyun gets one last delivery from Bylan, a new normal skill called Thrust and another enhancement stone. He uses the normal enhancement stone on Leap for an easy upgrade, then turns to the much bigger choice still waiting, where to spend his rare stone. After weighing Blade Storm against Flame Strike, he picks Flame Strike for the shorter cooldown and accepts the gamble without knowing the exact result. The upgrade pays off by pushing Flame Strike to +2, turning it into a 3 Fireball spell just in time for Floor 3. On the eve of the 20-day mark, his build is finally locked in at level 30 with a heavy magic-focused kit and 600 willpower. He writes his will again, almost copying the last one, because by now the ritual of preparing to die has become grimly familiar. Before the attempt, he slips away on a short solo trip to Busan, trying to clear his head with ocean air and good food while he still can. Back in his hotel room that evening, the mood turns serious again as he lays out everything he plans to carry into Nightmare Floor 3. He straps on Dial's bracelet and dryly warns the spirit that if he dies, their nighttime walks are over too. He adds Seo Dongwoo's Ice Dagger next, counting on its once-a-day freezing effect as an emergency card. He also packs Plagueis' blood necklace even though he still cannot use it properly, just in case Floor 3 offers some impossible opening. His last precaution is for home. He schedules a text to his parents telling them where to find his will if he never comes back. When the nightmare window shows 20 days and a little over an hour remaining, he stands in the room, finishes his breath, and chooses to enter. The scenery shifts, and Seo Hyun arrives on Nightmare Floor 3 already thinking about survival games and how badly Nightmare loves to twist a familiar rule. He freezes time at once and studies the field, an endless plain, scattered rocks and trees, weapons planted in the earth, and undead spread across the distance. What bothers him immediately is that it still does not look horrible enough, and on Nightmare that usually means the real problem has not shown itself yet. He notices a faint glow near the horizon like dawn might be coming and, with no better answer, releases time to start fighting. The instant time resumes, undead rush him from every side, and he answers with an opening flame strike that blows a huge hole through the nearest waves. He grabs a mace from the ground and heads for a thinner section, knowing undead only really stay dead when their heads are smashed. The first few kills tell him the basic undead are weaker than expected, around level 10 or so, and too fragile to threaten him alone. Their danger is pure numbers, so he settles into a rhythm of running, caving in heads, and weaving magic through the crowd before they can box him in. Very light bullet proves its worth right away, with 5 glowing shots arcing through the pack and blowing heads off in quick succession. Even while fighting, he is annoyed by the awful corpse stench, which tells him he still has enough breathing room that the floor has not shown its real teeth yet. When his willpower runs dry, he freezes time to refill it, realizing his expanded magic kit is expensive but brutally efficient. He also discovers the undead are stupidly visual, stopping cold whenever he breaks line of sight behind a rock, though there are too many for hiding to solve anything. With full willpower again, he turns the fight into a system, flame strike on the thickest clumps, light bullets through the gaps, and the mace for anything that survives up close. As he moves, he steps over one strange patch of bare dirt with no grass at all and only half registers that the ground feels oddly hollow. That moment of thinking the floor feels almost manageable scares him more than the undead do, because manageable is exactly what Nightmare never is. Then Sixth Sense screams at him a split second too late, right as his mace crushes one undead skull. The corpse instantly swells and glows red, revealing the hidden trap on this floor, undead that explode if you touch them at close range. He slams time to a stop, fires off teleportation as far as he can, and barely escapes the blast. The explosion rips through the field harder than a flame strike, and Seo Hyun lands shaken but now certain the floor was hiding another nasty rule. Once he focuses, Sixth Sense helps him spot the difference. The explosion types have much brighter red eyes than the normal undead. After that, he starts sniping the explosive ones from range so they blow up safely and take regular undead with them. But the floor is still escalating, and before long he can feel the horde itself thickening at a steady, ugly pace. To keep pace, he burns willpower harder, starts recharging more often, and finally brings Blade Storm into the rotation too. Blade Storm slams down with huge knockback, shredding the undead front line and hurling bodies into the ranks behind them. Then a new enemy type joins the flood as undead wolves and other beast corpses start lunging at him with much more speed and bite. He smashes one wolf undead out of the air and shoots down the smaller beasts behind it, but the jump in pressure is obvious now. Pushed to his limits, Seo Hyun finally looks up to check for sunrise and realizes something deeply wrong is happening overhead. The sky is not getting brighter at all, it is getting darker, and the faint light he saw at the start was never dawn coming in. That reversal hits him hard. If the other difficulties clear at sunrise, then Nightmare may be built around the exact opposite. He has no time to dwell on it, and keeps fighting through what feels like an endless war, refilling willpower over and over just to stay in motion. When full darkness finally settles, Sixth Sense goes wild, warning him that danger is now coming from literally every direction. He looks to the horizon and sees the real Nightmare reveal at last, black lines in every direction resolving into an impossible tidal wave of undead. He freezes time again, stunned into open disbelief because surviving that many enemies by brute force is obviously impossible. Instead of giving up, he forces himself to remember Floor 1 and asks the only useful question left: what hidden answer is he missing this time? Then the clue clicks back into place for him. That unnatural bare patch he crossed earlier had felt hollow underneath. He drops the time stop, spots the patch again, and sprints for it while blasting apart anything that gets in his way. Reaching the strange ground just ahead of the collapsing situation, he immediately decides not to test it gently and fires flame strike straight into it. The surface explodes open and reveals exactly what he hoped for, a hidden passage beneath the field. With the undead flood crashing in behind him, Seo Hyun dives into the passage without hesitation and disappears underground. Seo Hyun drops through the hidden passage into total darkness, but Dial's vision lets him land safely and confirm the undead did not follow him underground. With the corridor quiet in an almost creepy way, Seo Hyun stops time to recover his willpower and starts forward with his guard all the way up. The tunnel opens into a torchlit cavern where a lone boulder in the center carries a strange sun emblem that looks important. Up close, he sees a sun symbol ringed with unknown writing and 3 empty grooves, so he guesses each branch hides something he has to bring back. He casually asks Dial which way to go, gets nothing but indifference back, and decides to try the left path first. The left branch ends at a smaller cavern with an amber gemstone sitting out in the open, which makes Seo Hyun instantly suspect a trap. He throws a loose stone first, and the room erupts with massive iron spikes that shred the entire pickup zone in an instant. After confirming the spikes reset every time, Seo Hyun realizes he can beat the trap with speed and teleportation instead of trying to disable it. He leaps in, snatches the gemstone, freezes time, and teleports back out just as the spikes stab through empty air. Back in the main cavern, he slots the first gemstone into the western groove, and a third of the sun emblem lights up orange. He takes the right branch next and finds another amber gemstone, this one bound in blue chains stretched to the walls like a web. No trap goes off when he tests the floor, but the chain gemstone refuses to move even when he strains at it with all his strength. He blasts the chains with Flame Strike, then Light Bullet and Blade Storm, yet they come through every spell completely untouched. Even trying to break the wall anchors gets him nowhere, so he drops into a frustrated crouch and starts searching the room for another answer. Then he notices another amber gemstone hidden above the entrance, realizes the chained one is a fake, and feels thoroughly mocked by the floor. He pries out the hidden gemstone and returns to slot it into the eastern groove, bringing the sun emblem up to 2/3 full. With one groove left, Seo Hyun heads down the front path and finds a cavern dominated by a huge suspended hourglass and a stone pedestal holding a gemstone beside a cube puzzle. The gemstone will not come free, so Seo Hyun grudgingly concludes the cube has to be solved first even though he barely remembers how. The instant he lifts the cube, the hourglass flips over with a heavy crash and starts the trial. He stops time and digs through his memory for old cube patterns, trying to drag half-forgotten moves back into focus before the timer kills him. When he lets time move again, the hourglass drains at a ridiculous speed, and Seo Hyun realizes there is no way he can solve this thing in time. He tests one last idea by putting the cube back, but the hourglass keeps draining anyway, leaving retreat as his only option. Seo Hyun backs out to the cavern entrance and braces for the penalty, expecting another trap to fire the second the sand runs out. Nothing happens at first, and then the tunnel starts to shake as a new threat rushes in from behind him. A wall-to-wall flood of undead pours down the corridor like a tidal wave, and Seo Hyun instantly understands the hourglass just trapped him underground with them. He blasts the front ranks with Flame Strike, Light Bullets, and Blade Storm, but the horde barely slows and just keeps swallowing the corridor. Driven back into the cavern, he uses Shelburn's Ice Dagger to freeze the front of the swarm into a temporary barricade. The frozen wall immediately starts cracking, and Seo Hyun finally admits this setup has no normal escape route left. Certain he is about to die over a cube puzzle, Seo Hyun laughs bitterly, curses the nightmare, and decides to fight to the very end anyway. Just as the ice gives way, dark energy wraps around Seo Hyun and the charging undead suddenly stop as if he vanished from their senses. Looking up at Dial's annoyed little face, Seo Hyun realizes the spirit finally used a second ability, Concealment. Since the undead cannot perceive him anymore, Seo Hyun grabs the cube again and forces himself to solve it while hidden in the middle of the swarm. After several brutal minutes, he finally solves the cube and the last amber gemstone pops free from the pedestal. He tests the concealment by touching an undead, confirms even contact does not expose him, and starts squeezing through the packed horde toward the central chamber. With Dial's power fading, Seo Hyun barely reaches the boulder in the undead pack's central cavern and slams the third gemstone into place. The completed sun emblem erupts in blinding light and floods the cavern all at once. When Seo Hyun opens his eyes again, the undead around him are melting apart in the sunlight, and the concealment has ended. A few half-melted stragglers still lunge at him, but Seo Hyun caves their heads in and clears the underground chamber. No clear message appears, so Seo Hyun correctly suspects the floor still has one more boss waiting somewhere above ground. With nowhere else to go, he heads back to the pit and is shocked to see real sunlight pouring down from the surface. He climbs out carefully and finds the surface full of undead thrashing and melting under a blazing sun that was not there before. It looks like the floor should be over, but before Seo Hyun can relax, the surviving undead suddenly start stampeding in the same direction. He dives back into the pit to avoid being trampled by the stampede and waits out the shaking ground below. When he climbs up again, he sees the survivors merging into a grotesque giant sphere of flesh with hands jutting out everywhere. The thing emits a sickening low infrasound, and Seo Hyun can tell on sight that this boss is way beyond normal trouble. A heartbeat later, the giant mass launches straight at him at absurd speed, and Seo Hyun has to leap sideways just to survive the first charge. He counterattacks with flame strike and fairy light bullets, but against that huge body the damage barely matters. The crater squirms shut almost immediately, revealing a regeneration speed that makes the fight look even worse. Then the boss opens holes across its body and sprays purple acid over the whole area, forcing Seo Hyun into another desperate scramble. The monster keeps chaining attacks, rolling and bouncing through the air like a meteor, and Seo Hyun burns every movement skill he has just to stay alive. While running for the pit, Seo Hyun gets clipped by the edge of a charge and is launched like a ragdoll across the field. He crashes against a boulder, and once he stops time through the agony, sees that his right arm is twisted and his ribs are caved in. In that frozen moment, Seo Hyun finally figures out the real mistake. He waited too long before activating the sun, so too many undead survived and fused into this impossible boss. With attacks failing, escape blocked, and death basically certain, he reaches for the only reckless option left, Plagueis' blood necklace. He releases time, coughs up blood, and uses the necklace anyway, gambling everything on a summon he has not even tamed yet. Dark crimson smoke gathers in front of him and takes shape as Plagueis, a massive black beast wrapped in red energy with fur-like blades. Before the summon can turn on him, Seo Hyun begs Dial for help, and Dial squeezes out one more concealment to hide its master again. The plan works when the rolling boss arrives, because Plagueis locks onto the bigger threat and tears into it instead of Seo Hyun. Seo Hyun teleports away from the clash and watches his desperate gamble turn into a full monster versus monster war. Plagueis bites and shreds the mass again and again, fighting with savage speed despite being much smaller than the boss. The mass answers with acid and crushing rolls, badly mangling Plagueis, but the summon keeps charging back in until both monsters are wrecked. Plagueis is the first to collapse and scatter away, and Seo Hyun gets a message that the contract is void because his kill contribution was not enough. But the fight leaves the boss half chewed open, and Seo Hyun spots a dense central section deep inside that looks exactly like a core. As the mass starts trying to regenerate again, Seo Hyun forces his broken body upright because he knows this is his only opening. He recovers enough willpower to throw flame strike and light bullets straight into the exposed core, blasting half of it away but not finishing the job. So Seo Hyun commits everything, running through the agony, using leap to launch himself in and teleporting directly inside the monster for the last strike. From inside the boss, he unleashes Blade Storm point blank and shreds the core to pieces at last. The dead mass collapses in chunks around him, and as Seo Hyun falls with the wreckage, the nightmare finally declares floor 3 cleared and his levels begin rising. Smiling through sheer exhaustion, Seo Hyun closes his eyes, knowing he survived one of the ugliest clears yet. After clearing Nightmare Floor 3, Seo Hyun drops into the reward room and his mangled body heals so fast it feels unreal. Once the pain is gone, he just flops onto the floor and laughs weakly because he really did survive again. More system messages confirm every Floor 3 difficulty is cleared, but this time the only big change is that the tower is calling new climbers. Thinking back on that corpse mass boss, Seo Hyun can barely believe he cleared Floor 3 blind on the first try. He gives most of the credit to Dial, the little familiar that kept him hidden long enough to win. Dial dodges his petting hand with cool attitude, and Seo Hyun notices the familiar has actually grown a little. Sensing Dial is worn out, he gently sends it back into the bracelet to rest. Then his eyes go to the necklace, and he realizes the failed binding on Plagueis cost him nothing because the attempt was nullified. Back on his feet and buzzing with new strength from 10 more levels, Seo Hyun turns to inspect the reward stones. The main reward is Rapid Regeneration, a rare plus healing skill that burns all his remaining willpower in one shot. The skill looks perfect for surviving a lethal injury, but the 24-hour cooldown makes him save the real test for the next time he is nearly dead. He acquires Rapid Regeneration, but holds onto the rare enhancement stone instead of feeding it to Flame Strike right away. When he opens his status, the big change is obvious: level 40 and a huge jump to 1000 willpower. Checking the nightmare timer next, he sees the world has earned another year, even if the thought of the higher floors still weighs on him. He briefly wonders what reaching the top of the tower would even change, then shoves the thought aside and decides to leave and rest. Back on Earth, the entire world holds its breath because Person 123 publicly said exactly when he would attempt Nightmare Floor 3. On Jude's live show, Arlo returns as the guest and gets pressed again on whether this miracle can really happen a third time. Arlo refuses to budge, arguing that even a genius like Person 123 is still only one human being carrying an impossible burden. He compares Nightmare to rolling a 60-sided die and says humanity is just pretending the next wave will not finally wipe the sandcastle out. Right in the middle of Arlo's bleak speech, a staff member rushes in and the old bad timing hits him all over again. Then the announcement drops live: Nightmare Floor 3 is cleared, and Arlo gets blindsided by history repeating itself. Across the world, panic flips into pure relief as people cheer, toast, cry, and call Person 123 humanity's savior again. For some, the clear becomes outright worship, with a church-like crowd praising Person 123 as a divine messenger sent to save the world. Seo Hyun comes home after all that, and when his mother asks if he had fun, he answers with a smile that only he knows is fake. 2 days later, he eats breakfast at home, while the news hails Person 123 and government's promise they will keep pushing nightmare climbs. But when the next report turns to the tower's 3-year rule, the relief curdles because tens of thousands of first-wave nightmare climbers are still close to death. An interview with a calm first-wave climber who has chosen not to attempt nightmare leaves Seo Hyun deeply unsettled. He turns the TV off and keeps thinking about what the tower's promised death will actually look like, because nobody knows whether it will be instant or horrific. Back in his room, he opens the communication channel and finds it overflowing with congratulations and pressure after the clear. Bylan's message stands out because he is one of the only people Seo Hyun can talk to even a little honestly about the nightmare runs. Scrolling through public chatter about the 5th floor, he is reminded that the common zone is the first shared floor where climbers from every difficulty can meet. That thought passes quickly, because he still has to write up Floor 3 info and test the hidden route today instead of putting it off. So after letting breakfast settle, he immediately re-enters Nightmare Floor 3 to run it the right way. Now that he knows the trick, Seo Hyun treats Floor 3 as a race and locates the underground hatch almost instantly. At level 40 he blasts through the opening fast, smashing undead aside and using Flame Strike to break straight underground in seconds. He clears the left path first, grabbing the gem and teleporting back without wasting a moment. On the right path, he ignores the obvious bait and takes the real gem hidden above the entrance instead. The final path still slows him down with the cube puzzle, and the ground starts trembling as the undead close in. To buy the last few seconds he needs, he calls Dial and vanishes under concealment, while the undead arrive too late to find him. A few clicks later the puzzle gives way, and he reaches the sun emblem in about 3 minutes total. When the sun emblem activates, sunlight floods the chamber and starts melting the undead before they can become a disaster. Back on the surface, he finds the boss reduced to a much smaller undead mass instead of the nightmare he fought before. He hits it with flame strike and light bullets at the same time, and the supposed boss almost explodes apart on the spot. Walking up in disbelief, he crushes the exposed core with his mace and realizes the normal version of this floor was almost laughably easier. With the main clear done so easily, he finally turns his attention to finding where the hidden route even begins. Then he spots a strange pyramid-like shape shimmering far in the distance, and decides that has to be the clue. He sprints toward it with his strengthened body, cracking the ground underfoot as he tears across the plain. Up close it is not just a pyramid but a massive temple complex, and the weather suddenly shifts as if the hidden route is reacting to him. Inside the temple grounds he hears combat, and rushes toward it instead of wandering blind. There he finds 3 armored knights struggling against a giant undead swordsman, and one of them shouts a warning to Sir Delrunt. Remembering that hidden routes can include allies, Seo Hyun chooses to help, and yells his intent so the knights will not mistake him for another enemy. Because the knights are too close for a fire blast, he uses light bullets to cripple the undead sword arm while closing the distance. Then Seo Hyun leaps straight for its head and smashes half the skull apart with his mace. The knights instantly follow his opening, cutting the giant undead down together until Seo Hyun finishes it off for good. When the fight ends, the 3 knights just stare at Seo Hyun in startled silence, and that is where the hidden route truly begins. After Seo Hyun helps them against the undead, 3 middle-aged holy knights greet him warmly, and reveal they are allies from the Pili Order. Trying not to look suspicious, Seo Hyun introduces himself as a traveler who just happened to step in and help. Delrunt explains that the pyramid is likely an ancient Rune Mage Empire temple that only surfaced because a long-standing barrier finally broke. When Seo Hyun pushes too hard with questions, Delrunt pauses, grows wary, and decides they should properly exchange names first. The 3 knights introduce themselves as Delrunt, Slavan, and Philip, and Seo Hyun gives his full name in return. Philip guesses from Seo Hyun's black hair and dark eyes that he came from the Eastern lands, so Seo Hyun leans into that cover story. The knights settle down right there on the plain, brew tea, and calmly start explaining why this ruined temple matters. Over tea, Delrunt tells Seo Hyun that the last ruined Emperor Katron fell into heresy, built this temple, and offered countless human sacrifices to summon an archdemon. Delrunt adds that the demon was Veluk, a being tied to death, so he suspects the broken barrier let that leftover power leak out and draw undead to the temple. He also reveals the real mission. The Emperor stole Pili Order holy relics for the ritual, and the knights are here to recover them, especially the Holy Grail of Dawn. Seo Hyun quietly sorts through the clues and decides that, for now, helping the knights search the temple is the best way forward. Delrunt openly asks Seo Hyun to join the investigation, promising proper compensation in the name of the order. Seo Hyun agrees, saying he is curious about a Mage Empire ruin anyway, and the four of them head for the pyramid entrance together. Before going in, Seo Hyun notices the pyramid's top has been cut flat and crowned with one huge cannon-like structure. Another large undead appears outside, and Seo Hyun wipes it out instantly with flame strike before the knights can even close in. The three holy knights just stare, stunned that Seo Hyun can throw out high-powered magic that quickly on top of his martial skill. Since Seo Hyun has no idea what mage ranks even are, the knights decide Eastern magic must simply work differently and move on. After clearing scattered undead around the ruin, the group finally reaches the entrance and steps into the pyramid. Inside the pitch-black temple, Slaven lights a lamp and Philip starts marking their route so they can find the way back through the maze. The twisting corridors immediately make Seo Hyun uneasy, and Delrunt warns everyone that a Mage Empire ruin could be packed with deadly traps. Not wanting the knights to die to some hidden mechanism, Seo Hyun volunteers to take point and claims he has a knack for spotting traps. A few steps later, Seo Hyun suddenly jerks back, his sixth sense screaming that the floor ahead is wrong. He fires a light bullet into the suspicious spot, and both walls instantly roar to life with violent jets of flame. The knights are impressed all over again, and Seo Hyun lets them believe he sensed the trap's faint mana signature. In the next chamber, Seo Hyun tests another suspicious space from the doorway instead of walking in. The ceiling splits open and drops spinning Gatling-like devices that rake the room with bullets of light, proving this ruin is absurdly dangerous. With trap after trap exposed before anyone steps into danger, Seo Hyun leads the group safely through the maze. At last the maze opens into a lavish chamber of gold and gemstones, and the knights immediately spot something sacred at its center. The holy knights almost rush the relic on instinct, but Seo Hyun stops them and reminds them a trap could still be waiting. Seo Hyun scouts around the statue himself, finds no warning from his sixth sense, and decides the relic can be taken safely. He removes the circlet from the statue and hands it to Delrunt instead of keeping it for himself. Delrunt recognizes it as St. Landahill's circlet, and the three knights are thrilled that they really found a lost holy relic here. Delrunt explains that the circlet should glow red when a wicked entity is nearby, and he channels divine power into it to demonstrate. The circlet really does glow red, and the room goes ice cold as all three knights realize that means a wicked presence is standing with them. Their eyes slowly lift towards Seo Hyun, and he instantly realizes they think the relic just exposed him. Seo Hyun tries to deny it, and even suggests the relic might be broken, but that only makes the knights angrier. In a heartbeat, the three holy knights draw their swords and charge the very man who got them this far. Since they are not that strong, Seo Hyun decides to hold back and just subdue them instead of killing them. But the moment Seo Hyun counters and kicks Delrunt away, the rout fails on the spot and throws him out of the tower. Back in his room, Seo Hyun drops to the floor in disbelief and realizes that on this route, even fighting the knights is enough to fail. He starts pulling the failed run apart in his head, focusing on the one thing that still does not make sense: why that relic marked someone nearby as wicked at all. Without wasting time, Seo Hyun chooses an immediate retry and dives right back into Nightmare 3F. He speedruns the opening this time, activating the sun emblem, killing the boss, and rushing straight back to the temple. Seo Hyun helps the same three knights against the undead again and smoothly steers the route back to the temple investigation request. As they enter the pyramid once more, Seo Hyun watches the three men ahead of him and lands on a new, unsettling answer. If the circlet was not accusing Seo Hyun, then it was exposing someone else, and Seo Hyun concludes that one of the holy knights is a traitor. Inside the temple, Seo Hyun quietly narrows the hidden traitor down to Slavan or Philip, because attacking Delrunt in an earlier run had only caused the clear to fail. Rather than force the issue, he decides to keep watching and stay ready to step in the moment either suspect makes a move. To keep control of the search, Seo Hyun volunteers to lead by claiming he can spot traps like a mage. He deliberately steers the group down a different route, dropping his idea of secretly pocketing the circlet because the knights would sense any holy relic immediately. After clearing more traps, they reach a room where a gargoyle holds another holy relic in its hands. Delrunt identifies it as the celestial music box, and the knights react with real emotion at finding another lost relic of the order. When divine power is poured into the box, a gentle melody plays, and Seo Hyun is relieved that this relic is harmless instead of exposing him. The search keeps paying off, and they lay out several more relics, including a barrier bracelet, a healing ring, mind-strengthening earrings, and the music box. Deeper in the temple, the party discovers a spiral staircase that seems to climb all the way to the summit of the massive pyramid. After a long climb, they finally emerge into the open air on the broad summit under a heavy, overcast sky. At the center of the summit, Seo Hyun finally gets a clear look at the strange tower with a giant cannon barrel jutting from its top. While the knights keep searching for relics, Seo Hyun climbs the tower ladder to inspect the weapon for himself. At the top, he finds an ancient magical cannon with a huge gemstone core and a control lever, and the moment he touches it, item information appears. The no-cooldown super weapon feels wildly out of place, and Seo Hyun immediately suspects the summit is hiding a threat big enough to need it. A shout from below cuts his thoughts short, and he rushes down to find the others gathered around a black corroded golden chalice. Delrunt grimly confirms it is the Holy Grail of Dawn, now corrupted because Katron tried to use it as a vessel to summon the Archdemon. Slavin warns that the Grail and the Archdemon's power are barely balanced, and even a small disruption could trigger disaster. Philip urgently pushes to send the Grail back to the Order at once so the Saintess can purify it. They stop searching and climb down the outside of the pyramid, making the Grail the clear top priority. On the ground, the knights debate whether to keep investigating, but Philip argues that one man can rush the Grail and relics back while the others stay behind. Delrunt agrees, and Philip takes custody of the Grail and the rest of the relics with a solemn promise to guard them with his life. As they escort Philip to the edge of the temple grounds, Seo Hyun keeps staring at his back because letting the wrong man walk away with the Grail would mean instant failure. Instead of waiting for another failed run, Seo Hyun decides to test his suspicion right now. He stops Philip with a smooth excuse, asking to inspect the Grail again because there might be a spell on it. Because Seo Hyun has already proven himself with the temple traps, Delrunt and Slavan accept his warning and turn to Philip to hand the Grail over. For one tiny instant, Philip's expression twists around the eyes, and that flash of panic tells Seo Hyun he guessed right. Philip hands over the Grail anyway, and Seo Hyun pretends to inspect it for one last beat. Then Seo Hyun suddenly swings his mace and smashes Philip straight in the head. Delrunt and Slavan lunge at Seo Hyun in horror, until he shouts for them to look at Philip. The split in Philip's head opens into writhing tentacles, and the Holy Knights finally see the disgusting truth for themselves. Seo Hyun follows with a flame strike, blasting the exposed traitor before he can recover. When the smoke clears, Philip's human shape is gone, replaced by a swollen, grotesque mass of flesh that can still speak. As Delrunt rages at the betrayal, Philip admits the ritual is already underway and sneers that they are too late. Philip offers his whole body to Veluk, and a violent burst of red energy erupts from his flesh. Seo Hyun's danger sense screams the moment that red energy starts streaming into the Grail in his hands. He instantly hurls the Grail away before the energy can finish pouring into it at point-blank range. Philip's body shrivels flat, and the Grail starts reshaping itself into the resurrecting form of Veluk. Slavan trembles as he realizes the Archdemon Veluk is actually being resurrected right in front of them. Seo Hyun unloads another flame strike and a light bullet into the forming demon, but the attacks do nothing at all. On the edge of giving up, Seo Hyun suddenly remembers the absurd cannon waiting on the summit. He bolts for the pyramid and orders Delrunt and Slavan to follow, betting everything on that hidden weapon. Using leap to climb faster, Seo Hyun races back up the pyramid and reaches the tower before the resurrection can finish. At the summit tower, he grabs the lever again and accepts the brutal cost of firing the Annihilation compressed mana cannon. He manually swings the huge barrel into line, aiming straight at the nearly finished demonic body below. He warns the others to get clear, and Delrunt and Slavan scramble aside halfway up the pyramid. The cannon charges with a blinding flash and screaming sparks that make the whole summit feel unstable. Then Seo Hyun fires, launching a tiny-looking blast that carries terrifying power. The shot detonates into a massive blue mushroom cloud, and even Seo Hyun is nearly knocked off by the shockwave. When the smoke starts to clear, Delrunt and Slavan finally reach the summit looking filthy and completely stunned by what Seo Hyun just did. Seo Hyun answers their shock with a casual thumbs up, acting like he did not just fire a miniature apocalypse. Veluk's form is gone, but no clear message appears, so Seo Hyun immediately suspects the route still is not over. A fresh sixth sense chill hits him, and he snaps his gaze toward the horizon. From the summit, they see an enormous black tide of undead rolling in from every horizon until the pyramid is completely surrounded. Seo Hyun climbs down from the tower, and all three stare at the encirclement, realizing they may have chosen the wrong route again. With no clear message and nowhere to run, Seo Hyun starts to think this attempt is just another failure he will have to redo smarter next time. Then he looks back up at the cannon and realizes he might not need a retry at all. He asks Delrunt and Slavan if they like miracles, and the line sounds so strange that it stops them cold. Before they can make sense of it, Seo Hyun climbs back to the tower to fire the superweapon again. The key trick is the cannon's missing cooldown, because Seo Hyun can refill the impossible willpower cost over and over with his time stop advantage. Delrunt and Slavan brace for death below, convinced a weapon like this cannot possibly keep firing. Instead, the cannon roars again, and Delrunt and Slavan look up in shock as the impossible starts all over. Seo Hyun sweeps the cannon around the full circle of the horizon, firing west, northwest, north, and onward until explosions are blooming in every direction. From below, Delrunt and Slavan can only watch in open disbelief as the sea of undead visibly starts shrinking. For Seo Hyun, the real fight becomes a grind of patience as he keeps stopping time, refilling willpower, and firing again and again. Hours of subjective repetition wear on him, but boredom and sheer stubbornness keep him going long after a normal person would stop. Somewhere around 100 rounds later, the last of the undead are finally vaporized. When Seo Hyun releases the time stop and looks out again, the land around the pyramid has been blasted into a barren wasteland. No more undead are coming, but for 1/10 beat the tower says nothing at all, as if even it did not expect this route to be handled that way. Then a new message appears at last, awarding a magnificent clear for the Nightmare 3F hidden route. The rewards surge in all at once, fully absorbing the floor's power, stacking multiple level ups, boosting the reward tier, and finally transferring Seo Hyun away. After the hidden route massacre ends, Seo Hyun lands in the reward room and freezes when the system calls it a magnificent clear. His shock turns into real excitement when he spots a skill stone glowing violet instead of the usual green. When he picks it up, the item window reveals Destruction Ray at Epic Plus, a grade the world has never even seen before. He hurriedly checks the description and almost blurts with relief when Destruction Ray turns out to be magic type. The details make it even crazier: a charge time from 30 to 300 seconds, and 1,000 willpower for one shot. Seo Hyun guesses it is some kind of charged laser spell, but even while hyping himself up he doubts anything can top the absurd summit cannon. He learns the skill, then reins himself in and decides not to test something this dangerous inside the reward room. His second reward is the Celestial Music Box, a holy relic that spends willpower to play a soothing melody. He activates it and gets a gentle tune instead of a combat trick, which feels nice but leaves him a little underwhelmed. Looking over his updated status, Seo Hyun sees he has reached level 45 and feels just how ridiculous his growth has become. He jokes to himself about having outgrown normal shoes, then fingers Plagueis' necklace and starts thinking about taming it before floor 4. He savors how absurdly profitable the third floor hidden stage was, while admitting a magnificent clear like this was basically a one-time cheat. Once he exits to his bedroom, the door slams open immediately, and his younger sister barges in asking for assignment help like nothing happened. Seo Hyun scolds his younger sister for skipping the knock again, but she ignores that and shoves her report at him instead. He tears into the report's problems one by one, from sloppy headings to mixed sentence style and an introduction that does not connect to the body. She grumbles and tries to make him supply the missing idea for her, but he keeps pushing her to think it through herself. When his younger sister snatches the report back without even thanking him, Seo Hyun gets petty and muses up her hair on the way out. Her furious complaint to their mom goes nowhere, and the hallway noise fades back into ordinary family grumbling. A little later, Seo Hyun heads to the kitchen for water, and his mother gently asks whether he went into the tower again. He answers honestly, and she gives the same careful warning as always: don't overdo it, and come back safe. Back in his room, he understands why his parents still worry anyway, even if he knows a low-floor repeat run is trivial now. After a short rest, he goes right back into Nightmare 3F because he wants a proper field test for his new spell. On the undead plains, Seo Hyun starts without magic and simply hammers through the first wave with raw physical strength. He is strong enough now to handle the early fight almost casually, only using fairy light bullets to safely pop the suicide undead. He briefly considers testing rapid regeneration by taking a hit on purpose, then drops the idea because dying for science would be too stupid. Instead, he deliberately fights for 10 minutes and waits for the sun to set so the full hidden route sequence can unfold. Once the horizon fills with the real horde, he heads underground, gathers the gems again, and activates the sun emblem. Back on the surface, he watches the undead melt away under the sunlight until they start converging into one final mass. Seo Hyun deliberately brings out the fully powered amalgamation, because after reaching level 45 and getting Epic Plus magic, he wants a rematch. He first tests himself physically, and to his surprise he can now dodge the boss's deadly charges and leaps without even using leap. That warm-up is enough for him, and he finally decides it is time to see what Destruction Ray really does. He stops time and calmly charges the spell for the full 300 seconds, refusing to settle for anything less than the maximum shot. When time resumes, a black hole-like sphere flashes into existence, and a gigantic jet-black beam tears straight across the field. The result leaves even him speechless, because the amalgamation is left with a giant hole through its body and simply dies on the spot. Destruction Ray burns almost all his willpower in one use, but Seo Hyun immediately realizes this is the kind of ultimate move that can end nearly any fight. With that settled, he looks down at Plagueis' necklace and decides this is the perfect moment to force a familiar contract. He fully restores his willpower, waits out the cooldown, and activates the necklace the moment Destruction Ray is ready again. Plagueis starts manifesting in front of him, but Seo Hyun has already decided this reunion is going to be brutally short. The instant Plagueis tries to roar, Seo Hyun stops time again and charges another full-power shot for the contract kill. His fully charged Destruction Ray punches a massive hole through Plagueis too, scattering the beast before it can even properly exist. As the remains are sucked back into the necklace, the system confirms that a master-servant contract with Plagueis has been established. The necklace's new description tells him the summon can stay out indefinitely unless it takes severe damage, which makes the deal even better. He summons Plagueis again right away, and this time the beast appears calm instead of murderous. A few simple commands prove the contract is absolute, because Pligas obediently sits and stands on cue like a giant pet. Seo Hyun pats the rough fur, casually renames it Ply, and starts acting like this demon beast has always belonged to him. Then he does the obvious thing and climbs onto Ply's back to test it as a mount. Ply launches like an arrow the moment Seo Hyun gives the order, and he nearly gets thrown off by the speed. He ends up spending the next hour racing across the plains on his new familiar, fully enjoying how absurdly fast it is. Several days later, the communication channel is restless because everyone is waiting for person 123 to finally post the third floor intel. The wait ends when person 123 posts, and the entire channel locks onto his detailed Nightmare 3F guide. His guide lays out the whole floor clearly, from the undead plains and hidden underground path to the gem collection and the real clear condition. Readers react in disbelief as the comments explode over sunset on Nightmare, suicide undead, cube traps, and a boss tied to level 50 danger. At U.S. Tower Climbing Management Bureau headquarters, Max briefs Taylor and senior officials using a projector full of reorganized notes from person 123's post. Max explains that the floor is manageable on paper if they minimize underground time, because the right gem is easy and the left gem can be pulled past the spike traps. For the center route, Max says cube experts believe they can train a climber to break the 20-second mark with focused practice. The room's real concern is the boss, because based on person 123's run, the 3-minute version could still be too dangerous for Taylor. That pushes the discussion to one key question: if they shave time below 3 minutes, will the boss actually get weaker too? Max admits he already asked person 123 to verify that, and person 123 agreed even though the test may take a while. The reason for the delay is almost absurdly mundane. Person 123 says the cube cost him more than a minute, so he needs practice before he can test a faster clear. Max also drops a new surprise: even after missing the cube's 20-second limit, person 123 finished it safely by using some kind of concealment skill. That revelation only deepens the room's awe, because person 123 apparently has yet another unseen ability on top of everything else. After the briefing, Director Ban privately tells Max and Taylor that if the boss really scales down with time, he will support the clear with everything he can. He apologetically reminds Taylor that she is still America's hope, but Taylor answers with a bitter smile that she is only climbing comfortably because person 123 already cleared the way. Director Ban insists that even following person 123's path is a feat only 2 people have managed, and privately wonders what kind of man is carrying humanity this hard. Back in his bedroom, the great mystery of person 123 looks a lot less grand, because Seo Hyun is sprawled on his bed wrestling with a cheap Rubik's Cube. And after all that power and all those miracles, the thing currently giving him trouble is simple and annoying. Solving the cube in under 20 seconds is not easy. Kim Dae-woong starts his first day in the tower monitoring division with a loud greeting and enough nerves to make the whole office glance over. The team welcomes him lightly, asks his level, and parks the rookie in a corner seat while he waits for the famous section chief to return. As he looks around, Kim quietly builds up Shin Soo-jin in his head as the climber who just broke Korea's normal difficulty record. Then Shin Soo-jin suddenly appears in the middle of the office with a male coworker, and Kim is the only one visibly startled by the teleport-like return. Kim rushes through an awkward self-introduction, and Shin Soo-jin simply offers her hand and welcomes him like it's no big deal. His clumsy line about it being an honor makes the room laugh, leaving Kim even redder as Shin Soo-jin moves on. Afterward, Kang Joo-hyuk sidles over, casually asks Kim's age, and starts sounding out why someone with an easy route ahead chose this unit anyway. Kim admits people called him crazy, but says he joined because he admires Shin Soo-jin and wants to reach the floor 5 common zone himself. Kang Joo-hyuk needles the rookie with talk of the common zone being almost lawless and deadly, and Kim's face drops fast. Then Kang laughs it off, tells him they may work together someday, and leaves Kim fired up instead of discouraged. Later, fresh off floor 5, Shin Soo-jin escapes some pushy officials and vents in the break room over a cup of coffee. Kang Joo-hyuk asks if she plans to challenge floor 16 soon, but Shin shuts that down and says she is not pushing farther for now. The unknown floors a headway on her because reliable normal difficulty intel dries up after this point, and she knows the pressure only gets worse from here. That pressure makes her think of person 123 again, because he cleared 3 nightmare floors and still gave away his hard-won information for free. She even thinks about thanking him in person someday, especially because Seo Dongwoo's death ended the nightmares that had haunted her. Kang Joo-hyuk breaks the mood by reminding her there is only 1 hour left until the tower's 3-year rule starts killing first-wave climbers who never entered. They both know the worst part is Nightmare, where many first-wave climbers still never registered or gave up entirely, and there is no way to save them now. With coffee finished, they move on to a murder case that now likely involves a climber, and Shin decides to go with Kang instead of resting. Elsewhere, Seo Hyun slams the floor 3 cube into place and sees his best time drop to 29 seconds. He keeps grinding this already cleared puzzle because Rhino wanted exact data on whether faster Sun Emblem activation makes the boss weaker. By now he has already confirmed that activating the Sun Emblem in under 3 minutes does weaken the boss, and he is only chasing cleaner data and a 20-second solve. He shoves through Undead in the passage, activates the sun emblem again, reaches the surface, and wipes out the weakened boss like routine work. After the hidden quest clear, the old temple is gone, and floor 3 is now just empty plains with nothing left to explore. So he exits floor 3, jumps back into the tower on floor 2, and immediately turns the trip into another training run. Riding Ply through the midnight forest with Dial beside him, Seo Hyun keeps up the nightly walks to raise Dial's affinity. He loudly wonders when Dial's next ability will unlock, and Dial reacts like he knows Seo Hyun is pushing his luck already. Seo Hyun reviews what he learned about concealment. It lasts around 10 minutes, and completely erases both sight and presence. He has also confirmed the limits: enough impact, high-speed movement, or using a skill breaks it during combat. Even so, the skill can be recast almost immediately, which makes Seo Hyun see endless uses for it. He asks Ply if he has any special ability too, then remembers that for a level 50 monster, raw physical power already counts as absurd enough. After the run, Seo Hyun returns to his room and remembers today's Mana Stone delivery means he has to go outside soon. That makes him consider buying a car and taking longer walks, because he knows spending all his time in the tower can quietly wear down a climber's mind. He checks the communication channel, and the whole chat is tense because the final hour of the 3-year rule is almost over. He knows the first wave climbers who never entered can actually see their own death timer, and now only about an hour remains. When he checks the nightmare status, the survivor count is still horrifyingly low even after a few more clears push the total to 15. He figures some people may still make a last-minute attempt, but many have already chosen death, and there is nothing he can do except hope it is painless. Meanwhile, on the road to Seocho police station, Shin Soo-jin and Kang Joo-hyuk spot a crowd and slam to a stop when they hear a man threatening a hostage. The hostage taker is completely broken, screaming that he is a nightmare climber with only 3 minutes left before the tower kills him. Shin Soo-jin checks the status and sees he is telling the truth. The nightmare deadline really is down to 2 minutes and 59 seconds. With blood already on the woman's neck, Shin hesitates over a rescue because one bad move could make the man kill her on the spot. Before anyone acts, the man suddenly drops the knife and collapses in a heap, as if all his panic just burned out at once. Shin secures the shaken woman, while the man lies there laughing hollowly as the last seconds tick down. Kang Joo-hyuk can only tell him he is sorry, and both agents stand there watching because nothing else can stop what is coming. The moment the 3-year rule triggers, a system message announces that 43,456 climbers who never entered the tower will die. The hostage taker dies instantly and without any visible wound, and even Kang Joo-hyuk is unsettled by how abruptly the curse kills. But before Shin can even approach the body, a new message drops the real horror. Climbers killed by the tower's curse will rise again as the fallen. The message keeps going, listing stage probabilities from stage 1 all the way up to the tiny but terrifying chance of a stage 5 fallen. Shin Soo-jin and Kang Joo-hyuk freeze when the tower suddenly announces a new threat called the Fallen. Before they can process it, black smoke rises from the corpse and Kang Joo-hyuk jumps back in alarm. The dead man twists into a horned monster in seconds, his skin going pale and his eyes turning completely black. The newly risen Fallen lunges at the crowd, and panic explodes as civilians scream and scatter. Shin Soo-jin catches the monster, slams it down, and realizes it has already lost any trace of human reason. She orders climber-grade restraints, and judges this one to be weaker than level 10. But the tower's message leaves her fearing the same thing happened to all the dead. A radio call reports a terrorist incident with many casualties at Seoul Arts Center, and both agents immediately suspect it is tied to the Fallen outbreak. Knowing time matters more than mercy, Shin Soo-jin crushes the restrained Fallen's head and leaves Kang Joo-hyuk to secure the area. She sprints towards Seoul Arts Center on foot at full speed instead of wasting even a moment on a car. At the Arts Center, armed police try to stop her, but she flashes her ID and takes command of the situation. An injured survivor staggers out babbling about a monster inside, confirming the threat is still active. When police admit they were ordered to hold outside, Shin Soo-jin tells them to pull back and walk straight into the building alone. Elsewhere, Seo Hyun finishes another secret magic stone exchange near Jyoti Station and starts walking away with a fresh bag. He checks the nightmare timer and realizes the deadline for first-wave climbers who never entered the tower is down to its final minute. He waits and watches the time hit the limit, bracing himself for the tower to do something cruel. The system bluntly announces that 43,456 climbers who never entered the tower have died, and Seo Hyun can only curse the tower in disgust. Then the next message hits: everyone killed by the tower's curse will rise again as fallen, with stages from 1 to 5. Seo Hyun opens the communication channel and sees climbers everywhere panicking because the dead are already reviving as horned monsters. The peaceful street around him now feels wrong, and he decides to head home first while the whole country starts tipping into chaos. At the subway station, emergency alerts start flooding his phone with creature sightings all over the country. He quickly calls home, confirms his family is safely inside, and only relaxes enough to think about the next move. One alert stops him cold when it names Seoul Arts Center, a major outbreak point practically next to him. After a brief hesitation, Seo Hyun decides he cannot ignore it and takes a taxi straight there to see the Fallen with his own eyes. He arrives to find police cars, armed officers, and ambulances still rushing in, which tells him the massacre inside is not over yet. Calling on Dial's concealment, Seo Hyun slips past the police and enters the building unseen. Inside, Shin Soo-jin advances through silent corridors thick with the smell of blood and the sound of someone quietly sobbing. When she reaches the opera hall, she finds a nightmare of bodies and blood under flickering lights. She spots one fallen with 3 horns roaming between the seats and another with 5 horns curled on stage, crying over the dead. Since neither monster reacts to her yet, Shin Soo-jin chooses rescue first and creeps toward the survivors hiding under the seats. A sobbing couple almost cannot move from terror, but Shin Soo-jin steadies them and gets them out while the monsters remain still. She goes back in and starts pulling out the remaining survivors one by one, keeping the evacuation painfully quiet. The rescue almost works until one survivor falls on the stairs, and the noise finally draws the 3-horned fallen's attention. Shin Soo-jin orders everyone to run and takes the charge head-on, only to be smashed into the wall by the monster's raw power. She realizes this fallen is far beyond an ordinary threat, and draws a blade to fight at full strength. Her strike blows open the monster's chest, but the fallen ignores what should have been a killing blow and hammers her again. Coughing blood and likely with broken ribs, Shin Soo-jin is about to be finished when a huge black beast suddenly crashes into the fight. The black beast tears the 3-horned fallen apart in its jaws and then calmly sits without turning on Shin Soo-jin. That only leaves the 5-horned fallen still sobbing on the stage, and its presence alone makes Shin Soo-jin's skin crawl. An unseen voice tells her it will handle the rest, and Shin Soo-jin instantly recognizes the speaker as Person 123. She pieces together that the black beast belongs to him, understands she would only get in the way, and withdraws while warning him to be careful. Now alone with the carnage, Seo Hyun watches the 5-horned fallen crying over the people it killed and decides there is no saving anything human in it. He judges the number of horns to match the fallen stage and realizes this rare stage 5 is dangerously strong. Seo Hyun first prepares Destruction Ray, then stops when he realizes firing it carelessly indoors could kill people outside or below the building. He quickly changes plans and orders Ply to launch the monster upward so he can fire safely through the ceiling. The moment Ply rushes in, the crying stage 5 snaps into motion with shocking speed and kicks the giant beast straight into the wall. Ply shakes it off and clashes head-on with the fallen, proving they are roughly evenly matched in raw physical power. Watching under concealment, Seo Hyun estimates the monster around level 50 and decides one clean hit from his finisher should still erase it. As the hall gets wrecked and his concealment starts running short, Seo Hyun waits for one precise opening instead of wasting a risky shot. The chance comes when the fallen locks both hands onto Ply's jaws, and Seo Hyun silently orders Ply to hold it there. Seo Hyun teleports in beside the monster and drives a full-force upward kick into its gut to line up the shot. With the monster near the dome ceiling, he stops time and unleashes a fully charged destruction ray straight upward. When the darkness clears, the stage 5 fallen is simply gone, leaving only a hole in the roof and daylight pouring in. Satisfied that even this monster cannot survive destruction ray, Seo Hyun praises Ply, dismisses it, and slips back out while still concealed. Outside, police tactical units have fully surrounded the building, and Shin Soo-jin warns them that rushing in against a monster like this would only get them all killed. Even while hurt, she radios in that a stage 5 fallen is inside and estimates its combat power at least level 50. As the building shakes with the sounds of battle, Shin Soo-jin trusts Person 123 but still feels a cold fear at the thought of him dying here. Just as she starts to regret leaving him alone, a black pillar blasts through the roof and everyone outside freezes in disbelief. The tremors stop, and before she can message him first, Person 123 quietly whispers that it is over. Seo Hyun tells her the monsters are gone and asks her to hide his involvement again, and Shin Soo-jin agrees without hesitation. When he adds that he was not hurt at all, her relief deepens into quiet gratitude for being saved by him once again. After steadying herself, Shin Soo-jin turns back to duty and heads inside to assess the aftermath. In Shanghai, another stage 5 fallen is raging through downtown, and one man is fighting it head-on in the middle of the city. The man hurls the monster away, and circling fighter jets immediately unload a barrage of missiles into it. Even after the bombardment, the fallen staggers back out, and the man launches himself in again instead of letting the military finish it. Wrapped in crimson energy, he tears the monster apart piece by piece and pins it to the ground. He finally kills the stage 5 fallen by hammering its head into the street until it bursts. As the red frenzy fades, aides rush over from a military convoy and reveal the victor as Wang Kai, the world's highest level hard mode climber. Wang Kai brushes off concern, scoffs at the need for fighter jet support, and grins that the world just got a lot more interesting. Back at the agency, Shin Soo-jin admits she still cannot explain how the supposed stage 5 fallen vanished after the Seoul Arts Center disaster. The investigation finds only a dead stage 3 and a huge hole in the theater ceiling, so Shin's testimony is the only clue left. Since the CCTV died in the chaos and the country is overloaded, Shin gets away with saying she simply does not know what happened. The director orders a wider search just in case, but once he confirms Shin has recovered, he sends her right back into the field. After dead climbers start turning into fallen, the country goes into emergency mode and the military moves in everywhere. Broadcasts explain the new enemy fast. Every fallen is hostile. They vary by stage, and like the undead on floor 3, they only die if the brain is destroyed. Most of the outbreak is stage 1 and 2, so ordinary soldiers and climbers wipe those out quickly with rifles. Stage 3 is a different story, and Seo Hyun notes that only 2 of them officially appeared in Korea outside the ones he secretly handled at the Arts Center. The Air Force takes down those stage 3 cases, and Korea escapes the worst of the disaster because no stage 4 or public stage 5 appears there. Privately, Seo Hyun thinks Korea was only lucky because he happened to be near enough to kill the hidden stage 5 himself. Elsewhere, China and Canada also destroyed their stage 5 fallen, with Wang Kai helping in China and a US-Canada military operation handling the other. Even after the fighting slows, the global death toll is horrifying, and for a while every headline is just more monsters, more bodies, and more countries breaking down. Once the immediate crisis eases, a new fear takes over. Non-climbing climbers are now seen as future monsters waiting to happen. Governments scramble to answer that fear with harsher oversight, bigger support programs, and even euthanasia proposals for climbers who refuse to enter the tower. That means every climber now faces the same brutal choice: enter the tower before the limit runs out, or die before becoming a fallen. Seo Hyun watches foreign protests on the news and mutters that the whole world has become a mess. He cannot shake the ugly thought that if the tower wants chaos, then it is getting exactly what it wanted. As countries push for full identification of hidden climbers, the United States becomes the spark point for a much bigger political fight. US officials openly talk about using the crisis to tighten control over climbers before their growing power becomes impossible to manage. Climbers see those laws as a trap, especially when talk of wartime mobilization makes it look like the government wants a leash around their necks. The International Climber Association jumps in as the loudest shield for climber rights and digs in hardest against mandatory registration. From there the conflict spreads everywhere, turning into a nasty standoff between governments, the association, climbers, and ordinary citizens. Seo Hyun feels that uglier mood even inside the communication channel, where climbers are getting more openly hostile towards civilians. The media keeps dragging Person 123's name into the fight, with both sides trying to claim his example for themselves. Whispers keep flooding in, asking him to take the climber's side, but Seo Hyun hates the idea of treating this like a simple team sport. Bylan tells him either camp wants to back down, because the government has public anger while the association still holds the tower and the magic stones. When Bylan adds that the association president has even floated stopping climbs, Seo Hyun starts worrying this could spiral into something truly catastrophic. Fed up, he starts writing a neutral message asking everyone to stop dragging his name into the mess. Then he stops, realizes that polite words will do nothing, and decides that if he steps in at all, he has to make it hurt. Seo Hyun rewrites the post to demand compromise from both sides and warns that if they fail to settle soon, he will not attempt floor 4. He knows it is basically blackmail with humanity's lifeline, but he is too disgusted to keep watching everyone tear each other apart. The post hits like a bomb, and in an American newsroom a reporter proudly brings in a savage anti-Person 123 headline. The department head immediately shuts him down and orders a total rewrite with not one negative word about Person 123. He makes it plain that attacking the man who has saved the world could get them both buried if it pushes him to quit climbing. After the reporter leaves, the department head realizes negative coverage of Person 123 is being quietly buried across the American media. He quickly pieces together why no one at the top can afford a PR war against the man holding the world's remaining time. He is almost unnerved by it. One hard word from Person 123, and the people at the top of the world are suddenly holding their breath. The communication channel explodes too, because even by Person 123's standards this is the most openly forceful thing he has ever said. A few climbers grumble that he should have backed their side, but the backlash against those complaints is immediate and overwhelming. Since the association had also been steering opinion on the channel, it scrambles to keep the mood firmly pro-Person 123 before anything turns against him. Among the wider public, almost nobody dares attack him either, because he has spent years saving humanity without asking for anything back. That fear flips the pressure onto the governments and the association instead, with people demanding they settle before more lives are put at risk. Behind closed doors in Washington, the association president and the White House chief of staff finally line up a compromise. The terms are blunt. The association will swallow mandatory registration, and the rest of the government's harder control plans stop there. Both sides walk away satisfied enough, because the government confirmed Person 123 is neutral, and the association reminded everyone how much power climbers still hold. Watching the uproar from home, Seo Hyun feels uneasy because he never meant to truly abandon the tower, only to scare them into calming down. He worries for a moment that even this might fail, until Bylan sends word that quiet negotiations are already moving fast. The bigger surprise is that he can barely find any hostile coverage about himself at all, which leaves him honestly baffled. Then things get even stranger when Seo Hyun spots a street protest by the Person 123 church demanding everyone obey his will and reach a deal. His shock spikes when he recognizes one of the protesters as Gio, an older university friend he never expected to see in something this bizarre. Gio excitedly explains that the church is not weird at all to her, because Person 123 is humanity's real savior and worth believing in. When Seo Hyun dryly points out that this sounds exactly like a cult, Gio snaps back that it cannot be a cult if the man they worship is actually saving the world. She even tries to recruit him on the spot, and Seo Hyun has to refuse while hiding just how surreal this feels. Soon after, the news confirms Bylan's prediction. The US government and the Climber Association have reached an agreement, and other countries start following suit. For the moment, the political standoff finally winds down, and the world looks like it might return to a rough kind of order. But Seo Hyun ends on the ugly truth that nothing fundamental has changed. Every year, the people who refuse to climb will still have to die or become monsters. On a rare family outing, Seo Hyun loads up food at a crowded weekend buffet while his mother asks him to grab more sushi. His sister keeps coming back with nothing but snow crab, proudly insisting that if she is at a buffet, she is eating the most expensive thing there. Their sibling bickering keeps going when Seo Hyun jokes that he can barely tell premium crab from fake crab sticks, and Seo A calls his taste cheap. As the meal settles down, Seo Hyun's father asks how work is going, and Seo Hyun calmly answers that he is still just farming repeat clears on the easy first floor. His father follows up with practical worries about new climber health insurance, and Seo Hyun reassures him that he is already handling it. Seo A abruptly tries to turn the moment to her advantage and asks her brother for a new phone as a birthday present, but he shuts her down and tells her to focus on the crab. Watching his family relax, Seo Hyun reflects that this plain everyday happiness is exactly why he keeps risking his life in the tower. The thought turns bitter for a moment as he remembers that his yearly fight for survival now decides humanity's fate too, and the absurdity makes him laugh under his breath. When his sister asks why he is laughing, Seo Hyun instantly ruins the mood by comparing the way she eats crab to a cow chewing cud. By then, 6 months remained before Seo Hyun would have to challenge the 4th floor. Time races from there into early autumn, and Seo Hyun suddenly finds himself with barely 2 months left before the Nightmare deadline forces his next entry. The Nightmare roster has grown past 20 and become more international, but the United States and China are still the ones chasing hardest right behind him after clearing the 3rd floor. Then the world starts seriously talking about nominating Person 123 for the Nobel Peace Prize, and Seo Hyun can only laugh at how unreal that sounds. He admits to himself that the honor is deserved, but the idea is still ridiculous when nobody even knows his real identity. Instead of fading out as gossip, the news becomes official and the Nobel Committee publicly awards the Peace Prize to the anonymous hero Person 123. The committee goes so far as to say the whole world effectively nominated him, and will hold the medal and prize money in trust until he shows up in person. Seo Hyun takes the shock with a helpless little victory pose in private, because winning the Nobel Peace Prize is impressive even if he cannot tell anyone. In a private chat, Chicken Sandwich warns that the world is also trying to bind Person 123 tighter with responsibility, afraid he could change his mind about saving them. Seo Hyun is not offended, because he knows their fear is natural even if he is climbing the tower for his own survival too. As the 4th floor approaches, the old familiar anxiety returns, and Seo Hyun faces the countdown wondering if he can survive again. He pushes those thoughts down the only way he can, by turning back to training and grinding his skills harder. A red point blooms above the ground and expands into a burning circle as Seo Hyun tests his new rare plus skill, Scorching Zone. The undead that wander into the field ignite and collapse, proving the skill has both solid damage and a wide area. Seo Hyun realizes this skill did not come from Bylan at all, but from pushing Flame Strike all the way to +5. The final enhancement did not strengthen Flame Strike directly, and instead rewarded him with a random higher tier skill in the same category. Because that hidden mechanic could help everyone, Seo Hyun immediately posts the information to the communication channel instead of hoarding it. That choice also confirms he made the right gamble by pouring all his enhancement stones into Flame Strike instead of spreading them around. For Seo Hyun, the best part is that Scorching Zone is his first true sustained magic skill, something he can effectively keep running forever with his willpower tricks. Since the 4th floor is likely fire-themed, he quietly feels like he just drew a very good hand before the next climb. Bylan's support over the past year has also quietly stacked up, giving Seo Hyun new defensive and utility options before floor 4. Skin Hardening stands out the most, because another sustained skill with low drain fits Seo Hyun's style perfectly even if floor 4 may not reward raw defense. The burn resistance, frost shot, and a ring that speeds willpower recovery are less exciting, but he still adds them to the pile because every edge matters now. With all of that gathered together, Seo Hyun reviews his level and pack skill list, measuring himself against the floor waiting ahead. He even looks up at Dial and half jokes, half begs for another emergency ability to awaken when things get bad again. Dial gives him the same indifferent response as always, even though Seo Hyun has diligently taken him out every night for a full year. Still, Dial's concealment has stretched to about 15 minutes, so Seo Hyun keeps trusting that another hidden ability will appear when he needs it most. After another repeat clear, Seo Hyun summons Ply and goes straight into close sparring to keep his body instincts sharp without relying only on skills. When the training ends and he steps back into real life, Seo Hyun finds his family in the living room watching news about massive prayer gatherings for person 123. Seo wonders if their family should go out and join the crowd, but their mother refuses, worried that a gathering that huge could turn dangerous fast. Hearing that, Seo Hyun grimly understands the other side of it too, because a crowd praying for his success could become utter chaos if he fails. His sister notices he is about to travel again and scolds him to pray properly, not knowing that the man carrying that burden is standing right in front of her. Seo Hyun keeps that irony to himself, because he has already been praying every day for exactly one thing: to stay alive in the tower. He sticks to his annual routine anyway, planning one last short trip before entering floor 4 to steady his nerves. Another news segment reminds him how dark the wider world has become, announcing procedures for non-climbing climbers who must either enter the tower or consent to euthanasia. The report makes clear why the policy is so brutal. Even the dead may become fallen, so bodies are cremated to stop another outbreak before it starts. Seo Hyun forces himself to stop dwelling on that horror, because his own clear is close enough now to swallow every other worry. A few days later, he follows his old ritual to the letter, hiding a written will in his room before slinging on his backpack and heading out. By October 22nd, the whole world has reached that restless final day when everyone knows tomorrow will decide whether civilization survives one more time. Then people everywhere suddenly stop in the middle of their day and stare into empty air as a mysterious message appears before every human on Earth, not just climbers. At the same time, Seo Hyun is in a Jeju Island hotel after a day of enjoying his trip, relaxing with a beer while the nightmare window shows just over 21 days left before his forced floor 4 entry. He has already planned tomorrow down to the last step, with one final hike up Halasan before returning to the hotel to prepare for entry. That quiet break snaps apart when a new message appears and the tower addresses person 123 directly with an unexpected proposal. He slowly lowers the can and stares at the message in disbelief, because this is nothing like the usual tower notices. The proposal offers a brutal trade. If person 123 accepts one penalty and enters floor 4, the death rule for climbers who fail to enter within 3 years will be erased. The penalties are severe in different ways, from halved physical ability and doubled cooldowns to losing random skills, losing his best skill, or being barred from items entirely. The tower makes one last condition clear. The penalty would only last for the first conquest of floor 4, and now the choice is in Seo Hyun's hands. Cho Won-young lives under one brutal deadline. Her daughter was chosen as a nightmare climber on her 15th birthday, and now the girl is nearing the end of the 3-year limit. The cruelty hits harder because the girl had already survived years of osteosarcoma treatment, only to be handed an even worse nightmare right after beating cancer. Even as a middle schooler, her daughter tried to comfort her first, joking that she would just spend her remaining years having fun instead of worrying. So Cho Won-young forced herself to smile too and spent the time they had left making happy memories with the only family she had left. When the end drew close, mother and daughter chose euthanasia over entering nightmare, because they believed the tower offered no real chance, and only a more painful death. The world kept panicking over person 123 on TV, but none of that felt real to Cho Won-young compared to losing her daughter in a few weeks. Late one night, Cho Won-young finally heard the truth her daughter had been hiding. Behind the brave face, the girl was terrified and sobbing that she did not want to die. At that point the mother could only break down too, pulling her daughter into her arms as they cried together. The day before the deadline, Cho Won-young watched her daughter eat dinner and tried to wear one last weak smile for her sake. Then a new message suddenly appeared before both of them. The tower was making a proposal to person 123. Seo Hyun is just as blindsided, staring at the proposal in disbelief and wondering why the tower is suddenly targeting him now. The offer is simple and vicious. If he accepts one penalty and enters floor 4, the tower will erase the 3-year death rule. When Seo Hyun reads the penalties, his first reaction is pure disgust because every option is severe enough to wreck a nightmare run. He immediately rules out losing half his physical ability as a serious contender and moves on with a frustrated grimace. Doubling cooldowns looks fatal to him too, since he fights mainly as a magic type and depends on skill rotation. The random skill ban feels even worse because if the tower can choose the draw, then random might just mean rigged. Banning his highest grade skill basically means losing Destruction Ray, the finisher that has saved him again and again. The item ban feels brutal too, because even if floor 4 might let him survive without Dial, losing Ply would still hurt badly. What bothers him most is the tower itself. This proposal feels less like a system notice and more like something with intent trying to interfere. He checks the communication channel, then turns on the TV and realizes this is not private at all because the whole world can see the proposal. Once the notice goes public, the communication channel explodes with climbers asking if this bizarre proposal is even real. Very quickly, the channel's consensus hardens. Person 123 absolutely should not take a penalty when all humanity is hanging on floor 4. On international news panels, experts say the tower timed this on purpose to sabotage person 123 right before his floor 4 attempt. Their argument is cold but clear. With 8 billion lives at stake, nobody can reasonably ask him to lower his odds just to save a much smaller group. The only people begging for the penalty are nightmare climbers facing imminent death and the families desperate to keep them alive. Even that turns ugly fast, with bystanders shouting that asking for a penalty is selfish if it might doom the world. As the chaos drags on, the nightmare window keeps ticking down with 183,157 participants, and only a little time left before the 20-day deadline. Seo Hyun spends the whole day circling the same rational answer: do not pick a penalty. He reminds himself why that answer makes sense, because nightmare is already lethal enough and failing floor 4 means the end of humanity. Even after weighing the lives saved, the fallen problem, and his own family, he still knows the numbers say no penalty. But logic does not settle his heart, so he sits there with something heavy lodged in his chest while the world screams around him. The TV keeps replaying the split reaction outside, endless warnings not to accept, and equally desperate families begging him to do it anyway. Bylan also tells him not to feel guilty, insisting this is the tower's trick and that refusing the penalty is still the choice that saves humanity. When Seo Hyun asks if Bylan wants him to refuse too, Bylan hesitates and finally says he will respect whatever choice Seo Hyun makes. With the deadline almost gone, Seo Hyun shuts off the TV, puts on all his gear, and stands in the middle of the room to make the call. He looks at the 5 penalties one last time and tells himself the whole thing feels like the tower is trying to put its ace in check. He opens the normal floor 4 entry prompt instead, ready to ignore the proposal and enter without accepting anything. But at the last second he freezes, because even knowing none of this is his fault does not stop him from hearing the people who will die if he walks away. He gives a small bitter laugh, admits the choice is insane, and realizes that just this once he wants to act like the savior everyone keeps calling him. So Seo Hyun raises his finger toward the penalty menu and finally makes his choice. Meanwhile, Cho Won-young joins a street rally of families like hers and screams for person 123 to choose a penalty, even knowing it is a selfish hope. Afterward she goes home drained, holding her daughter close while the TV countdown ticks through the last few minutes. She knows the right answer for the world is no penalty, but in that last moment she still prays for one miracle just for her child. Then the system announces that person 123 accepted the proposal and selected a penalty, and that the 3-year death rule has been nullified. Mother and daughter can only stare at the message in stunned silence, too overwhelmed to even react right away. In his dark office, Bylan sees the same message, exhales heavily, and quietly asks Seo Hyun to survive the choice he made. At the tower monitoring division, Kang Joo-hyuk goes still with noodles hanging mid-bite, while Shin Soo-jin clenches her fist and silently prays Seo Hyun comes back alive. Across the news, there is no need to explain the result because everyone in the world has already seen it for themselves. On Gwangwoman Street, the first reaction is a wave of gasps and groans from the massive crowd packed together under the shock of his decision. Then one person starts praying, others follow, and the whole street falls into a deep hush as the world waits for person 123's fate. Seo Hyun steps into Nightmare Floor 4, instantly freezes time, and studies a workshop-like arena with a raised wall and a long zigzag path running from a loading bay entrance to an exit. He steadies himself and accepts that his chosen penalty was worth it, because keeping his skills and pligas mattered more than keeping his own physical strength. When he releases time, the penalty hits at once and a rush of weakness drains through his body. A crackling workshop announcement warns that berserk golems are coming, and Seo Hyun watches the blue signal over the entrance, knowing one escapee means total failure and a deadly incineration countdown. He quickly frames the floor like a tower defense map. The golems will only march forward, so his job is to kill every one of them before they reach the exit. Not trusting Nightmare at all, he moves to the start of the path and summons Pligas, planning for her to hold the line while he attacks from the wall with magic. The entrance light turns red, the first white golem steps out, and Pligas instantly pounces. To Seo Hyun's surprise, Pligas smashes the first stage golems apart so easily that he never even gets a chance to cast. Stage 1 ends after just 5 white golems, leaving only rubble and cores on the path. During the break, Seo Hyun searches the workshop for Nightmare's hidden trick, already convinced the floor is being too straightforward to trust. Stage 2 starts, and 10 more white golems pour out only to get spawn killed by Pligas all over again. Stage 3 raises the count to 20, but Pligas still crushes them without real trouble, which only makes Seo Hyun more suspicious. Instead of a clear message, the workshop announces a new enemy type, blue golems that ignore almost all physical damage. Pligas hits the first blue golem and finally fails to break it, proving this wave is built to shut her down. Seo Hyun pulls Pligas back and blasts the blue golems apart with Flame Strike, immediately confirming that magic works where brute force does not. He adapts fast, using Pligas as a living roadblock so the harmless blue golems bunch up, then wiping the cluster with each Flame Strike cooldown. The next blue stages, including 10 and then 20 golems, fall to the same combo, and Seo Hyun starts saving Destruction Ray for whatever comes later. Then the announcement flips the rule again. Red golems are almost immune to magic damage, with magic mostly useless. Pligas takes over again and tears through the red golems by raw force, though these are tougher than the earlier white ones. By the final red wave, Seo Hyun drops onto the path to help, only to learn just how badly the 50% physical penalty has crippled his own melee attacks. He switches roles again, using his skills for knockback instead of damage while Pligas finishes the red golems one by one. After clearing stage 9, Seohyun feels more uneasy than before, because this still looks like a blunt stat check instead of the kind of hidden trap Nightmare usually hides. He checks every obvious lead and gets nowhere, because the exit would trigger incineration, and even approaching the entrance during a wave sets off his danger sense. Then the next announcement finally makes the floor look truly ugly. Black golems ignore any attack that does not hit a high enough damage threshold. The first black golem shrugs off Pligas' opening strike, and only her full-on mauling starts to crack it. Seohyun tests Flame Strike on another black golem, and even that heavy hit fails to one-shot it, which tells him the stage has turned dangerous fast. He tries Scorching Zone and weaker attacks next, only to watch the black golems walk straight through them with almost no effect. After confirming that only concentrated Flame Strike, Pligas going all out, and probably Destruction Ray can really hurt them, he stops time to work out the math. He grinds through the first black wave of 5, spending 2 flame strikes per target, and barely finishing the last golem before it gets too far down the track. During the short break, he calculates that 10 black golems are barely possible, but 20 will force him to bunch them up and fire Destruction Ray through the line. Even while planning the brute force answer, Seohyun keeps scanning the workshop and growing more convinced that he is still missing the real gimmick. Stage 11 throws 10 black golems at him, and he and Pligas barely hold them back long enough to kill the last one in the 4th stretch. Knowing 20 will break them if they fight normally, Seohyun orders Pligas to stop trying to kill and focus only on blocking, shoving, and buying space. Stage 12 begins, and the 20 black golems immediately turn into a brutal pushing match as Pligas tries to topple them, and the line simply keeps grinding forward. Seohyun burns through every skill he can just to slow the mass down, because if Pligas gets reverse summoned from the damage, the run is over. The defense collapses stretch by stretch, and at one point Seohyun nearly gets crushed between the black golems before teleporting out at the last second. After 2 agonizing minutes, all 20 black golems are finally on the field, and Seohyun keeps retreating until he packs almost the whole wave onto one straight stretch. The instant the lineup is perfect, he pulls Pligas back, freezes time, and commits to a full-power Destruction Ray on the clustered black golems. Destruction Ray punches straight through the entire line, leaving every surviving black golem with a hole blown clean through its chest. The whole line collapses in sequence. Stage 12 finally ends, and Seohyun can only breathe out in relief for a moment. Relief quickly turns back into dread, because there is still no clear message, and Seohyun is now sure he has been overlooking something important. His attention snags on a strange detail in the wreckage. The black golem bodies were pierced by Destruction Ray, but their chest cores are still lying there intact. He walks over and touches one core, and instead of breaking, it melts away into a reward notice that says he just gained 200 points. A hidden floor 4 shop window bursts open in front of him, and Seohyun finally finds the first real clue that this nightmare was never just about smashing golems. Seohyun finally stares at the system window long enough to realize floor 4 was a tower defense stage all along, and the answer hits him so hard he can only laugh. He realizes the earlier waves were never meant to be brute forced, and all the vanished wreckage means he already lost 11 stages worth of points. Trying to calm down, he studies the shop and sees damage boosts, control tools, attribute conversion, and a suspiciously expensive special gacha. The red and blue counter item turns out to be useless for him now, but the cheap corridor control skills immediately catch his attention. He buys his first magic damage upgrade, then notices the price rises after purchase, which means scaling damage will cost more and more. An announcement warns that green golems revive once after destruction, so Seohyun holds back the rest of his points and decides to test the wave first. When the first green golem enters, he drops Scorching Zone at the entrance and blasts it with Flame Strike to see how the revive works. Pligas finishes the nearly broken golem, and Seohyun watches the shattered body rise and rebuild itself exactly as advertised. Once he understands the pattern, Seohyun and Pligas wipe out the whole green golem wave without much trouble. He gathers the new cores and realizes the payout per golem has increased again, which makes the lost points from earlier feel even worse. With time stopped to think, he maps out the next waves and realizes Force Field could be absurdly efficient if it really blocks a whole corridor. He buys one more magic damage upgrade, clears the next 10 green golems smoothly, and confirms his raw firepower is scaling well. At stage 15, Seohyun commits to the cheap control plan because dumping everything into damage feels risky with the boss still probably waiting. He and Pligas physically stall the 20 green golems until they reach the end of Corridor 1, buying just enough time for the trap setup. His first force field snaps into place as a perfect blue wall, and the front golem slams into it without getting through. When the blocked lead golem stalls the whole wave behind it, Seohyun knows he found the floor's real exploit. A second cheap force field herds every golem neatly into Corridor 2, proving the disposable utility skill is far better than it looked. With the whole pack lined up, Destruction Ray punches through all of them at once and turns the stage into a clean farm. He repeats the force field trick for the revived wave and clears stage 15 for only a tiny point cost, which finally gives him a healthy stockpile. During the break, he finally opens the special gacha details and sees 3 possible pulls: a triple effect skill scroll, an ability nullifier, and a suicidal incineration button. The moment he starts reading, the next warning drops: yellow golems cannot be impeded, which instantly threatens his whole force field strategy. He tests it immediately, and a yellow golem shrugs off Plagueis' body check without losing even an inch. When even a freshly placed force field shatters the instant it touches the yellow golem, Siohyan accepts there are no shortcuts here. So he goes back to basics, hurling raw damage while Plagueis climbs onto the yellow golems and tears them down the hard way. The 5 yellow golem wave still falls cleanly, and the result tells him this new gimmick is annoying but not actually fatal yet. With time stopped again, he calmly works out that a few more damage boosts should carry him through the next 2 yellow stages without overspending Destruction Ray. He slaps himself back to full caution, reminding himself the real nightmare bullshit usually waits at the end. At stage 17, he buys 3 more magic damage upgrades in one go and commits to a straight damage build. The stronger firepower crushes 10 yellow golems, and Siohyan barely breaks rhythm doing it. Stage 18 goes the same way, with Destruction Ray erasing the first 5 and Siohyan cleaning up the remaining 15 by hand. After the clear, his points climb past 20,000, but the sheer length of the floor starts to feel ominous instead of reassuring. Then the workshop announces its greatest masterpiece is malfunctioning, and Siohyan instantly knows the boss has finally arrived. Heavy footsteps shake the corridor, and a giant 5-color golem lumbers out with every previous gimmick written right on its body. The announcement helpfully lists Titan's abilities one by one, and every line makes the situation worse: near total immunity, threshold immunity, 1 revive, and unstoppable movement. He immediately locks onto the only obvious answer, the ability nullification part from the special gacha, because without it Titan looks flat out invincible. He does the math in frozen time and realizes 4 pulls give him better than 80% odds, which sounds good until his life and the whole world are riding on the missing 20. He unfreezes time and spends the first 5,000 points, trusting that the game cannot seriously deny him the one item he needs. The painfully slow roulette lands on a skill effect 300% scroll instead, and the bad feeling hits immediately. He burns the second pull right away and gets another 300% scroll, which turns the tension from bad luck into real panic. The third pull spits out a grand incineration switch, and now he is down to one last chance with his nerves fraying apart. He freezes time, tries to calm his spinning head, and forces himself into the final roll because there is nothing else left to do. The last roulette lands on a third 300% scroll, and the one result he needed still never appears. He stops time again and just stares, unable to accept that an 80% chance somehow turned into total failure. For a moment he falls into raw despair, convinced the run is over and the world will end because one stupid 1 in 3 never came up. But once the shock settles, he forces himself to inspect the useless-looking rewards again in case one of them hides a way out. He briefly sees a path in stacking all 3 scrolls onto Destruction Ray, because the boost might punch through Titan's 99% magic immunity after all. That hope dies just as fast when he remembers Titan revives once and cannot be stopped long enough for a second Destruction Ray. Still desperate, he unfreezes time to test slow and stop anyway, but Titan ignores both and keeps stomping forward. He lashes out with Flame Strike and sends Plagueis in 2, but neither leaves a meaningful mark on the boss. Back in frozen time, Siohyan stares at the red switch and finally wonders whether the self-destruct item might kill Titan even if everything else fails. That thought leads him to his only real gamble. If he stacks all 3 300% scrolls on rapid regeneration, maybe he can survive the incineration a little longer than Titan can. He knows it sounds insane, but with no second option anywhere in sight, the insane plan becomes the only plan. He unfreezes time, scoops up the 3 scrolls, and tears them one after another into rapid regeneration. With the boss closing in, he grips the incineration switch and quietly braces for the kind of pain he already knows is going to be awful. He summons Dial for one last hopeless check, but the answer on that face is basically pity, so Siohyan sends him back at once. Now fully alone with the choice, Siohyan faces Titan head-on, laughs like a man with nothing left, and decides they can die together if they have to. He presses the button, and the workshop's ceiling opens to reveal a monstrous incineration apparatus aimed straight down at both of them. Siohyan's danger sense screams, so he instantly fires up the 27 times boosted rapid regeneration and starts piling on every defense he can think of. In a frantic burst of prep, he freezes time, restores willpower, hardens his skin, wraps himself in Plagueis, and even coats himself in ice before the flames arrive. The grand incineration hits like instant annihilation, vaporizing Plagueis and the ice shell in one blast and dropping Siohyan into pure, unbearable agony. He pauses time just to escape the pain for a second, shocked by how far beyond broken bones and arrows this fire really is. Realizing pausing only drags the torture out, he forces time forward again and endures being burned to ash and regrown over and over inside the flames. Through the haze, he sees Titan melt down, spend its 1 revival, and then fail to survive the inferno a second time. When the clear message finally appears in front of his half-broken mind, Siohyan can only laugh because the impossible plan actually worked. The system starts absorbing the floor's power, His levels surge upward, and the tower confirms he was the first person to clear Nightmare Floor 4. At the very end, the tower opens Floor 4's hidden route and pulls Seo Hyun away to the reward room. Seo Hyun jolts awake in the reward room, gasping and frantically checking his body after barely surviving the boss fight. Once he realizes his wounds are gone, Seo Hyun drops flat on his back and admits the fire pain felt like being thrown into hell. The system immediately confirms the 4F clear on all difficulties and announces a nasty new rule: 5 sub-towers will start appearing around the world every 7 days. Annoyed and still recovering, Seo Hyun curses the tower and suspects it replaced the old 3-year death rule with another disaster the moment he broke it. His body is healed, but the memory of burning alive still leaves him shaking badly enough that he can barely steady his hands. Remembering the hidden reward from Floor 3, Seo Hyun pulls out the celestial music box and tries it as a last resort for his nerves. The soft melody actually works, and Seo Hyun sits there letting the music calm him until his willpower runs dry. After the mental reset, Seo Hyun stands again and checks the payoff from the clear. He sees he jumped 10 levels to 55, and a quick test punch rips the air so hard it makes him realize how much stronger he has become. The reward floor only gives him 2 rare plus skill enhancement stones, but now that he knows a plus 5 skill can evolve, he considers that a very good pull. Looking over his rare plus skills, Seo Hyun thinks teleportation is the practical choice but keeps getting pulled toward upgrading Sixth Sense instead. In the end, curiosity and survival instinct win, and he dumps both enhancement stones into Sixth Sense. The upgrade goes through, though Seo Hyun cannot feel the difference yet because Sixth Sense only shows itself when real danger appears. His nightmare window updates to Floor 5 with 283,157 participants and a fresh time extension, proving the world has bought itself another year. That relief quickly turns into suspicion as Seo Hyun wonders whether the tower has been openly trying to kill him, from the penalty offered to the rigged feeling gacha. He talks himself into a colder conclusion: if the tower truly had unlimited control, it could have killed him cleanly, so it probably has rules of its own. Even so, Seo Hyun ends on one blunt truth: the tower really does want him dead, and he mocks it before choosing to leave. Outside the tower, the whole world waits in tense silence, knowing person 123 must be fighting Floor 4 right after accepting the penalty. As the minutes drag past the usual clear time, climbers cling to the communication channel, while ordinary people can only panic harder. After more than an hour, fear starts spilling into open shouting, with some people declaring it over and others angrily telling them to keep praying. Then a few climbers spot the clear message first, and their stunned cries ignite the entire crowd. The streets erupt in joy when the news spreads that Floor 4 was cleared and humanity survived another year. Even the new sub-tower rule gets brushed aside for the moment because the world is too busy chanting person 123's name. In his office, Bylan Must finally lets himself laugh and admits Seo Hyun made the choice even a high-risk man like him would never have dared. Bylan quietly celebrates his partner's safe return, now fully awed by how much Seo Hyun risked to save every last person. At the tower monitoring division, Shin Soo-jin blurts out a triumphant yes the instant the clear message appears. Embarrassed by her own outburst, she tries to play it cool, while Kang Joo-hyuk just stares in admiration at a man who cleared Nightmare after taking a crippling penalty. Shin Soo-jin keeps the rest to herself, but inside she is simply relieved that Seo Hyun came back alive again. In a dim cathedral packed tighter than before, a preacher declares that person 123 accepted heavy shackles and threw himself into hell rather than abandon even one life. The believers openly weep and answer him with devotion, convinced the tower's tricks can never stop their savior. When the prayer ends, the whole cathedral breaks into cheers, and that night person 123's name keeps ringing out across the world. Seo Hyun himself gets a much less dramatic ending. The moment he gets out, he blacks out on his bed and sleeps until deep in the night. He wakes hungry, orders room service, and enjoys a steak so much it feels like pure heaven after surviving another floor. The next day at home, every TV channel is still praising person 123 for erasing the 3-year death rule, and one broadcast features Cho Won-young tearfully thanking him for saving her sick daughter's life. Seo Hyun gets second-hand embarrassment from the grateful interview and changes the channel, only to hear his sister complain from off-panel right away. His sister fires back from nearby, saying any decent person should be grateful to the hero keeping the world alive, while Seo Hyun takes it with dry disbelief. She keeps scolding him for disappearing on trips around this time every year instead of staying home to pray, and Seo Hyun silently takes the hit. Seo Hyun gets a little irritated, but he also admits to himself that from his family's side, his yearly pre-clear ritual must look pretty strange. Then Seo Hyun decides to tease his sister, and casually offers to pass along a thank you message to person 123 through the climber's communication channel. His sister sounds skeptical but tempted, and Seo Hyun keeps selling it by saying whispers always pop up whether the receiver likes it or not. Trying very hard to sound proper, his sister awkwardly delivers a formal thank you to person 123 while Seo Hyun sits beside her trying not to laugh. Seo Hyun finally cracks up laughing, and his sister's embarrassed outrage hits him from off-panel immediately. After enjoying the joke, Seo Hyun hands the remote back and starts clearing away the empty plates because he still has real work waiting. A sub-tower countdown keeps hovering in Seo Hyan's vision, but since he cannot prepare for an unknown threat yet, he returns to the one job he can do now. Right after lunch settles, Seo Hyan re-enters Nightmare Floor 4 to chase the hidden route on a repeat clear. As the workshop announcement about malfunctioning golems starts up again, he thinks ahead about how hard this floor will be to explain to other climbers. He realizes the floor is not just expensive but partly luck-based, because no careful strategy matters if the ability nullification part never drops. When the gate opens, he summons Ply and lets the familiar auto-hunt start, while he puts the info post problem aside. Ply tears through the early waves so easily that Seo Hyan clears stages 1 through 3 almost without lifting a finger. For the blue golems that shrug off physical attacks, Seo Hyan steps in with magic and blasts through stages 4 to 6 himself. For the red golems that resist magic, he lets Ply handle the fighting and spends points on physical damage buffs to test the theory. The test works exactly the way he hoped. The workshop's physical damage upgrade boosts Ply's hits too, not just Seo Hyan's own attacks. By the time the black golems appear, Seo Hyan is strong enough to jump in personally and split them open with his fists. He keeps spending to a minimum and clears the remaining waves cleanly, reaching the final boss with far more breathing room than last time. When the workshop warns that its masterpiece is malfunctioning, Seo Hyan opens the shop and sees he has 35,500 points, enough for 7 gacha rolls this time. He remembers how the first clear nearly killed him when the gacha refused to give ability nullification, but with 7 chances now he dares the tower to try that again. The tower answers with maximum spite, because the ability nullification part drops on the very first roll this time. Half laughing and fully irritated, Seo Hyan grabs the part and moves before the boss can do anything unexpected. He leaps onto the boss's shoulder and slaps the part onto its body, where it locks in place with a spark. One test punch is enough to confirm it worked, because a real crack finally appears in the boss's head. Seo Hyan jumps clear, coldly says farewell to the monster he once had to burn with, and lines up the finishing shot. He freezes time, focuses his mind, and fires a full-power destruction ray straight through the boss's torso. With its 99% immunity gone, the final boss topples in one shot exactly as Seo Hyan expected. The entrance slams shut and the announcements stop, leaving Seo Hyan in a suddenly quiet workshop with the hidden route finally in reach. Since the sealed entrance leaves only the exit, Seo Hyan cautiously steps past it, testing whether the incineration trap still responds now that every golem is dead. Nothing happens, and beyond the exit he finds a pitch-dark corridor stretching deeper into the hidden area. Using Dial's vision to cut through the dark, he moves carefully through twisting branches and stairways, guessing the hidden must be deeper inside the workshop itself. At the top of an upward staircase, Seo Hyan reaches an iron door and quietly pushes it open. On the other side, the hidden suddenly looks less like a dungeon and more like a working research facility. Voices drift around the corner, and just before the speakers arrive, Seo Hyan slips into concealment. 2 researchers in white lab coats walk into view talking calmly about the golem incident and an experiment called DF5, proving Seo Hyan has reached the real hidden zone. Still hidden by concealment, Seo Hyan slips through a corridor full of white-coated researchers and realizes this hidden stage feels less like a dungeon and more like a modern high-tech facility. Because he stands out among the staff and cannot keep concealment up forever, Seo Hyan listens for clues and gets nothing useful beyond boring research talk and lunch chatter. The hallway suddenly changes mood when everyone bows to an elderly researcher with a monocle, and Seo Hyan immediately clocks him as someone important. When Iska pauses and looks straight at Seo Hyan's hidden position, Seo Hyan gets the jolt of realizing his supposedly perfect concealment has been pierced. Iska pretends nothing happened and keeps walking, so Seo Hyan decides that anyone who noticed him and did not raise the alarm is probably the route he is meant to follow. At a private room, Iska calmly tells the invisible intruder to come in, confirming that he saw Seo Hyan the whole time. Seo Hyan enters on guard, and inside the half-office half-lab he watches Iska close and lock the door behind them. When Iska asks if he plans to keep hiding, Seo Hyan drops concealment and confirms through sixth sense that the old man still carries no hostility. Iska tests him with names Seo Hyan does not recognize, then cuts to the point and asks whether he is an enemy of the workshop. Reading the strange tone, Seo Hyan gives a careful yes, and Iska pushes further by asking if destroying the workshop would also suit his purpose. After Seo Hyan nods again, Iska finally drops the mask and admits that he himself intends to blow up the floating workshop. Iska introduces himself as the senior researcher of the floating workshop and offers cooperation, but refuses to explain why he wants his own workplace destroyed. With no better lead and no safe way to refuse, Seo Hyan agrees to work with Iska and asks what exactly he needs done. Iska lays out the mission. Somewhere in Sector 1 is the Master Code, the workshop's highest authority, and Seo Hyan must steal the master key from the workshop master to reach it. The job sounds almost absurdly hard, but the quest-like structure feels enough like his earlier hidden stages that Seo Hyan starts trusting this is the intended route. When Seo Hyan asks how his concealment got exposed, Iska taps his monocle and says he alone in the workshop can see through that non-mana ability. Iska hands over a small copying device and explains that Seo Hyan must touch it to the capsule-like machine in the master code room until the light turns blue. Asked how to steal the key, Iska offers almost no help beyond one warning. The workshop master's personal bodyguard is a former imperial executor and a monster to avoid. To help him move openly, Iska gives Seo Hyun an apprentice researcher's ID and a white coat, turning the mission into a full infiltration job. Seo Hyun changes into the white coat as Iska adds one more hard rule. The master code refreshes every hour, so once copied it has to be delivered back before the next hour strikes. With a workshop map device in hand, Seo Hyun is sent back out alone to figure out the rest himself. Back in the corridor, Seo Hyun tests the disguise and is relieved when the passing researchers treat him like one of their own. He narrows the mission to 2 steps, decides to scout the master code room first, and starts making his way from Sector 6 towards Sector 1. On the way, Seo Hyun opens the shop and happily confirms that Floor 4 purchases still work here by buying another magic damage boost. After fumbling through the giant complex and switching elevators, Seo Hyun finally makes it outside the Sector 6 building. The moment he steps outside, the wind and the clouds hit him, and Seo Hyun realizes the floating workshop is not just a name at all. He stares over the edge in awe at the workshop flying like an island in the sky until a guard casually warns him not to stand so close. The romantic view lasts only a moment before a small airship lands nearby and its gust scatters another researcher's papers across the walkway. Seo Hyun helps the flustered researcher gather everything, and her grateful friendliness traps him in awkward small talk. The researcher introduces herself as Selona from Sector 3 and casually jokes that Sector 6 must be kinder than her own cold department. Their attention shifts when handcuffed prisoners start filing out of the landed airship under guard, and the scene turns ugly fast. When a terrified child stumbles, a guard kicks the kid back into line, and Seo Hyun's face hardens at the cruelty happening in plain sight. Selona, still cheerful, calls the prisoners this month's fuel, and in one chilling sentence the workshop reveals exactly how rotten it is. After Selona leaves, Seo Hyun stares between the airship and the prisoners, drops any romantic thoughts about this place, and refocuses on clearing the hidden stage. Following the connected passages at last, Seo Hyun reaches Sector 1 and moves near the master code room before slipping back into concealment. At the far end of an unusually long corridor, he finds the massive sealed door and a scanner beside it, with no guards in sight. Seeing the empty hall, Seo Hyun briefly thinks the mission might be simpler than expected once he gets the master key. Then he spots a possible shortcut and realizes teleportation might let him skip the locked door entirely if the room beyond has open space. He stops time, enters mental concentration, and fires off teleportation toward the room on the other side. Instead of slipping through, Seo Hyun slams into an invisible barrier, sparks explode, and the failed teleport hurls him backward. The corridor instantly floods red as sirens scream and the security system announces an intrusion and the start of incineration. As the ceiling opens and Sixth Sense screams that death is coming, Seo Hyun does not hesitate and slams the emergency tower exit to take the retry. Back in his room after a failed run, Seo Hyun realizes the master code room blocked teleportation and burns with annoyance over wasting an attempt just to learn that one rule. He dives straight into attempt 2 instead of sulking, determined to test a cleaner plan. After clearing the golems again, Seo Hyun gets lucky early and pulls the ability nullification part on his second special gotcha roll. He retraces the hidden stage route under concealment, calmly letting the familiar researcher chatter pass while he heads back to Iska. Since he already knows the old man's deal, Seo Hyun cuts straight to the point and asks Iska whether he truly wants the workshop destroyed. Iska answers without hesitation that he would love to see the whole place blown apart, so the two immediately lock onto the same side. Seo Hyun presses the question that ruined his first run, and Iska finally confirms the workshop's key facilities are protected by spatial coordinate distortion devices that shut down teleportation. Seo Hyun also asks about the prisoners, and Iska flatly reveals that some humans are burned as fuel while others are used as test subjects because souls produce huge amounts of mana. With the shortcut blocked, Seo Hyun leaves Iska and decides to try the orthodox route by finding the workshop master in Sector 1. In Sector 1, he quietly asks a kind-looking researcher where the workshop master is and learns the old man is at Demonstration Room 3 watching a mana core fishing demo. Following the map to Demonstration Room 3, Seo Hyun slips up to the entrance under concealment and finds guards blocking the closed door. Then the room finally opens, and among the white-coated researchers filing out, one white-haired old man in a suit stands out so clearly that Seo Hyun instantly knows he has found the workshop master. The real threat beside him is even clearer, a woman in a platinum suit, the exclusive bodyguard Iska warned about. Seo Hyun's strengthened sixth sense screams that the platinum-suited guard is monstrously strong, maybe even worse than the Black Knight he fought before. He edges closer anyway to scan the workshop master for the key, gambling that concealment will cover him. Before he gets too close, the bodyguard suddenly frowns and turns toward his hidden position, forcing Seo Hyun to back off fast. She does not expose him, but Seo Hyun realizes her instincts can still catch him if he gets too close. That kills his clean theft plan, so Seo Hyun retreats outside and sits on a bench to think through a problem that suddenly feels much more like a nasty puzzle than a simple stealth job. He runs through bad ideas one by one, from waiting for the bodyguard to separate to blasting her outright, but none of them feel like a real answer. Still bothered that every easy route feels deliberately sealed, Seo Hyun decides to poke at the shortcut angle one more time and goes back to Iska. Back in Sector 6, he asks Iska whether the distortion system can be shut off temporarily instead of bypassed. This time Iska gives him something useful: smash the central mana circuit in Sector 1's control room, and the master code room's anti-teleport distortion will go offline too. When Seo Hyun asks if that would let him teleport in during the chaos, Iska admits it would work in theory but doubts one person can sabotage the sector and complete the theft alone. Seo Hyun recovers his drained strength from staying concealed and heads straight for Sector 1 with a split-roll plan in mind. At the sealed control room door, he summons Pligas and orders the brute force opening. Pligas body slams the sealed doors off their hinges, exposing the control room staff and machinery in one violent hit. The room erupts into panic as staff scream, alarms blare, and guards flood the corridor toward the breach. Following Iska's instructions, Seo Hyun has Pligas destroy the bamboo shoot-shaped central mana circuit first before rampaging any further. The instant the key device shatters, Seo Hyun abandons the distraction and sprints for the master code room before the opening closes. Pligas disappears sooner than Seo Hyun hoped, but by then Seo Hyun has already reached the master code room door. He tries teleportation again, and this time the spell goes through cleanly because the distortion field is down. Inside the room at last, Seo Hyun finds the capsule-like storage machine and immediately slaps Iska's copy tool onto it. The side gauge starts filling, and Seo Hyun waits with rising irritation when the copying drags past the minute Iska promised. At last the light turns blue, confirming the master code is copied and giving Seo Hyun his chance to escape before the systems recover. He teleports back out, slips through the uproar in Sector 1 under concealment, and heads all the way to Sector 6 with the mission apparently complete. Once he reaches an empty stretch of corridor, he drops concealment and casually walks like an ordinary researcher again. Iska is openly surprised when Seo Hyun returns with the blue-lit tool, proof that the master code copy really worked. But the clear notice still does not appear, so when Seo Hyun asks what comes next, Iska simply tells him to follow. Iska leads him downstairs into the basement of Sector 6, toward a hidden room behind another long security corridor. Inside the hidden lab, Seo Hyun finds rows of colored golems waiting beside a huge machine built around an enormous core. Iska activates the golems with a controller, and sends them marching out into the corridor, as if he is unleashing a prepared final move. Then he plugs the copied master code into the central machine and starts rerouting the workshop's mana into his masterpiece core. The machine authorizes the highest circuit control, and the charge races upwards so fast that the core starts glowing with violent power. Iska finally explains the whole plan. The orichalcum core can hold the workshop's entire mana supply, and once it hits 70% he will detonate it and blow the place apart. Seo Hyun immediately asks the obvious question about not dying in the blast, and Iska hands him a globe-like warp device set to trigger 10 minutes after the charge reaches the threshold. For a moment it looks perfect as the charge climbs through the 30s and 40s toward the goal. Then the charge stops dead at 50.5%, and Iska's face hardens as he realizes the workshop shut down its mana circuit in response to Seo Hyun's earlier sabotage. Iska gives the ugly verdict: without reaching 70%, the overload reaction will not happen at all, so the destruction plan is dead. He tells Seo Hyun to stay hidden and at least escape when the warp device activates, but Seo Hyun is too frustrated to let it end there. Seo Hyun pushes back with a new angle, asking whether the core could be charged directly by pouring magic into it. Iska says the idea is technically possible but mocks the scale of it, warning that even an archmage could not casually make up the missing percentage. That should have been the end, but Seo Hyun suddenly remembers his shop, his gacha scrolls, and the one skill powerful enough to gamble on, Destruction Ray. He uses the one 300% scroll he already had on Destruction Ray and commits to burning the rest of his points on 5 more pulls. The first extra pull drops another 300% scroll immediately, and Iska can only stare as Seo Hyun's bizarre method starts working. Then a second scroll drops, and Seo Hyun keeps shushing Iska and stacking the multiplier higher. A third pull lands another identical scroll, and the run starts feeling unreal even to Seo Hyun. The fourth pull hits the same jackpot, pushing the build into ridiculous territory, and when the fifth pull somehow drops one more 300% scroll, Seo Hyun feels the rush of impossible gacha luck hit all at once. After all 6 scroll applications, Seo Hyun has multiplied Destruction Ray to a monstrous 729 times and turns to the core with a single sharp warning for Iska to move back. He freezes time, focuses his mind, and fires a full-charge Destruction Ray straight into the orichalcum core. The charge rockets past the failed target in seconds, blowing through 70% and surging all the way to 100 while the whole lab starts shaking. Even after the display maxes out, the beam keeps going, and Iska finally snaps out of his shock long enough to scream for Seo Hyun to stop. The Destruction Ray finally dies down before the core ruptures, leaving the machine blazing like a tiny sun at a full 100% charge. Seo Hyun asks the simple question anyway, and a stunned, breathless Iska admits the impossible worked. With the core finally filled to 100%, Iska starts the fusion reaction and threads of light begin wrapping around it. Iska thanks Seo Hyun, says the process can finish safely now, and warns that the lab will explode in exactly 8 minutes. Seo Hyun checks his warp device and realizes he only needs to stay hidden a little longer to escape cleanly. When Seo Hyun asks if someone could still stop the blast, Iska calmly says the reaction has already passed the point of no return. Seo Hyun asks about Iska's escape, but Iska makes it clear he never planned to leave this place alive. Iska opens the laboratory door and tells Seo Hyun not to worry about him, calling himself another researcher with plenty of blood on his hands. Before leaving, Seo Hyun stops and asks the real reason Iska decided to destroy the workshop. Iska starts with a strange question about raising a dog, and Seo Hyun is left completely thrown by it. In a flat voice, Iska admits he spent his life on Manhwa research while test subjects were broken down and thrown away once they stopped being useful. Then he reveals the one case that stayed with him, a small war orphan who smiled at him after a little kindness because the experiments needed cooperation. Iska says the child grew attached to him during the long experiments, and he treated that bond like keeping a pet dog. When the experiments were nearly done, the child was marked for disposal too, and Iska's attempt to save them was rejected. The child died, the research succeeded anyway, and Iska climbed to wealth and honors so high that he could have founded his own workshop. In the end, Iska says he simply got tired of all of it, and even now he cannot fully explain his own revenge. Seo Hyun bluntly sums it up as revenge for a test subject he cared about, and Iska half accepts the answer with a bitter joke about a single dog. Seo Hyun answers with the story of another man who destroyed an organization over a dog, then points out that Iska could just admit the kid mattered to him. That lands harder than anything else, and Iska looks genuinely shaken as Seo Hyun notices the timer has nearly run out. Seo Hyun says his goodbye, and Iska quietly tells him to make it out safely. Once Seo Hyun steps out, Iska seals the lab behind him and leaves 2 golems standing guard at the entrance. Hearing the guards rushing in, Seo Hyun activates concealment and flattens himself against the corridor wall. With barely more than a minute left on the warp device, he thinks all he has to do now is stay hidden and leave. The guards crash into the golems at the lab door, and Seo Hyun slips through the chaos down the long corridor. Then his luck turns ugly when the workshop master's bodyguard comes straight at him from the opposite end of the narrow hall. Seo Hyun immediately realizes she can sense his concealment at close range, and there is no way to open enough distance inside this corridor. With the narrow hall trapping him and guards fighting behind him at the dead end, Seo Hyun makes a desperate choice to jump over the bodyguard and pray she misses it. He releases time, sprints forward, and vaults high enough to nearly scrape the ceiling as he jumps over the bodyguard. For one instant it looks like he made it, until Sixth Sense screams and he sees a blue sword aura already flying at his midair body. Still suspended in the air, Seo Hyun uses teleportation at the last possible moment, and the giant slash tears through the corridor where he should have been. His concealment is broken now, so Seo Hyun freezes time again and stacks every spell he can into one cramped corridor ambush. The volley explodes all at once and blasts the bodyguard into the air, exactly where Seo Hyun wants her. He fires a full 729 times destruction ray at her in midair, convinced even a monster like this should die to it. But the bodyguard twists on empty air with airwalk and barely avoids the beam, landing alive with one arm severed instead of dead. Seo Hyun is stunned that she reacted fast enough to dodge an instant beam, and the bodyguard's wound stops bleeding almost immediately. He throws up skin hardening and a scorching zone, then turns and runs, hoping she might finally give up and head for Iska instead. Instead she tears straight through the flames inside a strange barrier, and keeps chasing him with inhuman speed. Seo Hyun buys a little room with an ice dagger's frost, and then uses leap to clear the long staircase toward the ground floor door. He crashes out onto the ground floor, rolls, and freezes when the bodyguard is somehow already in front of him with another killing slash. With about 30 seconds left, and no teleportation or summon available, Seo Hyun realizes he somehow has to survive this monster at close range. Then Seo Hyun remembers the 500 shop points he still has and gambles on buying force field to stall her over and over if needed. The instant time resumes, Seo Hyun's force field flashes into place, and the charging bodyguard slams into it. That tiny delay is enough to give Seo Hyun hope, and he bolts away while firing back to open the distance he needs for concealment. He smashes out through a corridor window to the outside, but the bodyguard follows almost immediately, and cuts through another force field with sword aura. Seo Hyun keeps stalling her and flashes with force field, but she refuses to let him open enough room to disappear. As soon as Flame Strike comes off cooldown, he scatters blasts everywhere and sprints for the outer cliff of the floating workshop. With only seconds left, Seo Hyun leaps off the cliff, steps on a force field in midair, and throws himself even farther out. A huge sword aura chases him into open sky, but teleportation comes back just in time and Seo Hyun flickers out of its path. Concealment comes back up during the fall, and Seo Hyun thinks he has finally won by simply dropping until the warp triggers. Then Seo Hyun looks up and sees the one-armed bodyguard at the cliff edge stabbing so fast that sword auras start raining down like gunfire. Seo Hyun freezes time again and sees that one of the blind falling slashes is on a direct collision course with him. Unable to dodge the falling slash cleanly, Seo Hyun decides to give up an arm and trust rapid regeneration to grow it back later. Time resumes, the sword aura shears off Seo Hyun's left arm, and the pain is brutal but still not enough to break him. Clenching through the agony, he immediately triggers rapid regeneration while staring at the warp device's final second. Right as the timer runs out, warp space snatches Seo Hyun out of the fall and drops him onto the ground below the workshop. On the ground, Seo Hyun watches his severed left arm rapidly regrow and confirms rapid regeneration can restore a lost limb. A distant roar shakes the air, and Seo Hyun turns to see the floating workshop erupting in a massive explosion on the horizon. The system confirms the Nightmare 4F hidden clear, absorbs the floor's power, and starts raising Seo Hyun's level before moving him to the reward room. In the reward room, Seo Hyun is surprised to find an epic-grade purple skill stone among the hidden route rewards. The item reward turns out to be exactly what he suspected, a premium warp device far better than the temporary one he just used. As he reads the description, Seo Hyun learns the premium warp device runs on willpower, can move by saved point or direction over absurd distances, but still needs 10 minutes to activate. He feeds a little willpower into it, sees the charge jump to 100, and realizes the device could carry him thousands of kilometers. A save point prompt pops up when he activates it, confirming it can mark one location like a checkpoint for later travel. Seo Hyun decides the premium warp device is amazing for long travel, just not something he can rely on in the middle of a fight. Next he checks the epic skill and finds a name he immediately recognizes, Subspace. After taking the skill, Seo Hyun confirms Subspace is the inventory magic he hoped for, able to store objects, but not living beings or spirits. Seo Hyun tests Subspace by storing a bladeless ice dagger, and then pulling it right back out into his hand. After more testing, he figures out each store and retrieval needs its own cast, multiple objects can go in together, and spirit-linked items like Dial's bracelet and Ply's necklace stay out. It is not flashy, but Seo Hyun is satisfied to finally get a real inventory skill and starts packing most of his gear into it. Before leaving, Seo Hyun checks his updated status and sees the hidden route pushed him to floor 5 at level 60. Once he exits, Seo Hyun immediately turns to the next job and prepares to post the full 4F strategy as Person 123. After the clear, the communication channel buzzes over two things at once: the coming subtowers and when Person 123's 4F post will finally drop. The mood is tense but hopeful, because a nightmare clear just bought everyone another year, and now the whole world wants to know how 4F was even survivable. Then Person 123 posts the guide, laying out the 18 golem stages, the point shop, and the boss that can only be beaten reliably by drawing the ability nullification part. He also reveals the ugly fallback he used himself: if the gacha fails, trigger grand incineration and somehow survive longer than the boss. The channel explodes with disbelief as climbers realize 4F was a brutal mix of long attrition, stacked gimmicks, and pure luck at the end. At a US Climbing Bureau training facility, Taylor reads the post after practice and feels the gap between herself and Person 123 hit harder than ever. Max joins her, and the two quickly agree the real key to 4F will be point management under impossible pressure. As Taylor reads deeper, what rattles her most is the boss gacha, because failure there would come down to bad luck instead of skill. She imagines the despair of burning through all your points, missing the crucial pull, and being handed only hopeless leftovers in the final stage. Even with all her training, Taylor admits she does not think she could have stayed calm there, let alone bet her life on being incinerated beside the boss. That thought snaps her growing doubts in half, because someone is still climbing alone at the front and saving humanity, while everyone else hesitates behind him. She decides Person 123 shares his strategies to entrust the rear to others in case he falls, and that means she has no right to stop climbing over questions of meaning or usefulness. Taylor takes a deep breath and tells Max to draft a 4F strategy immediately, and he nods at the sudden fire back in her eyes. Far away in downtown Chongqing, the ground suddenly starts rumbling and terrified pedestrians realize the street is splitting open beneath them. As buildings collapse and the earth tears wider, a massive black tower rises straight out of the city, announcing the arrival of a new subtower. After posting his floor 4 info, Seo Hyun spends the next week buried in questions as climbers from Korea and other countries keep asking how to squeeze the most out of that brutal shop system. He puts off entering floor 5 because the real worry is the coming subtower, and as the countdown drops under 6 minutes he waits at his desk feeling genuinely afraid of what the tower will do next. The moment the timer hits 0, system messages slam into view and lay out the nightmare rule: the subtower has 10 floors, nobody can leave once they enter, and failing to clear it will permanently kill everyone within 100 kilometers. Seo Hyun finishes reading, exhales hard, and can only stare at the message in disgust because the tower has just turned the dungeon into a mass hostage threat. The first subtower erupts in Chongqing, and the giant black tower hits so violently that an earthquake follows and the city falls straight into chaos. As people grasp what erosion means, the world panics online and on the news because this is not just one city at risk but an enormous death zone that could become permanent dead land. China stalls with bland evacuation advice while roads lock up, nearby cities fall inside the danger radius, and desperate civilians pour out however they can. Then on the second day, a clear message appears and shocks everyone because someone has already finished the entire first subtower. The clearer turns out to be Wang Kai, China's top hard climber, and the highest level climber in the world, which instantly explains how the impossible happened so fast. Another message follows the clear and flips the mood again. Instead of erosion, the land around the tower turns into a mana vein loaded with magic stones. When reports confirm that stones from every grade, even supreme, are surfacing around Chongqing, the sub-tower suddenly looks less like pure disaster and more like a national jackpot if you can survive it. But China shares nothing about how the tower was cleared, and as the countdown to the next sub-tower approaches, the rest of the world grows angrier at that silence. The second sub-tower appears in downtown Ulaanbaatar, and Mongolia immediately turns to China for help because nobody else knows what kind of 10-floor run they are dealing with. China answers with a price, not goodwill, and the crisis turns into ugly negotiations while the clock keeps running on Mongolia's capital. Hearing that Wang Kai cleared the first tower so quickly, Xiao Haiyan finally relaxes a little and decides the sub-tower difficulty is probably not beyond him. When Mongolia's situation keeps getting worse and China still withholds information, Xiao Haiyan decides he will go clear the second sub-tower himself. He reasons it out bluntly. Wang Kai is level 60 just like him, and if a same-level climber cleared it, his own time-stop advantage should make this run even safer. The real obstacle is not the tower but getting to Mongolia, because entry only works from inside the 100-kilometer zone and flights are shut down. Then he remembers his hidden reward and pulls out the premium warp device, realizing the one item he already owns can bypass the whole ban. He quickly solves the first two concerns, deciding he can correct any warp error with GPS and hide the actual jump under concealment. The last problem is brutal. A 2,000-kilometer jump needs about 200,000 willpower, so Xiao Haiyan resigns himself to an absurd grind just to charge the item. Even so, he refuses to let Ulaanbaatar become a dead zone over something he can still do, and he starts charging the warp device immediately with repeated self-time stop and recovery loops. The grind wears him down so badly that when he steps out for water, his mother immediately asks why he looks exhausted. Xiao Haiyan brushes it off, goes back to his room, and pushes through the remaining hours until the warp device is finally charged enough for the trip. Before leaving, he quietly writes a will anyway, because confidence is one thing and dying in a tower is still real. He tells his family only that he is meeting a friend and might be home late, hiding the scale of what he is about to do. He buys a high-end GPS, learns the basics, then rents a cheap motel room and saves it as the warp device's return point so he has somewhere safe to come back to. Facing northwest toward Ulaanbaatar, Xiao Haiyan activates the warp device, waits out the 10-minute charge, and cloaks himself in concealment just before the jump. The warp lands him in open steppe east of Ulaanbaatar, and one GPS check tells him he missed the target zone by more than he wanted. He does not panic, just stops time, recharges the device, and warps west again until the entry message finally appears. The moment he enters the second sub-tower, Xiao Haiyan pauses time on instinct and surveys a dim chamber where loose weapons litter the floor and a lone goblin stands ahead. He half suspects a trap, but once time resumes the goblin just charges like a normal trash mob, and one light bullet blows its head apart for an immediate clear. That easy first floor makes him realize he has been overthinking this whole tower out of old nightmare habits. The second floor confirms the pattern when an orc replaces the goblin, and Xiao Haiyan blasts it down just as casually. On the third floor, a spear-wielding lizard man goes down the same way, and the tower keeps feeling less like a gimmick maze and more like a straight monster ladder. The fourth floor sends a werewolf lunging at him, and Xiao Haiyan simply caves its head in with one punch the instant it closes distance. The fifth floor upgrades to a minotaur, but even a former nightmare boss-tier monster only gets its head shattered and body launched into the wall. By then he starts estimating the final boss's level and keeps climbing, confident this tower's scaling is still inside his range. The sixth floor finally forces a skill change when a troll survives a headshot by regenerating, so Xiao Haiyan burns it to ash with flame strike before the healing can matter. The seventh floor swaps the single duel for a huge swarm of red-eyed bats, and Scorching Zone erases them so fast that Xiao Haiyan actually enjoys the spectacle. The eighth floor changes the terrain instead, flooding the chamber chest high and sending a grotesque human-faced serpent swimming toward him under the water. When the serpent starts charging an attack, Xiao Haiyan cuts it off first with instant cast flame strike and blows it apart before it can fire. The ninth floor is the first real speed check, dropping Xiao Haiyan in the middle of three pale black-robed casters who begin channeling together. His split flame strike kills one but bounces off barriers around the other two, telling him these enemies can actually force a response. Xiao Haiyan gives them no second chance, vaporizing one with Destruction Ray and unleashing every instant cast he has on the other while summoning Ply to break through. Ply crashes through the last barrier and tears the remaining caster apart, clearing the floor and leaving only the final boss ahead. Before the 10th floor, Xiao Haiyan calmly refills willpower and waits out his cooldowns, treating the final fight with proper respect even after such an easy climb. The final floor reveals a black knight in pitch-black armor, and Xiao Haiyan instantly senses that this one is not absurdly broken like the Hidden Route monster but still strong enough to matter. Flame Strike opens the fight, but the black knight dodges every fireball and rushes him with enough speed to prove this boss is on a different tier. Ply intercepts the charge and trades blows evenly with the knight for a moment, confirming Xiao Haiyan's read that the boss is roughly in the mid-50s range. When the Black Knight finally drives its sword into Ply's neck, Seo Hyun takes that opening at once and smashes the boss flying with a surprise punch. He ends the whole tower right there by firing a fully charged destruction ray into the airborne knight and erasing it without a trace. With the 10th floor clear, Seo Hyun almost laughs at how simple the run was compared to Nightmare because this tower was just a fair fight from start to finish. Then the reward messages hit, and Seo Hyun learns he was the first clearer and has actually gained ownership of the second sub-tower. The next line explains what ownership means. The person who clears a sub-tower can switch its mana vein on or off, so China had even more leverage than it admitted. That revelation hardens his resolve, and Seo Hyun decides he will clear every other sub-tower himself instead of leaving countries at the mercy of people like Wang Kai and China. Back in Mongolia, Prime Minister Orjil sits through China's so-called final terms as the ambassador coldly demands mines, infrastructure rights, mana vein shares, and even political concessions in exchange for help. Orjil openly calls the terms absurd, but the ambassador just sneers that Mongolia has no choice because time is running out and only China's climber can save Ulaanbaatar. Orjil knows the blackmail is real, so he swallows his anger and starts to ask for one more day before giving his answer. Before he can finish, Orjil's secretary rushes in with an urgent whisper, and the Prime Minister's stunned reaction says the situation has changed in one instant. An aide on the Chinese side rushes in a heartbeat later with the same news, and now both leaders are left staring at each other in disbelief. When it finally sinks in that the second sub-tower has already been cleared, Orjil bursts out laughing in relief while the ambassador can only sit there looking like everything just rotted in his hands. After China cleared the first sub-tower and tried to squeeze Mongolia over the second one, the communication channel turned into a non-stop international brawl. Most people condemned China for withholding information, while others argued Wang Kai had earned the right to keep it, and Mongolia should just accept reality. As the arguing spiraled, anxious users started wondering whether Person 123 would step in, while Mongolian users openly begged for help. With no answer from Person 123, everyone could only wait and watch the countdown while Mongolia faced the crisis alone. Then the whole mood snapped in an instant when a system message announced that Mongolia's sub-tower had already been cleared. Neither Mongolia nor China knew who had done it, so people quickly landed on the obvious answer and started chanting Person 123's name. While the world praised the unseen savior, China got laughed at for trying to profit from a tower and walking away empty-handed. In his luxury mansion, Wang Kai exploded and smashed his whiskey glass across the marble floor. Li Wei quietly challenged him, and Wang Kai snapped that Person 123 was only level 40 and should never have been able to clear that tower. Furious at being shown up, Wang Kai ordered China to be ready to rush him to the next sub-tower the moment it appeared. Li Wei swallowed his anger and went along with it, because China knew it had to win the next ownership rights before Person 123 did. Wang Kai spent the next 5 days stewing over Person 123 and waiting for another chance to beat him to a tower. When the third sub-tower appeared in Japan, Wang Kai thought luck had finally swung back to his side. Backed by party power, he bypassed normal travel hassles and rushed onto the fastest flight to Sendai. But the moment he settled into his first-class seat, a system message announced that Japan's tower had already been cleared too. The speed was so absurd that even Wang Kai could only stare and wonder if Person 123 had been in Japan from the start. Japan itself barely had time to react before the third sub-tower was cleared in under half an hour and the world erupted all over again. Because the clear was so fast, people stopped treating it as a random miracle and started acting like Person 123 being Japanese was basically confirmed. Japanese users especially lost their minds, proudly claiming that the hidden hero saving humanity had been one of theirs all along. While the world argued over his nationality, Seo Hyun privately stared at the news and thought the run of Northeast Asian towers was getting ridiculous. He immediately calculated the trip, realized Japan was still barely within reach of his charged warp device, and decided to go. After finishing the charge, Seo Hyun used the warp device and jumped straight to Japan. He tore through the early floors as easily as before, because the tower's basic difficulty still hadn't really surpassed him. From floor 5 onward the enemies changed shape, but only in flavor, not an actual threat. On the 10th floor, the boss turned out to be a Dracula that could dissolve into blood and rebuild itself after normal attacks. That trick stopped mattering the moment Seo Hyun fired Destruction Ray and erased the boss cleanly. With that, he quietly claimed ownership of the third sub-tower too. The real pain came after the clear, when he had to hide in an unfamiliar Japanese forest and painfully recharge the warp device to get home. When Seo Hyun finally got home, he stopped at the TV in disbelief as a news report seriously floated the idea that Person 123 was Japanese. His younger sister excitedly repeated the rumor, and Seo Hyun just gave an awkward answer while realizing he had made the misunderstanding way too easy. He checked the communication channel, saw the chaos for himself, and shut it right back off because he was too tired to care. Since the next sub-tower would expose the truth anyway, Seo Hyun decided to let the world enjoy its wrong guess for now. But while Seo Hyun rested, Wang Kai's frustration curdled into obsession because Person 123 had now stolen 2 sub-towers from him. It was never patriotism driving him anyway. Wang Kai simply could not stand having something he wanted taken from him. He even snapped at the idea of using a fighter jet, furious that normal limits still existed when he wanted to move first. A week later, the fourth subtower appeared in Brazil, and Wang Kai felt sure this time person 123 would finally be too far away. He boarded another flight believing the Brazilian tower was already his. Then the exact same humiliation hit him again when the system announced Brazil had already been cleared before his flight had even really begun. Meanwhile, Seo Hyun made things even clearer by posting information threads for the second and third subtowers under the name person 123. He had not planned to share that information at first, but after realizing cleared subtowers could be re-entered, he decided other climbers might need it. When the fourth subtower appeared in Rio, Seo Hyun checked the distance and nearly went numb at how ridiculous the trip would be. Brazil was so far that even with a week of partial charging, he still faced more than 50 days worth of willpower buildup and needed 2 separate warps. For a moment he seriously considered giving up and letting China have Brazil, because the time cost was just that insane. But once he remembered China was probably racing for the same ownership rights, Seo Hyun forced himself to commit and endure the warp route anyway. He spent the brutal charging stretch in mind-numbing isolation until the warp device was finally full enough to launch him across the world. At last he warped into Brazil and cleared the fourth subtower just as effortlessly as the last one. The fourth tower's 10th floor boss was a fire-breathing wyvern, but Seo Hyun dodged with teleportation and finished it with destruction ray before it could matter. After claiming ownership of the fourth subtower, Seo Hyun laughed a little crazily because now he had to survive another 50-day charge just to get home. The world saw Brazil fall in the same 20-minute window and instantly realized the Japanese nationality theory had just collapsed. When person 123 posted the fourth tower info thread too, nobody could deny it was him, and the mystery only got stranger. Japanese bragging vanished overnight, replaced by wild guesses that person 123 might have some absurd movement skill instead. At the Japanese Prime Minister's residence, the rumor about person 123 barely mattered anymore because the Sendai mana vein looked like a fortune too big to ignore. The man leading the cabinet could barely hide his delight that what looked like a disaster had turned into a huge economic jackpot for Japan. Then the ministers pointed out that Japan's old magic stone accord had become a burden now that the country had its own mana vein. Once that idea came up, the meeting turned openly opportunistic as they discussed quitting the accord before Korea and Southeast Asia could react. The meeting leader approved it, fully willing to let other countries take the hit as long as Japan locked in the mana vein first.